Nymaera's with me, as will be the case for, well, we'll just wait and see.
Oh yeah, as long as I survive, yeah.
And also, who knows, maybe fucking Los Ratones wins first stand, Yamato Cannon signs a 5-year contract, he's just there for life, in which case, who knows what happens at that point in time. In that case, the negotiation with Nymaera gets awkward. So, I don't know, personally, for only
that time that's happened, Duncan.
Luckily, for only that reason, I'm sort of praying on Los Ratones' downfall. Whatever, it is what it is, isn't it, boys? So anyway, we're back now. Bizarrely, unlike last week, even though not a single solitary fucking match in any major region has been played beyond that weird all-roll exhibition thing in LCK, which I still don't even understand who would A, thought that was a good idea, or B, wanted to watch that, but whatever.
They've done it for like a couple of years too.
It's such a weird idea though.
The first time they did it, I thought, okay, this is pretty fun. And then as it's gone on, it's just felt like, much like All-Star, the novelty wore off, and then you're just left with players somewhat not wanting to be there. And like,
also, here's my problem. I'll tell you what my biggest problem is, Nymaera. It's this. You've just played into all the worst stereotypes of all the fucking roles league because one, yes, what do you know, the mid laners secretly were the best all along and they understood the game. And also you've made all those ADC players look like dickheads because we don't know macro out of the jungle. Why have you done that to us? Why have you made us all
I did find
it does make sense in one part way. It makes sense.
I found it so funny that owner afterwards was like, yeah, but if it was a track and field event, that would have been great. That was actually my favorite thing to come out of it. It's like, let's just do some track and field. I'm like, mate, not everyone's got like the gym routine that you do. I would find it quite funny, again, for one time, then the novelty wears off.
Yeah. No, the joke is we even did something back in the day, like almost 10 years ago now. They once had a match where like two top Counter-Strike teams played each other in football and people were like super hyped. And then when I watched it, I was like, it's just a bad five-a-side game, mate. What are we watching? Like, none of these players are football players. Like, it's just stupid, but whatever. It is what it is. Anyway, the point is, despite there hasn't been any tournaments yet, actually a surprising amount of things have happened, though. There's actually a lot of stuff we can discuss here. By the way, since we're normally rude and we just go straight to the Asian elitism, and then at the end, I'm sort of like, right, maybe we'll talk about LCS for 5 minutes. Let's just start with LCS first, because technically it is the return of LCS. We're supposed to celebrate it. And in doing so, Mark Z's back. I call him Mark Z, even though technically I should honour his name or what he wants to be chosen. It's just it is the English language. I've always said this. I've always made what I think is a very magnanimous, fair offer to Americans. Rename your language, call it American, and then I can't say shit to you. But as long as you're calling that language English, then you know what, homie? It runs from A to Z. And if you don't do that, that's just the way it goes.
Or like, at least, like, change the flag at least. So it's here, like the English for the American flag next to it. That's a little bit of a brain weird thing for me. But yeah, I mean, dialects exist. People have spoken different variations of things. Just, like everything else, you can claim it if you would like. You just, go ahead and pull the trigger.
So anyway, Mark Z is back to be the commissioner and all that jazz and be the face of the league and announce all the stuff. And if people didn't see, they did a short video. It's only about like 4 minutes long or something, it's exactly 4 minutes, where they announced all the upcoming details of LCS for this year. Like, for example, they have an America's Cup, they have the road shows, because they're counting the lock-in now as a split. They have 3 splits. We had the lock-in years and years ago, and they said it was almost more like a Kesper Cup where it didn't count or something. But whatever, we do. All the regions are doing this now, where the first thing's a cup and is a bizarre thing, a bit like LEC versus. And crucially, actually, I'll tell you the first place I want to start, which is a format note, which is this, Nymaera. So, depending on who you are, either commiserations or celebrations, because LCS is all BO3 now. What do you think of this?
It's fearless, so having best of one and fearless feels a bit detrimental. However, as is always the case with regions like LEC and LCS, you can talk about there being better quality of series and gameplay with best of 3, but it does mean you have to watch more games of the teams which are struggling. That was always the issue when best of 3 started coming through into these regions. We did away with best of 3s in LEC not too long ago, and then basically a lot of the teams were using the best of 3s from people like, well, I'm not watching this. And then if the broadcast schedule is you have 2 best of 3s a day, and you just so happen to low roll and have just 2 shit series, basically, then you've got 0 viewership. The thing about best of ones is that it does mean that your best teams are pretty much playing every day. And when you have quite a lagging bottom end towards leagues, that can be an issue. However, if you're using Fearless, it's meant to make really the bottom tier of league more entertaining because you do away with, shit teams just trading picks for forever. And it does do away, particularly when you're doing, well, they've done this Swiss stage as well, right? Best of one Swiss stage is so much variance. There's so much random.
Yes.
Yeah, there's so much ability to just
Yes.
by the way, just on Swiss stage in general, like I know that people got hyped over Swiss stage for Worlds because it was better than the group system because it means you had no meaningless games. Swiss stage works better the more teams that you have. Now, if you're dealing with like 100-player events, if you're dealing with national-wide, university, collegiate, whatever it is, like these kind of like multi-round formats where you have literally hundreds going to thousands of people. So this is a great way to sort things because you're never going to be able to get everyone to play each other anyway. But once you get down below like 30, once you start getting to like 20 and then lower again to 16, and then in this case we've only got 8 teams. 3-round Swiss with 8 teams. Holy shit, there's going to be variance in there. And much like Worlds, the best of threes will help with the variance, but you're going to get some weird slip-ups where probably teams are not going to finish really where they deserve.
Yes. No, I agree. I'll start in reverse. It's why actually, because we've had it in Counter-Strike for many years. I think Swiss was introduced in Counter-Strike in like 2016 or something, bro. And we've had it it's also in our majors. So I can tell you, I am painfully aware of all the flaws of Swiss, which is, as you say, it wasn't actually designed for this sort of a tournament field. By the way, if you want a really bonkers one, there have been people, even up until the last few years, in smaller tournaments that ran 8-team Swiss tournaments and insane shit like that, where it just made it scuffed as fuck. So, because if people don't know, as far as I know, Swiss is supposed to be for things like giant chess tournaments, etc. It's why there's even a thing that we do in Counter-Strike, which also doesn't work because there's too few teams, to make it so it's not just purely random of every team that's 3-2 and every team that's 3-0 just randomized gets drawn. To make it fairer in the Counter-Strike majors, they have something called the Buchholz score, which essentially looks at who you played and who they beat. Well, again, that doesn't really work, Nymaera, when you've only played 3 or 5 rounds. Yeah, that's supposed to be for when there's a giant field. And then the idea then becomes, think how this would help. If me and you both finished in, like, say, the top 8, but I played 5 opponents that were bangers, then I deserve to get the higher seeding. That one works because of the sample, as you say. The problem with the current system that we're doing here, especially in a small league, not even world-size one, you're just going to get a lot more like crazy outliers as a result. And as you point out, basically, realistically, even though it's BO3, there's going to be one BO3 that someone loses 2-1 instead of winning 2-1. It will make them be, instead of being second, they'll be like barely make it in the playoffs or something crazy like that.
So, funnily enough, the current Fnatic team manager, Anissa, was someone who used to run the UK university esports scene, and she introduced Swiss and the opponent win percentage into UK university scene. And I played in that back when I was in uni, so that was my experience of it. So, small world again, actually, people making their way through it. But yeah, particularly when it comes to 8-team Swiss stage, I'm not a fan. I get that it does away with one of the worst things you can have in broadcast and in tournaments in general, where you have meaningless games. If you go towards the end of a split and there's just like a game which doesn't matter, you get some really weird shit. And while that's okay for 1 or 2 games, maybe a year across the world, you really don't want that. You want everything to matter. So that was my initial takeaway seeing this. It does compact the schedule, I suppose. Like how I mean, it's basically 3 weeks of Swiss. Sure, it's basically done in 3 weekends, and then you go into your playoffs bracket beyond that point. So it does make it fairly truncated and makes it a pretty quick affair as opposed to every other region. Well, I suppose LEC has gone back to best of one, but they have more teams involved, and it is an 8-team league, so that it was always going to be a bit more condensed. But yeah, I mean, besides that point, I mean, it's double elimination playoff bracket, easy as you like. I'm just worried about the seeding for it, particularly because, well, I suppose the seeding matters less in this one because it's only one team going through to the event. If it was like you have like 2 or 3 teams, and actually at that point, the way that you seed can actually just completely screw out a team from going to an international event. At least it's a 1-team event, so it kind of spares your blushes of, if the best team is going to go through the bracket anyway, seeding won't matter as much to them. But I think that's pretty flimsy. The format should speak for itself.
Also, I'll just throw this out there as well. The other reason why it's significant to me that they don't have BO1s is remember, guys, there is no such thing as Fearless in BO1. You haven't got any fucking bans. It's just a normal match.
Yeah.
So the reason why it's also significant, if you're going to say Fearless is important, that you don't have a whole group stage not essentially include Fearless, is you will end up with teams in the playoffs who aren't that good in an actual Fearless draft of a best of 3 or best of 5, but they just won the original game. Essentially, that would be like having the group stage in 2 years ago's League of Legends format, but then the playoffs in Fearless, which is last year's format. So I agree that wouldn't make any sense. I will say, because it is my way and it is fucking summoning insight, so why break the habit of a lifetime? Oh, it's fucking rich that people supporting the Americas region don't want BO1s. Because I was told for the last 8 years on Reddit that when it was tried in the LEC and LCS, the numbers went down, so it would kill the viewership. Oh, what's that? You've already killed the viewership in your region, so you may as well try it anyway. Spoiler, it was always better. That whole argument never made sense to me, because what made it a bad faith argument, bro, was they acted like that was the only variable. It wasn't like how it was done. There's a million factors. Yeah.
They had 2 simultaneous streams. Was it 2016, 17, around that area? Yep. We had best of 2s in Europe, and then best of 3s for NA. Like, that was when we kind of hit that low point in LoL Esports, because the game was just quite boring. It was after kind of like the heyday of the early days of League, and then you had some other games starting to come up. Like obviously Overwatch started to pop off in that year, and then CS was still going strong. But then you had just 2 simultaneous streams running, and basically the regions found out the hard way that they didn't have the bulk to go through 2 streams at once. Most esports will never reach that point either. So yeah, it's completely just not an isolated variable at all.
Oh no. And then also, to me, I'll just throw this out there. Even though I totally agree, it's the most obvious reason why a BL3 system is bad. You get more of the bad games. At the same time, though, there's an obvious... Surely it screams out to you guys without me even saying it. You get more of the good games too! Like, I always say this. One of the weirdest things about esports to me is everyone in esports, no matter whether they tell you they don't, does take sports as the analog that they at least compare or contrast esports with to see where we're at and how we're going to broadcast it, how we're going to publish this, etc. So one of the weirdest things to me is this. Bro, I'm not aware of a single sport, with the exception of MMA, like the UFC, where there's a concept where you sit down at the beginning of the day of a broadcast and you watch all the matches. Like, I don't know any team sport. Like, I watch like NBA, NHL, NFL, fucking English Premier League. You pick the best games to watch here. Like, spoiler, there are matches in the EPL I will never watch. When Bournemouth plays Wolves, I ain't watching, mate. Like, even if I had money on that, I'd just check the final result. Like, I don't give a fuck. Whereas, obviously, I do want to see the better teams play. So to me, I get that argument, but I also think it's actually, again, if we're going to acknowledge, which we surely have to at this point, that the old system of LCS and LEC are a broadcast that is a bunch of BO1s, and as you say, every team plays every day, and you sit there at whatever, 5 p.m, and you stop at 9 p.m, that doesn't exist anymore, and spoiler, it wasn't working anymore anyway, so we don't need it anymore. Like, as someone who followed the LCK and LPL, welcome, if you didn't watch Asian League of Legends, welcome to your real life of watching League of Legends now, where yes, you won't bother watching the 2 worst teams in LCS play to BO3 in week 3. What you will do is you will just love watching the number 1 and number 2 teams play what in sports would be called the nationalized televised game. The El Clasicos, essentially, you get more of the good games. So it's true. I don't think many people will watch every game. Most people will prioritize, but I actually think that will also end up being a positive. Also, I'll just throw this out there. I actually like, even though it's negative for the league, since the league is an overall product where everyone has to work together, I actually also like that does punish shit teams, by the way. If you're a shit team who's phoning in lineups and not spending any money, then you won't get very much viewership, mate. And by the way, that also eventually, if you know how the things tend to work in partner systems, one day there'll be a negotiation where that will mean you get less of the revenue, which I think is a good thing. I think teams that do put out excellent product, excellent teams, bring in top players and put a great squad in this rift do deserve more, as it were, and will gain more of the resources. It's not a flat thing where G2 can be the best team ever from Europe, but they can still only get one match on that one day, and SK Gaming, with whatever lineup they had that year, also gets one match that year. I am something of an elitist in that sense. I like meritocracy to some degree.
So one of the other things you mentioned, and this is kind of about rewarding the teams which actually do a bit better, the boot camps around America's Cup and then the international events are really interesting too. That was something that really stood out to me, which is effectively, so we've got the America's Cup, which is effectively the teams which miss out on first stand. They're going to fly down to Brazil anyway, and it's going to be a week before first stand. They'll basically have a mini tournament between the best of the rest from, CBLOL and LCS, the old, because they're basically trying to keep that America's play of that the LTA set out to do without it really being part of the core system. And personally, I think that's a really good way to deal with it, because you're not fucking over CBLOL at that point, or you're screwing around with international seeds. It's just international competition for teams which wouldn't have had it anyway. And myself, coming from a minor region background with stuff like the LJL, one of the biggest problems with regions trying to level up to a point where they can compete internationally is that level of international practice where you're not just locked into your region, which is below the levels of your LCK, your LPL, or what have you. And one team in the past would go to an international event like, your Detonation Focus Music, Garmi Esports, or Pain Gaming, or whatever. They go off to an international event, they get blasted, they come back, and then you'd still only have one team with international experience in your entire region, which was really detrimental. It meant that your entire region would never skill up. So the America's Cup kind of being this extra semi-international competition. And the other thing which I found very interesting, which is throughout the year, the teams which don't quite make it, they will be paid for to go to a boot camp around the international event. So boot camp around First Stand, boot camp in Korea for MSI. That is really, really insane. I'm surprised that they're paying for it, because I didn't think they'd be throwing cash around like that. And if so, where's that cash been thrown around before for teams like that? I think it's a great initiative. I'm a big fan of it. I don't know how long it will take for that to really give fruition, because yes, boot camps are nice in the short term, but really you're hoping to build up international experience over time. But that honestly might be the thing which stood out to me the most from this set of announcements, which is the teams which don't go international still get something, which otherwise you had to do it out of your own pocket before to do that.
No, by the way, two things about that. One thing I actually like about that is the idea, like, even if you're not in the tournament, you get a chance to get proper practice. But also, it's actually a gift to CBLOL, if anything, bro. They get to actually play against relatively good squads from LCS. Yeah, they get people outside of their region get injected in. They get to practice against them. So, if anything, I think that's almost like a fair sort of give back for the fact you did essentially cripple their league last year just to try and prop up LCS, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid the other minor regions had that shot at some point in the past. That's something which really does kind of like annoy me, is that, yes, this is great treatment. Would have really liked to see that, say,
yes,
Vietnam, LMS.
The joke is back in the day, Nymaera, they should have had both. It should have been, you had the LMS and the LGL, but also like an LCP type thing as well. You should have had like both. It should have been like a regional tournament and the regional leagues that would have helped everyone, as you've seen, because I do think if you have a look, the number one people who've gained the most from having the LCP or whatever is the Vietnam teams, bro. They were the ones that were stuck in their little region with nothing to do, and getting to play against the best Taiwanese clearly helps those squads, and they've had much better parity with the international teams as a result.
Especially with the move to the 5 major regions, where if you come from areas which just don't have established league scenes, really, not as much, or Vietnam, which has just been like burned down to the grassroots time and time again, yeah, that could actually genuinely be really huge. I'd like to see there be kind of an incentive for that worldwide, really. But I don't know how that plays into the global revenue fund. Obviously, some regions are going to make way more money than others. Obviously, the American VO market tends to have a lot more economic sway than other places in the world. But yeah, I'm glad that this is happening for LCS. The other part of me says, why the hell has this not happened for other regions which could have used it so effectively for so long?
There's also some other LCS-related news, which was there was a Reddit thread that said that this is the first time in the history of the LCS that there will be more Korean players than NA players. And in fact, the number is nuts, which is the number now is 43% of the league is Korean. And then it depends on what at the time Dignitas' roster hadn't been filled. So I'm not sure if this number's the same, but it was only 33% for NA. Now, the difference there is if you go back in past years, 2025 was 33% Korean, then 2024 was 31. If you go back to 2022, it's only 18% Korean. Because obviously, if you think about the restrictions back then, you used to only be able to have like the 2 imports plus grandfathered players, which is only a handful of Koreans. It was like the impacts of the world, etc., wasn't it? So what do you think? What is your initial thought on this? That essentially, like, I mean, the joke is this would have been a perfect Monty topic. Like LCS is just like Korean fucking B League now or something. Like, what do you think of this?
So I mean, the obvious thing is you stopped obligating teams to have development teams. They all dropped them. You don't have a pipeline anymore. And the crazy thing is, there still were talent there. There obviously were. There's players like Yukino who went over to LEC now he's on KC Blue, and there are a handful of other players too. The names don't actually spring to mind, but there's been like 4 or 5 talents where you think, okay, yeah, they actually could and should make it, or they were given one split and then not really held to after that point. And then you just have, more Korean players filling in the gaps because they have the infrastructure for it. And NA has always put in a lot of infrastructure for bringing over Korean players. Now, worth noting on those numbers, I'm not sure that is, I believe, like Korean national, not NA resident. So, for instance, I'm not sure if that counts. Actually, I think it does count who he is NA, but I'm not sure exactly what it comes to in terms of NA
I see,
residency.
and like Yawn or something like that, right? I see what you mean.
Yeah,
right.
so you've got a couple of players which obviously now like NA residency. Obviously, Core JJ is Korean national, NA resident now at this point. But yeah, there are more Korean players than any other nationality within LCS, which is just. It's a really sad state because LCS, it's obviously a historic league, but I think that the pipeline of NA, because, I know a bunch of people who've worked in Tier 2 NA. I mean, it just seems like it's getting stripped back time and time again. The obligations for people to try people out has gone down and down. I mean, 10 years ago or so, you had... I remember them actually doing a show match in the off-season, which is effectively, team... like Mountain, Infernal, Ocean, and Air or whatever, and having basically the best rookie players, like basically do almost like a draft, right? Where you had LCS coaches come in, teach a team of rookies, and then get them to show off on stage. And that's just, you don't see that same level of kind of care towards rookies there. And yeah, there are a couple of names.
Producer says that was the Proving Grounds, remember?
Proving Grounds, yes, that was it, Proving Grounds.
Where Blabber and people like that came from, a bunch of people, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just sad to see that, League is obviously not doing great in America in general right now, in North America in terms of the game, and I think it got really cut into by the likes of Valorant, and I'm not really sure. We had a lot of this talk about just the growth and the onboarding of League in general, but I think NA, which is a big problem for League, because obviously the company is based there, and the American buyer market is typically a very important one for the English-speaking market. I think that the Tier 2 pipeline just going down the drain in terms of investment and teams kind of buying into it is just a disaster for them, because you are going to get you are going to get some Korean players coming over which are actually very successful and they do whatever, but typically what happens is a player that can come over and then they'll just head back when they get a better offer back in NA, right? So that happened with Prince and Vikla, right? That happened with them, although they had brief moment of greatness and then fell off or whatever. But every time you bring in an import like that, particularly if they're Korean, realistically what they're doing is either hoping I go international or I go back into the LCK. Their goal is very rarely to stay in LCS and make it a better region. Like, it is a very rare kind of person to see Impact or Core JJ, which stay there for the majority of their careers, upskill the region and really add to it. Not everyone is going to be like for instance, someone like Zinni, the mid lane that's coming in for Shopify Rebellion. This guy is an absolute wonder kid. This guy is not going to stay in LCS for my money. This guy's not going to stay there. He's going to blast away a season. This guy's got highlight reels for days. He's like, I think he's multiple time MVP. Hamback as well, coming into Sentinels. Like, this guy.
Well, pretty sweet. In like 3 years, that guy will be like the non-shin mid laner or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And he'll be pushing for more than that. But like Zinni, I didn't get to catch as many games of his live, so I've kind of had to go and watch over some of the VODs. But if you put this guy into a situation where he can outduel or outplay you, this is the guy that's going to do it. And there are a couple of players which come over like that, which I'm surprised they got their hands on them in the first place, when LCS's spending power is a lot worse than it was before. I wonder if it's actually helped out by the fact that LPL is not as economically stable as it was before, although presumably they would have had a lot of money to throw at them too. But yeah, when it comes just to the overall health of the ecosystem and the talent pipeline, obviously it's not good if you're not able to bring up your own talent. You have to fill it in with stuff like this. On an economic status, on a branding status, it's much harder to brand foreign imports coming in to your local league, because you like to play on local storylines. I'm sure they'll be good for the short-term competitiveness of the league, but yeah, it just sucks for them as regional fans.
Also, here's one of the interesting areas, which is, this is why this whole topic, in my opinion, is defined by, do you care about what clearly was one of Riot's like original spiritual ideological components of League of Legends, which is the idea that the leagues will actually bring through talent that will be representative of those regions, and then they will all be international competition. And the idea is the international competition is where you'll be elitist and you'll see who's better. But aside from that, you actually do want it. Now, here's what's funny. this is one of those areas where people are complicated in life, because without going too deep, if you were to infer my politics, I do actually think ideas like countries having a long traditions and having a certain demographic makeup has value. I do think cultures having a certain through line is something that shouldn't just be eschewed for the sake of having everything all at once. But what's funny is I don't really care as much in games and esports like League of Legends. In esports and League of Legends, I'm the multiculturalist / the fucking globalist, I guess, because I don't really give a fuck. I'm an elitist. Like, I think if the Korean player's better than Parlofox, then Parlofox can get on his fucking bike and go play solo queue or be a streamer. Or, by the way, if you really care, mate, go to an ERL, because first of all, there will still be NA talents. They'll just go to ERLs. They'll just be in LFL or something, or LVP. And that even could work in the long run, as you've seen from people like, obviously, fucking Jojo. One day they can even be in LEC if they are indeed good enough. So it's not like there won't be any talent, but also NA squandered that many, many years ago, mate. So I don't blame the owners for being cynical like sports franchises and wanting to win now. It's why, as much as people have mocked like Dignitas the last few years, mate, I get why they'd get people like XU rather than some fucking out of NA solo queue who's a one trick. Like, what are we even discussing here? So, and also, the same orgs did cycle the Parlofoxes of the world 1 billion times over. They weren't trying to find the next guy who was going to be the hot shit. So they already didn't really live up to their side of the bargain. Then secondly, the other reason why I don't personally myself care as much as I would if you were asking what should the demographic makeup of America be, is because American fans have historically shown they don't give a fuck about what I just referenced there. They do. I've always said this. Even though people will tell you if you've got like Double Lift or Blabber or maybe like, I don't know, a Dardock, if you've got some really good NA player, yeah, that's an extra reason to be a fan if you're American. But I've always said, realistically, I think Bjergsen proved this. If you are just shit hot at the game and you win, they'll also be a giant fan of you as well, mate. Like, put it this way, who were people historically more a fan of, guys? Bjergsen or Paul Belter, right? Paul Belter is American. Like, he's American through and through. But the point is, you're a bigger fan of Bjergsen because he's better at the game. So I think historically, of all the regions, NA particularly has shown it gives the least of a fuck about this. I can tell you, for very political reasons, China and Korea do care about having really awesome play. Like, put it this way, if you ask Chinese fans, which of these teams would you like to have won Worlds, they'd say none of them. Could we have just had like that fucking BLG roster that was all Korean, all Chinese? Like, they wouldn't want Koreans carrying them to win Worlds, you know?
That's why RNG 2018 was such a big thing for them, right? Because
absolutely.
It was an all-Chinese roster winning. It was a source of national pride. And I mean, there is some power in kind of using that kind of tribalism to say, you know, like, how can you get people to support a team in a certain way because of a shared culture or whatever?
I mean, the obvious example is in Europe. This is why Europe is different from America, bro. It makes perfect sense why we have Carmine Corp and Koi, and they have these massive engaged national fan bases. Like, that's different from being some pan-European squad like G2.
Yeah. And it really depends what your club culture is like, right? And what your thing is like there. Because, you know, teams across Premier League and a bunch of other places, like the actual that side of it isn't as important in terms of, you know, like where you come from or whatever. It's actually just about, do you buy into the club club culture? And that is something which is a bit harder to do in League, because I don't think that League has ever really, because most of it's been, you know, based around LA or just in Berlin or whatever. You haven't had kind of like regional identities of teams like being like, well, you know, we're situated here. That's something which Overwatch League tried to do and say, you know, we're situated here. LPL actually does have home arenas for a couple of teams. I think that they should have realistically leaned into that a little more. And the most you see of that really is when you load into a game, there's a different skybox. And there's some cool stuff. The
problem is, as far as I know, though, like that plan was good, but they were slowly rolling it out. The problem is they perfectly hit the wrong like economic windows, and it basically it's been almost like ignored now. But eventually the plan was to sort of slowly franchise out the whole league, right? And everyone would have a home arena.
No. Basically, when you're playing in a single location with something which is mostly watched online, you as a viewer are not tied to a location or some kind of cultural thing like that. Like, for instance, you know, like when I was growing up, I watched tons of rugby in Cardiff because that's where my family was, and I watched a lot of Welsh rugby there. And I have that connection to Cardiff because of, you know, the Millennium Stadium and the cool matches which happen there. Other people have that for Twickenham, and you have an attachment to the stadium and the people which go to that stadium. But when you're viewing something primarily online, you're just watching it from your bedroom. That doesn't change anything for you, really. And at the end of the day, when I tune into League of Legends, my expectation isn't for any of those things. It's for, I want to see the best possible League of Legends. And that's why when in 2014, for those of you that were around for it, teams like LMQ were really exciting to me, because I was like, oh my God, I get to see something really different from the LCS in a kind of like a globalist way. And I really like to see people coming from those different walks of life and different play styles and showing off what they can do, because that is one of the powerful things about esports, where you can just come from any sort of background and strut your stuff in a way which is very different to a lot of traditional sports, where it is more about kind of like I suppose your local scene and how you're set up for that. So yeah, now we've gotten to this point now where LCS, despite the LCS, it's in a weird spot, right? Because there was a point a couple of years ago where there was a rumor that LCS wanted to become a global league, right? Because they've messed around with a couple of the residencies before, where OS became NA residents. Now they're in a weird spot because, of course, OS is now part of LCP. But so they were their own thing, then NA, then LCP, which has screwed over a bunch of players over time. And then, of course, they had like LTA North and South, which kind of changed their identity around as well. But yeah, I do seem to remember a couple of years ago, wasn't there that whisper that they were trying to make it basically like an open season league where there was no residency and anyone could come to play there? I seem to remember that flying around a couple of years ago.
So I do think around exactly the same time in European football, there was the whole super team rumour. There was rumours that this was considered as a thing to do, especially because at the time the idea even was you could combine LEC and LCS, couldn't you, and make it like a super Western league or some shit like that, assuming LPL, LCK didn't want to get in. The funny thing about this topic, by the way, is this is why actually you had to have restrictions on imports. Otherwise, I can tell you right now, naturally this would have happened more like 10 years ago, bro, 8 years ago, 7 years ago.
Well, StarCraft happened first, right?
Well, yeah, and this also literally was the case, I can tell you, in Overwatch. When the Overwatch League launched, there were no restrictions on who you could have. So what happened in Season 1 was some teams signed all Korean rosters, a couple of teams signed a couple of Koreans, and then everyone else did the thing where it's like, we're the French team from Paris or whatever. Well, we're the I think it was the one from Outlaws was like Texas or something. That was all London NA players or whatever. Yeah, well, that was an all Korean roster though. Yeah. But the point is, in general, it was stratified. But what people realised eventually was, if you don't have restrictions, I'm sorry, I know this is what Riot's ideological thing I said earlier essentially has to believe can't be true, but actually all regions aren't equal. They don't produce equally good amount of players, and the best players from the best regions are better than even the best from the weaker regions. So even though eventually, by the way, the joke is from Overwatch Season 1, I forget the numbers, but I did a video on this. I even predicted, well, since you've got no restrictions, get ready, there will be what I call Korean creep, which is every season you will get more Koreans and less NA and Western players, and eventually, if it goes long enough, it'll just be a Korean league with some non-Korean players, like the best Chinese guy and the best European guy and the best NA player, right? And basically, that is what ended up happening. And one of the reasons why is very obvious, which is, again, what I said earlier. The team owners aren't thinking like Riot, like I want all regions to be developed and I want talent from the street. They're just thinking, how do I win this split? How do I win this tournament? And also, by the way, how do I get as many eyeballs by winning and having top players that become popular so that I can activate all my sponsors? So unfortunately, it's inevitable. And in fact, here's a bit of info for you. The LMQ one, where that whole Chinese roster came, and if people forget this, they were in the regular season in first place, and they were something like one game from actually like winning the fucking They could have been in the final. They had a 5-gamer against I think it was against TSM actually. So they also could have won that split. That basically scared Riot. And here is some info that has never been revealed officially on this show, even though it's a shame Monty's not here because he could have corroborated it, right? What happened was, at the time, Monty's now wife, Lil Susie, was someone who in the Korean scene, because the joke is, she even says now that she has real children, she doesn't give a fuck about being an esports mom, but because back then she didn't have any kids, she did take that seriously. She was like the esports mom in the sense she didn't just help doing translation. She knew all these players and she would befriend the star players that went to the international events that she'd done interpretation for. And basically, around this time, so it would be going into like 2015, it was already where some of the original greats in Korea were not as good anymore. And they knew, like, I'm probably not going to win the LCK. By the way, I'm definitely not winning Worlds. So I can tell you, here's the banger. The rumor that she was trying to make this squad, they were going to make a challenger team that, by the way, this is some like the desk just rolls up and I don't have an electronic. They were going to make a squad where it would have been 5 Koreans, and I'm not talking about that one where Loco had like him and a bunch of people you never heard of. Their team would have been like Mad Life and Shy, etc. Like we're talking like stud Koreans. Because think about it, if you're those Koreans, Nymaera, if you're little Susie, the sales easy. You tell them, look, you're not going to win Worlds anymore. You're going to win your region. But look, these fucking like B-tier Chinese players almost won the league. Why don't you just come on to NA, which at the time, by the way, had way more more salary than LCK. That might blow people's mind. But if you played for a top org, which they could have easily gotten into, you get like 4 times the salary of even a top Korean org.
That's what caused the Korean Exodus, right? So many players went over there.
So what people don't realise is you would have had this giga stud roster, win the challenger spot and probably get promoted. It's why later people like Dandy and Mad Life did try, but separately in like, mixed rosters to go through challenge. So basically, Riot, that's one of the reasons why they made it where like they made the import rules way harsher and they basically made it so you couldn't do this because they were actually scared that in the long run, people cynically would just do this. You'd just take essentially like B-tier Korean and Chinese and just make rosters over, and then you'd never get this talent from any, was the logic.
Or like some of the rookies, which much like today, couldn't really quite make it onto the teams, and then they go elsewhere because there was like the rumored like Samsung Red team, right, which was meant to be like Huni debuting as a mid laner, and of course then he went on in 2015, which would have been the year which they would have tried to do this project. He then went to Fnatic as a top laner, but yeah, there were some whisperings around that time, and I think it only makes sense, right, because if you were Samsung and at that point, and this was before the sister teams and multi-org kind of thing was done away with in 2015, imagine if you could have had a team go to NA, win through there, and then go to Worlds, whilst also you did the same from Korea. You could actually have multiple teams making it to Worlds from different regions, giving you even more exposure, even more branding.
Yes.
And a ton of power there. So like from that example, I absolutely understand it from that. That's more about team ownership. But in terms of kind of like, effectively planting an entire team in another region, I understand the apprehension, but I do really understand the apprehension because it does make it hard to brand things in much in the ways that we've talked about before. But at the end of the day, a lot of people do want to see the best possible games. If you do swing it back, if you swing it back the other way and just say, well, actually, importing is really hard to do, and of course, it has become harder and harder over time. That the funny thing was basically, I can't remember if it's 2015 or 2016. Was that the year where someone pointed out, does this guy have a proper visa? And people were like,
yes.
And then everyone had to check, oh, bloody hell, we've been skimping on our visas and we're meant to be legit now.
By the way, that's also another Monty drama because what happened was TSM, who I can tell you right now, I know how legal things work. I think themselves abused tourist visas and had people play without being an O1 athlete visa. And maybe someone came as a tourist and just didn't say he was playing in the league. They themselves, it was actually because of people like Echo Fox with Froggen and like Monty's team, etc., to punish those squads who were doing the same thing I think TSM did. Notice I'm being very careful with my phrasing, even though they don't exist anymore. Essentially, they just did that thing of like, hey, what's going on with the visa? And then people checked, and famously, it's why like took a lot more longer to get Froggen and Echo Fox. I think Freeze onto fucking Renegades. So yeah, it was basically that was what happened, and that became then a sticking point. Even though, by the way, the dirty secret, the reason why that was a double dirty move, Nymaera, is because one, I think Reginald himself had benefited from this before, but even worse, at that point in history, it was the ultimate douchebag move because all of Western esports was abusing that principle to attend tournaments. Like every single player in Counter-Strike who went to a major in America was going on a tourist visa abroad and just saying, I'm playing in a tournament. And if you don't know, the reason the loophole used to work is because a customs agent hearing I'm going to a video game tournament thinks you're going to play like Smash Brothers round the corner. He doesn't really believe you're a sports athlete going to make millions of dollars. So that's what we were all getting away with back then because it's really hard to get visas. And this is in the era, by the way, as well, where people didn't have like shit hot lawyers who can get the best visa. Like you're going through the paperwork yourself. It's complicated. So unfortunately, that's also why that was a bit sus back then, because essentially overnight we all had to, one, pretend no one did it before, even though it's like, well, that's a bit weird, then why is there a problem now? And then two, it made everyone in LCS especially have to like level their shit up massively after that.
The famous one for China, which is a similar kind of like, it's accepted even though it's not correct. So basically, don't give them a reason to suspect that you're there. Don't out and out say it, but just like you hide behind the pretense, which is like, if you need to get a visa on short term, getting a work visa for China takes a long time. It takes months. It is quite expensive, whatever. So you just go for like a business meeting visa. And you say, I'm there for a cultural, I'm there for a meeting. I'm there for a cultural exchange. And if you just so happen to get paid after it because of rewards for whatever, then everything's fine. But that's something which has occasionally happened over there as well. Like, certain times you have to kind of like play the game with the bureaucracy. It only becomes a problem when someone tears the mask off of it and everyone goes, oh, bloody hell. Now everyone has to go through this crazy amount of paperwork, especially if you're a team with less resources. It gets kind of crazy. And that's kind of what happened around 2015, 2016.
Right, this will sound weird because normally I don't say this, but quickly correct the chat as I speak the following words. So we have a new sponsor here on Summoning Insight, and it is Drip Drop, which is a wonderful drinks company. Now, Drip Drop is a doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better, which I think, why would that ever be a negative, right? As gamers, isn't that exactly what we all want? Clearer focus, better energy, elevated mood, the fresh skin glow. I don't know that the latter's really what I want, but listen, it's a benefit. I'm sure some people want to look like they
I'm
glow
down for that.
just because the monitor was, shining on them, etc. Just from natural glow, health and whatnot, and energy and all the rest of it. Also, crucially, it delivers 3 times the electrolytes with half the sugar of the leading sports drinks. Think of some of the brands in your mind. So you're not only going to get the results really awesome. By the way, electrolytes also are underrated for that. You don't just want water. You don't want only electrolytes. You want a mix of the two because they synergize and it helps the water get into your cells, etc. So that is a key aspect right there. And also the idea it doesn't have as much sugar is awesome. You're not going to get the sugar crash after it, are you? You can also be someone who then does sort of a diet where that's not a problem in that case. Supposedly, let me see. It's used by over 90% of top college and pro teams. So there's even like actual sports athletes that are using this type of a thing. And also some people on our network have used it, like Dom, I Will Dominate, and Andrew, who's one of the people who works behind the scenes. They said that they're both fans of the cherry limeade flavor, which they think is the best one, because cherry's a difficult flavor to get right. Sometimes remember cherries associated with like medicine and cough drops and stuff. But they say that they nailed the flavor, and also they're a fan of the strawberry lemonade as well. Also, I'll just point out that this is something that you don't have to only use when you work out. You can also just drink this each day. I mean, remember, I would say in general, people know to hydrate themselves, but actually because they make the mistake of thinking water's the panacea, they actually don't mix in enough electrolytes to make it work. If you actually have too much water, if you don't, it'll strip stuff out of your system. So this is not something you can just have as part of your daily routine. You don't have to be somebody who's grinding in the gym or on a gym day in order to use it. So right now, Drip Drop is offering listeners of this podcast 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use the promo code summoning. That's dripdrop.com, promo code summoning for 20% off. Stock up now at where? Dripdrop.com. Use promo code summoning. Thank you to DripDrop. Right. That's a new sponsor. See if they're on a future episode. Right. Let's move on then. Okay. So if we want to talk a bit about, let's talk about some LEC now. We'll do it the opposite order to usual. So one aspect, I have a question for you to get into this topic, which is they've announced the official LEC broadcast talent for 2026. And spoiler, I sort of guessed because you're on the call with me right now. You ain't on it. You didn't make the cut. No. So I just want to know, before we get into the actual, what do you have to say about that? I saw you did a post on Twitter. People don't know you are looking for broadcast work this year. You don't have anything lined up right now. What are your thoughts on that? How do you explain? What can you say, basically?
Well, first things first, I wasn't contacted at all by anyone ever for this in the off-season. I've had radio silence for the last, 3-4 months at this point. As far as I'm aware, they decided talent back in about October. I was somewhat aware I wasn't going to get LEC sometime in November. Typically, you will know before Worlds ends, unless there's some last minute changes around, someone drops out, or there's guest slots or something like that. You can find out into December. It has gotten a little bit earlier than it was. A number of years ago, you would find out a little bit later. So I was given great feedback the entire year, both on the quality of my work and me part of the team. And I was told by a couple of people that they were hoping that me being on LEC would be a long-term thing. So I was led to believe that I was pretty safe in my position there. But I've gotten more jaded as time's gone on, in terms of esports. Know that probably broadcast investment is going down, as it tends to. I think co-streaming is killing broadcast. I think that, as viewership splits, the power of broadcast goes down. So as I went through the year, I realized that I was the only person on broadcast to not get a single roadshow or a single finals. Actually, I've never had an LEC finals, despite the couple of years which I've worked on the broadcast. So despite the fact that I was given really good feedback from, people on the production side, people on the hiring side, and then also just colleagues as well. I casted Medic for the first time this year. I thought that was very, very easy. I think we got along very well. And he said that I was easy to cast with. Cast with Dracos for the first time this year. That went very well. I kept casting with Hysterics, and I thought that was going well too. So on my side of things, community seemed to like my work. Internally, people seemed to like my work. I don't know what more I could have done this year, because I also ended up doing a ton of like socials work as well in terms of doing a lot of content. I've probably been on 100 podcast episodes or whatever over the last year and a bit or whatever. That's something which I put a lot of time into. I've tried to make a lot of short content. I've cast more League of Legends than anyone in the world this year because I did LPL as well. So I've cast, 1,000 odd games in this year, which is just absurd. So in some ways, it's very freeing for me to realize there's nothing else I really could have done. On the plus side, it's really quite crap because I don't know what the hell I could have done. The only thing I have to go on in terms of why I'm not on LEC is that I'm not an ex-pro player. That is my sinking suspicion. Gulborg's gone from the broadcast as well. I am too. Basically, you have the two more established casters in terms of the analytical role of Dagda and Vedius, who are, they're part of the main casting, and they don't really drop to desk that much. And then you have the three ex-pro players. There was a point later into the year where I was told, this is actually the only time I've ever been contacted by Riot to say I'm not getting an event, actually. They very rarely do that. If you don't get something, you just basically figure out through the pipeline.
That's pretty much common in the industry, yeah.
Yeah. And that, it's annoying as a talent because you don't get to plan around that.
Yeah,
You're
of course.
I personally don't like it, but whatever. I know that they're not obligated. Also, I'm a freelancer. Technically, they're not obligated to hire me for pretty much anything. Whatever. That's just the way of things. I'd like to know in advance, but whatever. But yeah, when it was coming up to the Madrid finals, I was told in advance that I wouldn't be getting it. And I don't know whether this is worded poorly from the person who was telling me this, but basically they were saying that they were very happy with the way that the ex-pros were being received. So I didn't have a place, basically. Insinuating from that effectively, they aren't really looking to hire people who are ex-pros. And as you'll see from the talent announcement, all of the ex-pros that were on broadcast were hired again. Now, I like them. I think they're very good. I do think it's a bit of a problem when you start to drop every other kind of analyst on the same kind of thing. Because now GB and I are both gone. We are the people who are on desk a little bit more, and we're from a non-pro player background. And it's important to get the pro perspective, but if you only have that and then they have overlapping experiences and skill sets, then actually you end up having the problem on the other side where you only have one perspective again. So I guess that's like my opening thoughts for it, where I'm just like a little bit annoyed by that. However, it does look like they've just downsized in general, because I'm not on it, Gulborg's not on it, and also Janira's on it, not on it as well. So that is basically the same team from last year, but 3 people fewer.
Yes.
So that is, it looks like they're cutting in general. That leads me to believe, I don't know whether broadcast is cutting costs in general. I think they might be, just given the industry. Does this mean, one thing which I think probably has been a little while coming for LEC is that I don't know whether we'll have 2 caster pairs throughout the day now. If they're going to cut costs, is it just going to be 1 caster pair for all of it? It might be the case as well, where so for a lot of this year we had host and then 3 desk analysts, and then 2 of them would rotate in and out, which would allow someone to do a solo segment, throw to the other people doing like a group segment. Wonder if that gets cut down to actually just 2 analysts and then a host as well. And I would imagine that I was just on the bottom of the totem pole. Like, I'm annoyed. Yes. I feel like I did really well, actually. I like to be my own worst enemy in some ways, because it means I get to actually really root out what I do badly in my work and get better at it. But actually, there has to be a point where I just say to myself, actually, I feel like I'm good enough for this, and I feel like I should have been there. I hope there's a chance for me to work for them again, because broadcast is what I want to do. But as it stands now, I'm like, I flew out to Berlin, started 22 on 2 weeks' notice to be on LEC in 22. Obviously, things didn't work out at the end of 22. It was a very different situation there too. This was actually a very good year compared to that year internally. But yeah, now I've basically flown out to Berlin. I spent this entire year renewing my visa, which has been just awful. It's been one of the most stressful times of my life trying to renew the visa. And
people don't know anything you do within Germany, you have to also do in the German language, right? Using lawyers and shit. It's really complicated.
Yes. So you have to basically, like, realistically, you need to hire someone to go to the visa office with you. Now, they did simplify that over the last few years just to try, because even German speakers don't understand the German that's used in like the burger and stuff like that, because it's really, really complicated. But I had to sort out a bunch of stuff with tax at the right, because freelance taxes are also just awful in Germany, especially when you have to explain what esports is to someone who's never heard of it before. So this whole year was kind of shit. I did thousands of hours of work. I thought I was doing really well despite all the stress. I got my visa done finally, and now I don't have a reason to use it. So that's just another like kick in the nuts really after that. So I suppose that's just my immediate thoughts on it. I mean, the people that are on the broadcast, I think they're very good. I think I'm very good too. I think I should be there. I'm annoyed, but
I have one follow-up for you, and then we'll get into the more general aspect of who is announced and all that. Right. So one thing I have to ask you is this question. Right. There are other people who no longer are hired, who probably will never come back again. I imagine some of them might even transition out of league or go do a different gig elsewhere. In your case, the reason why I can also appreciate it must be frustrating is I've always thought a flaw with how they do this approach in LEC, where you have people who are almost like part of the furniture. You know they're going to be there, something would have to go drastically wrong, or maybe they could just do a bad negotiation. Otherwise, they're going to get it each year, and they sort of know they are. And then what they did in the past years was they almost made it like a talent pipeline. They had that guest spot where they would rotate people in, but that's even a cool idea. Keep some variety, try some people out. Also, you never know. You give a guy a whole split, maybe they fuck up a few weeks and he goes, shit, he's good for 1 or 2 weeks, but he gets, so I don't mind that. My problem is this, Nymaera, is I hate the fact that in your case especially, you're stuck in the purgatory spot where you're not the guy who got the guest spot and then that's it and you were never in again. If that happened, by the way, you could go, okay, conscience clear, I'm never going to get hired again. So either it's minor regions for me or maybe I move on or I do something else in League of Legends. You've been stuck in the purgatory of you're the guest and then at times you've gotten to be on LEC properly, but then sometimes you have to go back to being the guest. And the worst thing, as you said earlier, is put it this way, I've been a person who hired people for talent. I'm not obligated to tell someone why I didn't hire them in the first place or don't hire them again. But I know what you mean. In your case, when you're trying to manage your life and where you live and what your career path is and what the runway is, you want at least a sense of like, if you're bumping me down to guest again, am I only ever going to be here occasionally? If that's so, I'd almost rather know that than live in this naive hope that I can get back. Because this feels like the obvious thing in your case is not only have you been sort of pushed back and forth, but now it feels like, what reason do I have to hope that I will be hired next year? It'd be nice, but how do I get back there, right?
And especially since basically LEC have always pushed for people to move to Berlin. They've always pushed for that. Now, a couple of years ago, if you were a guest, they would fly you in. So they flew in people like Broxer and Jamada, and a handful of other people. And then basically they said, we really want you in Berlin. Even when, well, they never say you have to move to Berlin. They just say, it makes it much easier to hire you. Basically, just because they can't force you as a freelancer to do anything.
One, as a freelancer, legally they can't do that. And then two, they also have to be really careful. If people don't know, I know Germany is one of those countries where emails count as binding, by the way. So, for example, if they were to say you have to move here and then you move there and they don't give you the work, you probably even sue them at that point in time. So I understand why they have to be careful how they phrase that. Fair enough.
So you'll notice that they've basically stopped flying people in. And then I can't remember when it was, last year or the year before. They stopped flying people in. I don't know whether those people were given the option to move to Berlin and say we will give you more work. Well, the similar kind of conversation, but then they didn't. But yeah, obviously Sam and I, because this is the other thing too, right? It's even not just me that's implicated in this. I flew out here with my brother Sam, who we are the only siblings to cast in Tier 1 League of Legends ever. And I'm just like mind blown that they wouldn't want to use that kind of branding more as well. Because actually, we do a hell of a lot of casting together, and I obviously I'm biased in this bloody case, but I think Sam's absolutely of that caliber too. But now it's a situation where like how the hell am I going to pay rent? Do I stay in Berlin now? I've got some plans for content or whatever, but it's very hard to kick things up into paying rent level of money over one off season and kind of kick things up in a couple of months. That's just the nature of it, sure. But it's not like I earned crazy amounts from broadcast, folks. Like I don't have crazy amounts to save and to keep myself going for forever, particularly with broadcast rates going down. And also, this is another thing too. I reckon I was the cheapest member on LEC. I don't think my rate was higher than anyone else's, because again, I'm bottom of the totem pole.
I can also tell people that in League of Legends, this is one area where, look, I won't make the obvious allusion to it's about franchise leagues. I'll just say it as a flat statement from what I know about what like top Counter-Strike casters make, for example. The cream of the top Counter-Strike make like the amount of like top European LEC players, bro. They make like $200,000-$300,000 a year. There are very few people even dreaming of numbers like that in League of Legends broadcast work. It's way more reasonable of sort of like a top person might be six figures, other people are high five figures, some people will be medium to low five figures.
I think the most I ever earned in a single year between all events was about a little over 50 grand in euros in 1 year.
That makes some sense.
Most I ever did. So basically what that means is, and then of course you've got German tax rates and stuff, which cuts that down significantly as well. But yeah, so even basically lower tier players maybe earn, well, back in like 22 or around then, they would have earned like 4 to 5 times more than me. And then top players would earn way more.
Yes.
So yeah, I suppose just kind of wrapping up what I think on that. I mean, I think I did a very good job. Community liked me. Internally, feedback was going well too. I actually think I had a stronger brand than a lot of the people on LEC too, because I was actually using my socials, putting out content and appearing on stuff like podcasts. I think I'm pretty unique in what I do. So obviously I'm still kind of like in the wake of this, and this is going to be fairly emotionally
processing
charged.
it,
Not that
yeah.
it won't be, for sure. And I don't want to like put my foot in my mouth and whatever, because actually I'd like to be back on the LEC one day. Technically, they haven't closed the door, I suppose, and if they need a guest, I'm literally 30 minutes down the road. But I genuinely don't know what more I could have done. Hell, I mean, one of the only goals that was really set in terms of broadcast at the start of the year was that they wanted basically people on the analyst desk to have like a branded segment, something like, Jat stats, quick stats, something like that, those things where you think, or like Vedius and his various personalities or whatever. And actually, GB did fantastic at this with the GB Sports thing, like with the practice mode, kind of playing basically sports within the Rift. I had my kind of Professor Nymaera thing where I'd take an in-depth topic and we'd basically do a classroom segment. And that actually was received very well, both internally and externally. And I felt like I succeeded at that too. So I really am at a loss as to what I could have done, really. And I've asked for that kind of feedback from folks on the broadcast as well. And as far as I'm aware, it's just there wasn't a place for me, and I'd imagine that means it's probably just less spending on the broadcast, and there wasn't a place for me, which sucks, but what can you do?
I'll tease you that I might have a little insight to that. But I'll first of all just say, first of all, as you pointed out, it's not just an Nymaera issue. Like, first of all, I looked it up while we were talking here. If you look at what was announced for winter 2025, so the first split, they announced 13 people and a special guest. There is now 10 people with no special guests. So already, as I pointed out, multiple people have not gotten renewed, / have been cut, / are no longer, their services aren't required. So it's clearly not just a you issue. In fact, as you just said, my immediate assumption would be this is cost-cutting measures, especially because, as you pointed out, by the way, what you just said there about the analyst desk is the most obvious cut anyone would make, which is, I'll even say right now, as someone who's done a lot of Counter-Strike analyst desks, I personally actually prefer the two analysts in a host role because you get more time to talk and you can go back and forth a little bit more. The awkward part about doing host plus 3 people is it becomes a lot more, we go down the line and people have to sort of stick to their points. And you can't have too much back and forth because it can throw people off and fuck it up a bit, So I actually am a bigger fan. But then again, here's where this is also why I get the privilege of saying this, Nymaera. I can say that because since essentially I get more airtime and to do more if I make the cut. Well, yeah, if I'm the one who makes the cut, what I would say is this, Nymaera. In this world, I'm not thinking of myself as you. I would be more like fucking a Dracos, like an auto hire. So if I'm an auto hire, I'd rather be less people hired and then I get more of a show. Your problem in this case is more people means you get in the cut. That makes perfect sense in both regards.
And from a production standpoint, it gives you more capabilities where you have. So one of the things that you're really looking out for in any desk segment is the way that you're using locations and camera angles to not just make it talking heads at a desk. So what you'll often see is one person at the like the big wall doing some kind of telestrator segment, or maybe even sat there with a player and they're pointing out plays, and then they do their bit of the segment breaking down a play that happened in the game. Then the camera will swivel to the right and they'll go to the AD where they talk about the rest of it. Or you'll have multiple they'll have people in the fan zone talking to them, and you're trying to kind of pass off between those things. The problem with having 2 AD is that it makes it much harder to do that, because then you have to walk between locations and it's kind of awkward in terms of camera transitions where someone's got a solo segment, then you walk over to the other people. You can do, but it just lowers some of your capabilities. That's one. 2, if you're not on a desk segment, you can be thinking about the next one. Probably the hardest bit of the job of working in LEC is reacting to the game as it happens, prepping a segment in advance, and making sure that if something random happens in the game, you still have a fallback for it. Because obviously you have to get assets in line. So like you have to ping producers, I want these assets, I want this B-roll, I want this loaded up into this screen or whatever. And it makes it a lot easier having an extra person on hand to like have an eye for their solo segment while everyone else is hanging on to the other side of it. So in terms of actual capabilities of the desk, that might take a hit. And again, this is all conjecture. Maybe they do just have 3 people on or whatever. But I would imagine if they're cutting that many people, they're going to be basically everyone would have to be on every show at that point, which they don't really do. But some of the capabilities will get hit by that.
And then the other thing is, this is only loosely connected to you, but you are included in this. Let's just say that I was in a conversation within the last couple of years. What people don't know is, I'm not a fucking idiot. This is how I did the Reckless video. I intentionally make it so you can't guess who I am saying. But I'm not a liar. I did talk to these people, but I just make it so you'll never be able to guess who it is. And I don't give enough contextual clues that you could figure it out. Because what I do is I actually sit down and think myself, how would I try and infer if this was like a Poirot mystery based on what I said, who it was? So I know you won't get this. So I'll say the last few years, but look, pretty this is very relevant to this group of people.
Yeah.
Essentially, I once asked a question, and one of the secrets of being a journalist, by the way, is sometimes you intentionally ask a naive question as though you're just an innocent, naive, fresh out of the womb fucking Bambi who doesn't know anything about the world, because that way they'll just tell you the real. And basically, I sort of said to someone along the lines of a question that goes like, why do people like Troublelink and Nymaera not get on the LEC broadcast, whereas people, I mean, the obvious example is even relevant right now, is I've never rated Goldborg. So I was like, how does he stay on every year though? Like, what am I missing? Essentially, what I was saying to the person was, I know broadcast work, so how are these people in your world considered much worse than Goldborg? Well, I think they're much better than. And I was basically told Goldborg is much better at playing office politics and how to sort of be in these groups than some of those people. Like what they said to me is, because you're not in the room, you're just looking at what they do on broadcast. And yeah, and this person even said to me, those are excellent people. But the difference is they maybe rub people the wrong way, or they don't play the same game, or I don't know, there's some sort of a vibe check or something was almost implied. What do it's up to you if you want to say something about that, but what do you think?
Okay, like, again, I don't think it's worth me saying, like, obviously not worth saying.
Yeah, don't go too broad.
What I'll say is, when I came into the LEC, it was a very, very different atmosphere. You have to remember, in 2022, that would have been the third year of COVID broadcast. People were stressed. They were tired. The job that they'd done for a very long time had changed an awful lot. And I know a lot of people were struggling. And then you have, effectively, the first rotating group of guests come in. I guess technically that would have been in 21, but then I came on in 22. And from my understanding, that could, well, obviously that could be perceived as a threat to your job, right? So suddenly you've had your whole job's changed. You've had years of COVID. Everything's remote. It's really hard to feel good about things. People were very, very stressed. And particularly in my position, most people come into broadcast knowing one of the casters, maybe two. They have some kind of connections. They're either an ex-pro, we've talked about that a little bit already, or they're kind of like an understudy of someone. So maybe you knew Quickshot and he helped you out on an ERL scene or something like that. Or maybe you knew Froskurin, for instance, was pretty good at networking with casters, stuff like that. I didn't. I came in from straight grassroots. I did one split of EMEA Masters. Actually, the way that I really kind of picked up on the radar, it was I grinded out in amateur and in minor regions for a while. And then I got this lucky break of saying, hey, we want to try it for a single day on EMEA Masters. And then someone dropped out ill. So instead of getting 1 day, I ended up getting 3 days in the quarterfinals. I did well on that. That basically ended up being my kind of like punt up towards LEC, and they said, look, we'll try you out. If you're out here, then we can hire you. And then NLC was moving out to Berlin at the same time, so I actually got a couple of weeks of studio experience. I'd never worked in a studio at the start of 22. I had 2 weeks of studio experience, and I got jumped straight into LEC. And it was a very difficult atmosphere, and I struggled with that. It got to the point where I was having a migraine every show day. I wasn't showing my best work. It felt like
stress related.
Yeah, it was very, very stress related. And yeah, I was definitely a new kid on the block. And I probably should have just existed a bit more rather than trying to kind of make a mark and try and establish.
If you would try hard a bit
more.
Right.
I think I probably should have just backed off from some moments, really. But I think a lot of people look, it was a lot better experience this year, folks. I'll put it that way. I think a lot of people were chilled out, a lot more chilled out. But I didn't have that social in. I very much felt that. And it made some of the interactions very, very difficult, really. I did struggle on that level. And yeah, I think that not having, and also just the onboarding wasn't that, I don't think they'd had as many guests at that point, so the onboarding was a little bit ropey in terms of, I didn't get the logins for some of the stuff that we were using until like halfway through the first split. So throughout all of that, there were some not great interactions. I think probably I should have just taken an L or two and not tried to stand my ground as much, probably. I think that just wasn't the way to play it. So yeah, if you would interpret that as playing the office game, yeah, I think that probably does come into it. I think I probably had to back down and just exist a little bit more.
I mean, by the way, as you say,
I made mistakes there, folks.
That's also a risk that you took, but in the sense of like, look, I can imagine in your mind, if that played out a different way, you come across completely differently. Like you're actually trying to improve the product, and you're really dedicated, and you're grinding to get the spot. But I can also see how that can be interpreted many ways, though.
Yeah, I mean, and the feedback in that year, it's developed a lot over the last few years, and the feedback this year was a lot better. I really didn't vibe with the way that they were giving feedback in 22. It was very off the cuff and very raw. There is an art to giving feedback and an art to receiving feedback, and I've really tried to work on my art of receiving feedback. But it was still very difficult at points where I felt like actually I'm not getting that much from it. That led to some conflicts as well. But yeah, what I will say, folks, is that this year was so much better with that. I think that actually I've worked through a lot of those conflicts that happened in 22. At this point, actually, I love working with everyone on the team and the folks who, I think it was a lot better experience, and that's why I'm kind of like. That makes it a little bit more sad that I'm not on this year, actually, because I felt like I actually worked through the stuff which was holding me back from 22. And look, I made those mistakes in 22, and I'll definitely put my hands up and say, actually, I should have backed off from conflicts more. I should have done. And I don't think I showed my best work, and I think there was room for me to grow there. But yeah, I think that this year it was a lot better. I don't think there's anyone who I don't enjoy working with on the team, actually, on the LEC team. I've really enjoyed that quite a lot. And I think that if they'll have me back, I've still got plenty more to show there too. But yes, in terms of you saying, office politics, if you would interpret what I've said as that, then yeah, I think that checks out.
And also, as I said, if they are cost cutting anyway, sometimes you make decisions like you have to cut people you even want to keep on. Someone. I mean, if you look at some of the people that they've taken off, like people like you may or may not like him, but Goldberg had seniority. He'd been there quite a long time. He'd been part of the furniture to some degree. He's one of those people you would have assumed automatically got hired. What's funny is people don't get this. I'm very fair when I do this. By the way, first of all, I do think of this list, Nymaera should have been hired, and I would say that whether he was here or not. Like, by the way, I don't say that because he's on LFN. In fact, I'll even be sort of a bit cheeky and say there's people on LFN I wouldn't hire to a main broadcast if they were hired. Look, it'd be really hard to say they shouldn't, but I'd find a way. I've got a talent for these sorts of things. In fact, if people don't know, on this very show, even though he's literally a friend of mine, and as a friend, I thought it was one of the best things that could ever happen to him. I told LS not to his face, but over a call when he told me he was going to be hired as a strategic coach of T1. I said, that's great for you. I'm really happy. I don't know what the fuck they're doing that though. Like, I'm sorry, I don't think you'll make it. I think you'll burn out within like 3 weeks. But like, that's just who I am. So I'm not a liar in that sense. So I do think one of my problems with this list is, like, people know I'm not a Goldberg fan, but that's not actually to do with the whole fucking quick shot. Why did he upload that stupid tweet when they were in the studio in fucking Dublin? Like, that's just a separate reason. And by the way, sadly in his case, I don't think he did that at all maliciously. If you ever saw what the original tweet said and the fact he deleted it very quickly, like, if it was up to him, you can't do this on the internet, sadly. It wouldn't have been seen. It would have been seen by a few people that very quickly deleted. And he clearly didn't understand actually the context of what that meant. I remember he's from like Norway or whatever. I imagine they're just a little bit edgier there within that culture. I also think he maybe just saw the move and he didn't hear the specifics of what they were saying. Remember, it wasn't mic'd up. It was like in the background of a fucking 5-second social media video. So sadly, that's not the reason I dislike him. I just thought he was a bit average at the fucking job. I wasn't a big fan. Similarly, on this broadcast, of the names hired here, I'm not that big a fan of Finn personally. I don't dislike him. I think he's just all right. I did think as soon as I heard during the off-season him like announce he's retiring and doing it for that suggested to me he knew he had the in, bro. I don't think he was really like just doing the leap of faith. I feel like he already had the next branch that he was letting go of the pro player one to hang on to the pro. I feel like he already knew the way it was in. That's just the one where I'm not as big a fan. I would say there's also one or two casters I would maybe remove for Nymaera. With that said, the rest of the lineup is a very strong lineup. And the other two pros, Jack Spectre and Odo Amner, I think are excellent. Like, I think Odo Amner simultaneously is a good analyst, but also does bring the spice he always had as a pro player off camera. If you knew him,
he's always a guy all-around game knowledge as well.
He's mega.
Of the ex pros. So one of the things I've learned about working with many ex pros is that typically the ones in the West, they have good knowledge on their role, and they don't really have that for the rest of the roles. Odo's like the one guy who has like the macro knowledge. There's a reason why he was actually fairly good at coaching kind of Lost Tones as kind of as the coach when Casual wasn't there to do stuff. He's like the guy that would actually have an answer to any situation which had happened in the game and he'd be able to defend it. And not many ex-pros can really say that. Or like be like, oh, how does this matchup play? Or, oh, I don't really know how this matchup plays. Odo pretty much always has an answer to that. And so he's really impressive on that front.
And then for Jack Spectre, I mean, I actually said, first of all, I actually think he got done dirty as a pro player. I actually thought he was very good and should have been in LEC. But also, I think he's excellent on broadcast. I really enjoy his work. One thing I think he has a natural skill for, which I've very rarely ever seen in pros, is actually explaining fairly complicated concepts, but just to a layman on the screen. Like, I think he does a great job with that. So I think he's a great hire personally. And then the other person, as we said, who was removed is obviously Gennaro. I'll just use this moment with a shit-eating Thorin grin to just make a mean joke, which is, because I guess in this case, she won't be getting the bag. Whatever, anyway, you get the point on that one. Look up her TikTok if you don't know what that joke's related to. Anyway, aside from that, by the way, most people here, excellent hires, some of the best in the industry as well. Classics like Law and Shock's all coming back. Dracos is very good. These are all great hires in general.
Yeah, no, they've all worked there for a long time. My one worry is like both myself and Gulbug were very good at kind of planning stuff for the desk, and that's not something which is easy to pick up as an ex-pro player because that's broadcast skills. Like, if GB was on a show, he'd pretty much just plan most of the desk segments that you needed and most of the graphics for them. And
I also heard, he was someone who, look, this is why, by the way, I don't blame you for what you said earlier. You probably thought you were trying to be like that sort of a character and be like, hey, I can sort of do more here, guys. There can be more involved. The problem is you never know. Some people do, unfortunately, take that as you're too eager or you're trying to take their spot or something.
Yeah, and also it's just kind of like treading on people who've been on the show for a long time and it's like their baby. And you trying to actually, it's hard to kind of get their trust to change the show in the right way. Like, I thought some moments this year, actually, I did a lot better on that front, actually, in terms of, I guess, like, my most fun moment from this year on broadcast was when it was coming around to the roadshow in Madrid and then to MSI. We were trying to find a way to hype things up without making it kind of like too boring or samey or whatever. So we kind of ended up going with this whole, let's just get these giant cardboard tickets in terms of ticket to MSI, the golden ticket, effectively. And basically that was just something which I suggested in one meeting, came through in a couple of days, just very quick and easy through. And that just felt like it was just, the pipeline was great. Shox knew a place that printed tickets. Shox, by the way, she is an absolute demon at pushing things through on broadcast. No one pushes things through harder than her. She's absolutely fantastic for the broadcast like that. She's like whatever people say about her skills on broadcast, she's better than it. She's fantastic at that. But when you're dropping more kind of people who've focused on the broadcast side of things, you lose that ability to quickly, efficiently, and effectively communicate special things you want on broadcast. And I think LEC needs to really focus on that this year to make sure that that's not going to be a hole in their skill set.
Yes. And then also, I will just say as a last thing in that regard, I just suspect that if this is a cost-cutting measure, there's not a lot anyone can do in this regard. You essentially need the league to almost pick up and get more popular and do well and do better financially, and then the broadcast views to go. So at that point in time, like, we can debate some of the minutiae, but the bigger picture isn't Nymaera-centric, and it's not Nymaera and fucked up, and that's why he's not here, etc. All this. And also, for the moment, two angles. Good news for LFN, because he gets to do shows like this with us. Maybe he'll do a different show in the future if the aforementioned prodigal son Yamato decides to stop being a degenerate in the world with all the fucking dirty lost Torres money and comes back to the fold, in which we guess our welcoming him and bring out the suckling pig or whatever it was in that fucking Bible story. Anyway, that, obviously in this analogy, he's completely degenerate, washed out the industry at that point, but I'll welcome you back, Yamato. It's all good. But then also, I'll just say to Riot, something I've told you many, many times, Riot, through back channels, through literally face-to-face. I've also said it on my shows many times. If you want to fuck with Thorin and you don't want people to be on Thorin shows criticize them, give them jobs, you stupid fuck. Because when they have the jobs, then they have a reason to not be on the show. And also at that point in time, I will wish them well and I won't be as mean-spirited. Otherwise, I'll be really mean-spirited.
On that note, I'd imagine one of the, I guess, FAQs for this stuff for me will be, there were two things which could have pissed Riot off. Were they either, people might not have caught this. Folks, for Worlds Finals co-streamer before that, I had, on my co-stream for Worlds, Quickshot, Monty and Doa. I had all of them.
The wrong gallery there.
So I was like, I'm just like, fuck it. I have the contacts. I know these guys. I just done a show on some general gaming stuff with a bunch of them, like in the weeks before that. I thought, well, how am I going to make this special? Telecom War Finals. I'm going to get Monty and Doa on, and sure, Quickshot's around. I'm going to get him as well. And I got that in writing from the folks in the head of co-streamers that was completely fine. So that wasn't the case. And also, as far as I'm aware, talent decisions were made before that point anyway. And then, of course, appearing on this show, it's never been a problem for me before. And again, the decision was already made by that point. So none of that factors into this at all. They'd already made the decision for that. But I did also cover my tracks and checked in writing if it was okay to get those folks on show before that happened to you. I thought it was a great finals. And yeah, so luckily that didn't go into it as well.
There was one small piece of news, which is actually related to the NLC, but I'll bundle it in here.
Oh, yeah.
Which is this thing you showed me, which is that there's going to be this weird thing.
Yeah,
We've already discussed on past episodes that, let's be real, the NLC isn't in the RL in the same way that the LFL is.
No.
And they know it isn't, which is why after the Los Returners thing, they've realised...
silly.
No, but this is the thing. They've realised you've got to pivot into novelty things to make people interested about the league. So one of the things they've decided to do is some like WWE level shit, where it's called wild cards. And I'll just read the text. It just says, to add a bit of spice, we give all teams the option to swap in a true legend with experience from one of the top LOL leagues. The team can decide if and when to swap a player, but they will only know the position of that player and not the name until the very last minute. So essentially, if you want the example, this would be like you're about to go into the game, you're about to go into draft, you've had your whole prep week, and then they go, whose music is that? Wait a minute, Perks is back. You don't even know what. All you know is that it was a mid laner. Like what? I don't. Let's just start there. Go. What are your thoughts? This is a fucking wild idea, mate.
This is. In terms of competitive integrity and competition, this actually might be the single worst rule I have ever seen in the history in competitive league. I cannot believe we live in a timeline where you can random roll between pro, junglers, top, whatever role you've picked out. Imagine thinking, you're going to get perks or whatever, and you end up with, Rockat Steve from way back. I don't know how deep the pool is. I don't. Maybe it's just people who just they have got a free day or whatever. I think effectively the reason this came out is that teams were already sort of doing this last year, where Ruddy, I can't remember who their top laner was, but then
they used to be Perks, and then they went to Wonder or whatever, wasn't it? Was it something like that?
Yeah, I think it was Perks top lane. He couldn't play for a week, and then Wonder had to sub in for a week.
Yes, I think so.
Something similar happened to... I can't remember if Nord did a similar thing. Basically, teams were doing this similar enough. This is just kind of codifying it, I suppose. So it makes it a bit more of pomp and posture and a bit more circus.
It's the way they make it. It's like they're trying to... Here's the one area they're overselling it, bro. They're making it sound like, so any week it could be any legend. Is it going to be expected? It's like, no, but by the way, probably not. Exactly. It's going to be people who actually are
by the way, but what the hell? Like, there are plenty of players I like at that point, but just imagine... I just surely you can't let them know on the day that
I know
what you're not going to be. By the way,
I'd even be that's the problem. I'd also even be somewhat fine with it because I understand NLC is it's a tough product to sell. The problem I have is the silly gimmick of you don't get to know who they are until the game begins. Like, because here's why that's whack. Because of all the games in fucking esports, League of Legends, especially in Fearless Draft, it's quite important to know who is playing. Like, one of the things I always thought made Doublelift a stone cold cretin in interviews is Doublelift, bro, till the end of his playing career, used to have the philosophy of you take the nameplates off and look at the champion you're playing. And I just want to tell him, Doublelift, I think I know why Deft and Uzi and fucking Faker got on your ass every time, bro. Because you were like, hey, I played him loads of Ezreals. You haven't played Uzi Eyes Ezreal, motherfucker. It's a bit different to know, am I playing Uzi Eyes Ezreal from Billy Joe, who's a nobody? So again, if I'm prepping for a team, I need to know if that's actually going to be like fucking, like... expect here playing mid lane or a random guy from NLC. That's kind of important. I get that information. Feels unfair otherwise. What we doing?
I have to say though, credit to them. I don't think NLC has basically ever been talked about on their show outside of Lost Returns. They probably were going to fade into obscurity again. The fact that they're pulling this whack shit means that we've actually now spoken about them like 2 weeks.
There's a chance. There is a chance in the future we will bring up if they bring a famous player. If fucking Yellow Star comes for a game, so who knows? Maybe we will be talking about him. Who knows?
Like, it could be an absolute car crash, but I would be seated for the car crash. And there's something similar that we talked about that in the last episode as well, because all of these random teams are coming through. Also, since then, like Dumbs, the YouTuber, has also announced his own like pseudo content team. But this rule in particular, like I know I have my own NLC roots. I was pretty accepting of the fact we've done NLC now, it's fine. Don't particularly want to talk about them. They throw this out there. Just had to have a quick hit on it because what the hell? No, this is genuinely on a competitive level. I don't think I've ever heard a worse rule.
Yes, especially because here's the other problem I have is the reason why to me it's a bit jarring when there are really drastically different rules and rule sets across the league ecosystem is they've in theory designed it to be a coherent ecosystem. Like NLC feeds into EU Masters as well. So that's my problem. One of the reasons why they were able to sneak Fearless under the door without me going completely ballistic is they tricked me into believing it was just one initial tournament that didn't count for Worlds and it wouldn't be for the rest of the year. So again, if this was a one-off exhibition tournament from NLC called like NLC Miss mystery fifth, and you can just bring a mystery fifth in, then that'd be cool. But my problem here is there is a league that's supposed to build into EU Masters and be part of the ecosystem. So it's just a bit weird that this one league has like almost like the joke is like a trapdoor opens and a player disappears, and then in comes some legendary guy. Like, what the fuck is that? That's just so bizarre. It's so bizarre. Like I say, it's more like some WWE shit to me, mate. Yeah. It's like some Royal Rumble, like you're waiting for the music to play. What are we doing?
All right. Okay, Jesus. Look, I'm done with NLC now. I'm done with it. Let's just move on. This league, they've done enough, Duncan. They've done enough.
Here's the thing. Much like the NLC, I understand it can be tricky to manage your finances and to remain relevant and keep track of things.
That's a hell of a segue.
Did you know we have the sponsor, Rocket Money, which I have to say, I think is an awesome idea because actually this is something I struggle with myself. I'm not the guy who likes to check my bank app all the time and then look. Because by the way, one thing in the Monday that's really annoying is, when you look on the bank app and it's like, it's not even the name of the shop you bought it from. It's some like holding company or some like LLC. And you're like, but did I spend 18 euros there? Was I actually tricked on that? Like, so when you do that, first of all, I find that really annoying because I'm a baller. I'd be tapping that card everywhere, don't I? I'd be tapping that shit all over the place, like Prime Usher. I just tap everything in sight, bro. So when I'm tapping my card, doing all that stuff, one of the problems is it's really hard to keep a track of things like your inflow and your outflow. It's really difficult, by the way, to remember things like what is a subscription, what's a one-time payment. So one of the really cool things about Rocket Money is it has all of these things covered and it makes it super easy to do this. So you can get all sorts of things like, instead of spending hours and hours figuring out your finances and all that, the app will just do it for you, basically. What about like organizing it, figuring out spending limits, what your budgets are? You can set all this stuff as well. Then think about all the things in the modern world that we all sign up for with subscriptions or have like a hidden fee we didn't know about. Well, in this case, it will also make you aware of those things so you can actually figure out which things don't I want to be subscribed to anymore? What did I like sign up to 6 months ago but I don't ever use or I'd forgotten about, or maybe at the time it was a small amount, but that compounds over time and you add that up. You might be spending hundreds of thousands of euros that you don't need to, and you would have cancelled a month earlier, but you didn't see it, whereas this will make you aware of that, which I also think is a mega feature, by the way. It sounds really, really good. And then also, what if you are someone where there is a specific thing where you're like, oh, am I actually getting a good deal on this? They have all sorts of like crazy things where they actually have their own people can like contact people on your behalf and try and like figure this stuff out for you. So it's as a general service, it's one of those ones where I wouldn't have thought of it, but it actually sounds like it solves a problem I didn't even realize I have. But actually a lot of us have, especially in the modern day where we're all just gamers and we're busy playing video games. We all want to get back in solo queue, or we all want to watch the next section of this great League of Legends talk show with Thorin. So in this case, you can just go and get Rocket Money. Let Rocket Money help you reach your finance goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/LFN. That's rocketmoney.com/LFN, rocketmoney.com/LFN. It's a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Actually, one of those straight fire sponsors, I think. Shout out to Rocket Money. Okay, go on.
I was just saying, like, just given how crazy just the language and everything is around anything finance, anything which makes finance and your own spending easier to like understand is really, really good, I think.
Yes. There was actually, I realised when I did the LCS one, I would have bundled this together, but it's so many inside boards, we just do whatever the fuck we want. There was one other piece of NA news I missed, which is, this is actually such a bummer as news, but I'll just read it out. So the Leon Lion roster, which, if you remember, was the Inspired team where supposedly he was joining because like they're going to pay him a lot and he's getting all these shit hot players that he seriously believes in. Zamudo is unable to secure his visa because of government issues. And so as a result, they're getting a replacement top laner, which they're going to announce soon. It's implied it's Dhokla, by the way, because obviously he's already available. He wants to play a team. He's in
They
LA.
did announce that, by the way. So they have now officially done that. Yeah.
Makes sense to do it. But the problem here obviously is, let's just start with that angle. I look at this and I'm like, look, bummer for the Zamudo guy, interesting for Dhokla. But I'm sorry, I do have to start with, to me, this whole project, the main reason I care about it is Inspired. And I do get the vibe that he was sold a squad and what it was going to be and that he bought into it. He had buy into this. And by the way, I think it was, as well as I've heard he does get paid well, it's a very ballsy move as well. He could have gone to any of the other big orgs or come back to Europe and been in a squad, which was more of a slam dunk. So I have to say, that's already a bit of a bummer for me because I know Inspired is a guy where, mate, he's not just phoning it in going, cool to be a pro. He really wants to win and do more than, he doesn't just want to win out fucking LCS. He wants to have international results and make a semis of the Worlds or something, do some cool shit he hasn't been able to do. So what do you think on that angle?
I think it is so funny for Inspired to move from Bwipo to Dhokla in the off season. That's just the funniest thing.
We could get some great interviews out of this, put that way.
Just with all of the shit which went down between Bwipo and Dhokla, for it to happen in such a way as well. You think, oh, Dhokla missed out. He only got a single offer from Dignitas. Not a single other team even gave him an offer, despite actually having a really good Worlds for himself. The fact that this has ended up happening here, like, that's got to feel pretty weird for some folks in the community. But like, I think Dhokla been pretty solid. I would have liked to see him on a roster anyway. It's just the way that it's happened now is just not the way you would want to see. You would have liked him to have a bit more prep time. There was also a rumor that Berserker might miss a game or two because of his own visa issues. Context on Zamudo missing the visa. He got it denied last year, I think it was. And the problem is, whenever you have a visa denied, it is much more likely it will be denied again.
When you even do the form, it even has a box which sadly says, just the phrasing, will you ever decline? And so I'll give you an example. I twice had an O1A visa, which is for like athletes and entertainers, which in theory, by the way, says that the reason they have to bring you in is no one in America can do your job. It's not true, of course. What they really mean is I want this specific person. In the same way as you could always have had Palafox instead of Jensen, but you just want Jensen, right? But anyway, whatever, that's the loophole. Because it's actually technically because of the Trump administration. If people don't know, what happened was initially, long before there was ever ICE people in the streets, the initial way the Trump administration wanted to lower immigration was they just essentially said, you can look this all up, it's all been charted in news. What they essentially said was, what we'll do is we'll just decline the initial requests for visas. And what will happen is, this happened to me twice, it just basically says request for more evidence. Even if you've given all the evidence. Like, by the way, in my case of my evidence, I have one of the most ironclad cases you can have, mate. I have like 20 years of proof that I'm an esports historian and I've done all these. The joke is, here's a little punchline for you how bureaucracy works. Kafka would love this, bro. I was the person who wrote a reference letter for DDK to get his American visa. It was DDK got the American visa with me as the expert that he is who he says he is. Then I applied for an American visa a week later. And he said, we need evidence that you are who you say that. It's like that. Look, I get it because a different officer, and it was a guy with a different vibe who woke up on a different side of the bed, and maybe he knew what esports was. But anyway, the point is, because I was declined the first time, every time since, and I've now had 3 visas for America, every time now, because when I get to that box and it says, were you ever declined for any reason, I have to click yes, which opens up another box, and I have to explain why. And I think maybe even in the past, even send in my past application to show why it was. And the problem with this is, it's a very subtle way, as opposed to literally just getting someone when they're already in the country, of making it so that, like, think about it this way. If you had 100 people apply, and instead of letting all 100 in, you say to all 100, I need more evidence, but then even 10 don't get more evidence, then you've just cut out 10 people coming in the country. It was a very subtle way to not let people in. So the problem with this is, as you're saying, it's actually not the case that he's just applying fresh and he's going to get onto a top team and be the LCS now. Sadly, they will be looking at his history and asking, why was he turned down before? And in a way, that might actually add an impetus to turn him down now, thinking either, like it said there with the curriculum, that he hasn't met the qualifications, or sometimes they'll even think you're trying to scam him in some way.
This is the thing.
Is because you think of so many famous players that had never had any history with America and immediately got the visa because they had just the first time it worked.
And apparently, from what I was seeing, apparently it's not like he's not got the qualifications. Apparently he's got, he had like a scholarship or something within the US. He's like, his academic scores were better than his competitors within the US. I mean, this is just me reading off of comments and stuff which I've seen around because I've not seen the actual details themselves. But either way, just sucks for him because now this is just like your career, 2 years of your career where they're meant to be your rookie years. That's completely.
And I'll tell you what as well, Nymaera, since this guy isn't like the next Faker / Jensen, it's also going to put teams off even picking him up now. Unfortunately, people are very much likely to want to be the third person who tries and gets him in and he doesn't get it. So effectively, this guy's career in America probably is done now, unfortunately. Yeah,
which really sucks. But, his loss is Dhokla's gain. Dhokla probably should have had a team anyway. I'm glad that he's found one. I think that, I think he'll do fine on Leon. This guy is a guy that like plays whatever role you need of him. He can pull out the odd rumble, do some big old damage. Fantastic tank player. And I'm hoping that he definitely seems like someone who is very easy to kind of like work into any team environment because he's seen it all. The veteran seems like a cooler head. I'm hoping that will help with Inspired. Because look, any team which is trying to push with like a real superstar. And I think Inspired does count as that, like he is like the one guy that's been really pushing ahead in his role in the way that he has.
I mean, you can argue he's just the best player in the LCS, mate.
Yeah. And there's a lot of hyperbole around that. And I know like the end of his Worlds run was not great, that last Vi game or whatever, but that doesn't undo the crazy years he's had of work put into LCS. So I think that this will be fine. It's the entire thing about this team will be about their chemistry and communication anyway. And realistically, I won't be sold on this team until they've taken a loss partway through the year after they've already been through some development. That'll be the test. Because we've seen now multiple times, like teams with these big players, like if they take a loss after they've done the development arc, that's when actually a team shatters the fight.
What made that sentence so different is, I can't lie, it became less sexy. I thought you actually meant on some Thorin angle that you just want to see them take. Once? Yes, you know, so you have a bad loss, and then Inspired's like, what the fuck am I doing on this day? No, you just meant like to see if like the squad can succeed.
Oh no! In fairness, I kind of both angles are kind of fun too. Like if they get really hammered, I wonder if it just explodes because there are so many players on the team.
In light of what you said, it can go the other way too. What if in one of those heated VOD reviews, Inspired just turns to Dhokla, like, this is why I always thought Whipple was better or something, like some fucking straight fire shit like that, or Whipple would have done it, like,
that would be fantastic.
That's sick. You got to use the X, even better than digging in the needle.
Well, it's not God, and then the biggest plot twist would be they need to get a substitute midway through the year. We've got a free agent. God,
technically the best one would actually be that Inspired can't play and Whipple comes in as role swap jungler for Dhokla. That would be fucking straight. And then never got a gangster player ever or something like that,
Yeah, no, I'll cede to your view. That is the storyline.
That's a good one. But this way, I'll tie all the narratives together. If I had a dream for a wild card to come into LCS, Nymaera, then that would be it. Hey, it's all right. Don't worry. Inspired can't play Dhokla, but we've got another guy. Who is that? Fucking hell, Whipple's here. Hey, I guess I can coach you from jungle now. Oh, there you go. There you go. Tie them all together. Listen, Mark E, if you want another idea, as usual, Europe's ahead of you. We're experimenting, coming up with stuff in the kitchen, boys.
But I think realistically, this is one of the moves where like it doesn't actually move the needle that much for me. Like Duncan's a good player; he should have been there already. It's just for Zamudo. I don't think it changes that much personally.
Yes. And also, as I say, I just hate it for Inspired because it's like, maybe you wouldn't have made this decision if you didn't know this is what's going to happen. Unfortunately, it's just kind of screwed you at the end, hasn't it? So, a bit of a bomber there. Also sucks for the Leon guys because if people don't know, it seems like they actually have fucking money and they're going big this year and they're sort of all in and on league. So, I think it's a bomber when you do that because actually the worst thing that can happen in esports, unfortunately, is you spend big and then don't get the results. It's one thing if you're cynical like the SKs of the world and you never were trying to put all the budget. If you then even get like a fifth, you go fair enough. If you're the one who goes all in like a rogue tag team as in past year, it's a fucking bomber if your team sucks and you're not relevant and the star players regret being there. That's another thing. You don't have cachet as Lion yet, like you're actually a top team. So unfortunately, you almost need this roster to work so that next year's can be big name players as well and you can attract other names. So, and lastly, I'll just throw this out there. I will say, even though it sounds like there were other cases and mitigating factors with the Zamudo guy specifically, unfortunately, so many other players from all sorts of countries and backgrounds have gotten visas in the past. Since you're a fresh org to at least Western talents, it's unfortunately, this is one of the reasons also, Nymaera, why people join the Cloud9s and the Team Liquids of the world. They just always seem to get these things handled somehow. They always seem to get the paperwork done. They always seem to get everyone on the visa. Unfortunately, that is another reason why established orgs are valued more, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, that being said, even some of the big teams still miss some players for like half a split. So I even remember, didn't Cloud9 have, or Team Liquid, didn't one of the two of them have like players missing for half a split back in like 21, 22? Was it, I'm trying to remember if it was when Berserker first came over, whether he had issues getting in at first. So even the big orgs can't completely escape it. So, it makes it even worse for the teams which are a little bit further down. And it's really sad that a player's career can just be hit so much just by bureaucracy. And again, like, just bureaucracy anywhere sucks. This is not just a US only thing. Like I said, I've had my issues with it in Berlin of all places, right? But yeah, for a guy like Zamudo, I'd like to have it 2 years on the trot. Like that is most of a top tier playing career gone. Most players don't see like over 3-4 years. Let's be honest, that's half a career gone to this.
Okay, So there's actually another rare example, a bit like in some of the past episodes. I'll tell you what, they're actually setting you up with some decent topics since it's the off-season in Nymaera. We've essentially had Is League 2 coming out. So that's a pretty big fucking topic, mate. And then also things like all these region changes and format. But one of the other ones that's huge is one of the most fundamental things in the history of League of Legends is that one of the other reasons why the side you play on in the game, blue side is obviously the one on the bottom left, red side's the one on the top right. One of the reasons why that's significant is they've always in history been directly connected with, do you get the first pick or the counter pick? That's the whole point. That's why in history it's relevant whether blue or red is more important. Because what it basically says is it more valuable to have the first pick and just be able to definitely get something? Or is it more valuable to have the counter pick oftentimes at the end of the draft for like the mid or the top lane classically? So what if people don't know, they've now introduced something called first selection, where instead of it being you pick which side and then automatically blue side gets the first pick. No. Now the premise goes that you will actually get to choose, do you want to pick the side, blue or red, or do you want to be first or second in the draft? So this is give me your thoughts on this, because actually this sounds like a minor thing. This could be enormous, right?
So what this is meant to do is address the discrepancy between blue side and red side with 2025. Part of it will be fearless, part of it will just be the meta. Blue side was smashing red side, and what that often meant is that you just get full series, best of 5, best of 3s, where blue side just wins every game. That's very unsatisfying as a viewer, very unsatisfying as a team. So they're trying to minimize the difference between blue side and red side. I don't think in any world side select is going to be more important than first pick or counter pick. If you have an idea for draft, that's more important than the geography of things. There are some bonuses from choosing the side of the map. I would be very interested to know. So, for instance, it would be more impactful if you chose the geographical side after draft had ended.
Yes. Because I mean, the classic example is, do you want to be the first to move to Dragon? Things like that, right?
Exactly.
Gank paths.
Yeah, so blue side.
Without knowing, as you say, without knowing what the draft is yet, how can I really know if I want that or not?
Yeah, because then you'd have to choose the side and then draft appropriately for that. So actually, both teams still have that information. Maybe you have specific plans with geography, but typically blue side fights grubs better because the enemy team has their back to a wall. Same thing for red side around Dragon. Funnily enough, I did a segment on this on the LEC broadcast. It was great. That's what you get from having broadcast talent. The broadcast background, but stuff like Misfortune on red side.
Actually, you weren't first selection for LEC.
Damn! I should have chosen that one instead.
It's all right. It's all good.
But stuff like Misfortune has a better Baron contest on red side because she can stand over the back of Baron pit and just wave down the Baron with the ultimate. Poppy's better on blue side, massively on blue side because she's very good at the level 3 mark, and then you fight around grubs and wall stuns are easy. Whatever. There are a ton of different angles for Maokai on different sides of the map too. If you have specific geographical plans, there will be some bonuses. And I was actually talking to some people involved in an LEC team, and they were saying that they've been running statistical analysis to see differences for champion win rate and impact on different sides of the map. So teams have been investigating this. I don't trust teams to make use of the geographical advantage, because there have been plenty of ways that you can exploit the game in many random ways for many years. Not really happened. It's nice to have maybe a little percentage shaved off of the difference between red side and blue side. I don't think it's going to be that crazy. But actually, if it is impactful, that actually brings up another conversation. I saw a tweet from Orcs, which I'd actually like to get your opinion on this one, because
LCK analyst here.
Yeah, so what Orcs was saying was, if this does bring the discrepancy down between red side and blue side, doesn't that eliminate the winner's advantage of going through the upper bracket? And at that point, should you have best of 7 1-game advantage?
You need something else to give them an advantage.
Have something else. What do you do at that point? Discuss.
No, that is very valid, because one of the problems that has happened in League of Legends, by the way, this is one of Monty's biggest bugbears / pet peeves, is you can always tell someone who hasn't watched enough double elimination tournaments because they're still stuck on the most basic bitch. But wait a minute. What, the guy who's from the winners bracket doesn't get 2 lives. Like, what the reason why I say you haven't watched enough tournaments is you just eventually learn. Yes, ideologically that is impure, but in practical terms, it just works better. Unfortunately, if the final is the final and there isn't like a bracket reset. I'm sorry, I've watched a lot of tournaments that had bracket resets back in the day in Counter-Strike and other games. I've also seen a lot of tournaments like Dota where you just do a final. But you also do want it to be that there is some additional added advantage to coming from the winners bracket. The problem is in history, giving you a game actually also ruins the excitement. It means you can end a series 2-2 or 3-3 and it's like, well, wait a minute, isn't it a draw? No, you win because you've got an imaginary. So unfortunately, what people try to do is like this. You give someone something that's, I've always put it this way. The reason why I like the compromise of something like you get extra bans or you get to pick a side is because it doesn't actually win you the game. It just gives you an advantage. That means if I am better than you from the low bracket, I can still beat you and still win 3-0 and win the final. But at the same time, I don't think you should get nothing for coming from a bracket, but this makes it tricky. I agree. Maybe this makes that not even an advantage anymore, in which case we have to figure out a new advantage for that team, right?
Yeah, and playing a full best of 5 does take, it's about an hour per game with breaks either side, right? So if you have a 5-game series, which then goes to a bracket reset because the lower bracket team won, you're then, playing another series or extra games or whatever.
Yes.
If you end up saying best of 5, losing lower bracket team wins, and you do another best of 5, that could potentially be like a 10-hour day. Like, for 2 teams playing that, that's not real. You can't do that, really.
And by the way, if you have that format, eventually you will have the nightmare day where that happens, and it'll actually ruin the tournament, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it only has to happen once for people to realize, oh, bloody hell, that's really crap. This is the problem when you're playing very lengthy games like that. For something like an FGC, a fighting game, games are short enough that it doesn't matter.
Yes.
All it does is add on extra, well, I don't know, what would it be, like a 3-stock finals or whatever. It's not crazy amounts of time, not especially compared to team-wide MOBAs, tac shooters, where you actually need those timeouts or break between games for strategy and stuff. You don't need that as much for a fighting game or one-on-one kind of games like that. But it does raise some interesting questions.
By the way, there's another aspect as well. It'll be even longer than just 10 games, Nymaera, because I can tell you another problem is when you have best of 5s, you tend to get a break after game 3 so people can eat food, for example. You'd have to have 2 food breaks in that one, bro. That would be like an hour and a half extra on top of it would actually get unmanageable, because basically in this analogy...
You don't want a League of Legends Worlds halftime show? You don't want that? Don't you see the angle?
And think about this. The other problem you'd have would be, for this to work, you'd have to start the game at like 10 a.m. local time.
Yes.
Well, that means when it is just a 3-0 for the winner bracket team, we're done at like lunchtime. But on the nightmare fuel with the lower bracket team, we're at like midnight. And it's like the difference between going to watch the game can't be, does it end at midday or midnight 12 hours later? Like, that's not 10 or 4. This is one thing people have to appreciate about esports, is while esports doesn't have massive amounts of profit, we have to maximize for the broadcast, unfortunately, because that's where all the revenue comes from. So even though it might be better for sometimes players or fans or purists to have certain setups, it just doesn't. Like, I'll give you an example. We have a similar thing happening in Counter-Strike, bro, which is in Counter-Strike for the major, we do have a quarterfinals, so 4 matches, and we play them all on one day. And the reason why is because that's just best for the viewership. Now, look, for the players, the best would actually be that you played 2 quarterfinals on 2 streams. So you'd have essentially 2 matches, but on 2 separate streams, and it'd be like the same amount of length of time. The problem is that's not as good for the viewership. You just cut the viewership in half and it just fucks your tournament. So it's an example of where I appreciate why people want the more extreme one, but it's not as practical, unfortunately. And in this case, for the finals, it would be completely impractical. So I know what you mean. This is actually something which, put it this way, put a pin in that one. Let's see when something like MSI comes, because I agree, that could actually end up being more consequential, specifically for a finals advantage than people realise. Because I actually thought for past years, that was a pretty fair advantage. Like I said, it's not too insane that you've won the game, but it does give you like an edge that you've earned.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be said. At the end of the day, I don't want to see blue side dominant series where it's just all 5 games somewhat determined by champion select. That feels pretty shit. I also think there needs to be, particularly in a double elimination, you do need to have some kind of advantage for the upper bracket. And if that suddenly isn't really the case, and actually the day off is kind of inconsequential, then there might need to be something readdressed with that. But then again, as we talked about in last episode, this is the split where it's meant to be experimental. It wouldn't surprise me if this change didn't make it through to the rest of the year.
Oh, right. So it won't be like Fearless. You think this one will be like not as great an uptake, and it'll be cancelled?
I think this will be, because also the other thing too is that it's just viewers who've watched the game for such a long time, it's going to be a bit jarring for them. I'm not sure it's going to be very yeah, it's not going to be very easy for them to understand what's happening on it. I suppose graphically is graphically, but it'll just have that little bit of a cognitive disconnect that way. And I just don't think maybe they will keep it. I don't think it's going to make a big enough change for them to implement it everywhere. I think this one might stay on the chopping room floor.
So, as a general rule, I did think that it was quite a good approach where, like, the loser picks the next side and stuff as a way to, like, a rubber band mechanic. I thought that was quite a reasonable one. And then also, similarly, the other problem that this undoes is one thing you have to actually give mad credit to people like LS is they have done so much work helping fans understand the meta of the drafting phase. Like, a lot of that will go out the window, unfortunately, if this is implemented widespread.
You'll have to change the terminology around, because red one, R1, B1, R5, whatever, that's just it's just become part of our consciousness at this point.
Yes.
I'm actually not sure how that's referred to in other languages. I mean, we talked about that on a previous episode as well, actually. The language in which you speak around your game will have very different culture around it. So if anyone has any insight onto that,
let us know.
Guess let us know somehow or other, because that's actually something which I'm quite interested in. I can see the benefits of it. I wonder if it'll be a little bit too murky to sell to the casual audience who, blue side, even on your draft games and rank games, their blue side is first pick, right? I wonder whether that will be a little bit weird. I'm not sold on it either way, really. This is one thing which actually, yeah, sure, whatever. This is an experimental split. Chuck it in, see if it works.
By the way, speaking of cultural differences, this next one just makes me laugh. Now, there's a story where Sheep Esports, the information is that Ruler has been fined 800,000 Korean won, which is only 466 euros, by the way, because they have an insane currency like that. He's been fined by the LCK. Now, listen, I'll just read it the way it said. For in-game verbal abuse. Now, that sounds like, holy fuck, what is he saying? He must have been saying the craziest shit ever. And then you look, it says he was first warned after receiving chat and game restrictions in March 2025. And then the same offence was found in October when he received a 7-day chat restriction for verbal abuse. Now, I will say, if you go into the threads and read, it sounds like it's way less like extreme than this, and it's more of like a Korean, like we have a very strict culture of what you can do and say. Because basically it was implied that one of these offences was even when he was playing a game like for funsies with other fucking pros.
It was an arena game.
Yeah. And what happened was he meant to like type to his team something like spicy, but then he accidentally all chatted it, and then he supposedly even told people, please don't report me as an accident. But because it's Korea, they were like, too late, bitch, reported. Because they're on some like fucking East Germany shit with it. Too late, reported. So he's reported. So anyway, by the way,
profanity spotted. Profanity spotted.
One is this is where Korea and Asia in general is very different from the West. I mean, in the West, we have pro players that have said some mad out of pocket. The joke would be surely even just the shit that like what was his name, fucking Jizuki and APA used to type in all chat alone. By this logic, would get you fined all the time. Then also, as if to show the cultural difference, what makes me laugh is I understand comments also now are based on the algorithm. Because why the fuck wouldn't you follow him on Twitter? I obviously follow Kazi, and for me, Kazi is the top reply, just saying, what a beast. Which just cracks me up. So anyway,
I love
listen,
that guy.
I'll set the tone on this one. I don't feel like this is that extreme. What do you think about this? What do you think about this move where Ruler shockingly handed down a little fine? What do you think?
Well, if they're applying it consistently, is what it is. It's the consistency which is key. As long as you know the rules of the game which you're playing, whatever. I understand that in Korean solo queue, like profanity and harsh language is more harshly treated. I remember, there's definitely sometimes it's not consistently applied because, so for instance, some people who go from abroad to play on the Korean server, they get treated very harshly when they say certain things. Particularly, apparently, if you type kind of profanities in English, that's seen as like a level above. I don't really know the reason for that, but I think it was like, I can't remember if it was some like Cowsep or someone like that, which ended up getting penalized very heavily on an account for that. There's definitely been some culture around that, but I don't have the receipts with me to like definitively say what that is. But end of the day, if it's consistently in there, whatever, it's pocket change for Ruler. whatever, it's a funny story. And it's just quite funny now. We can walk onto the Rift like sanctioned criminal in the LCK.
Oh, and even that phrasing, verbal abuse. That sounds so crazy at the outset, doesn't it? I know, it's nuts.
Because the thing is, like, Ruler is such a teddy bear too. Like, this guy is like such a sweetheart. It was so fun. Like, there was just the week before, you know, like the role tournament we were talking about before. So there was a post game or like a pre-game interview at LOL Park where they had like Ruler and Faker, and they were just doing some banter back and forth. And like Ruler was like, "Oh, Faker, what do you make of like my military haircut?" And it's like, it could look better. It's like, I'm gonna sue you. And like, yeah.
It looked like, is everything look good at home? Yeah. Chovy, this looks bad, mate. Like, what the fuck?
Like they were doing like some playful banter where Faker was like, "Yeah, it looks bad," and he was like, "I'm gonna sue the hell out of you." He was like, "Oh, I apologize." Yeah, like there's like little moments like that. But I just honestly, the most funny thing is that people can now just refer to him as like someone who's had a sanction against him like that. Fine, that's the only thing I can think of, which is like to take away from this whatever.
And also, by the way, the one thing I will point out about that tournament is it also low-key actually did give you the fucking cock tease of what we'll never get now. We've all got blue balls. Because as everyone, by the way, this is where even Faker fans low-key do know Chovy is sick. Yeah. You know, there are Faker fans who've pointed out, if Chovy wants to win Worlds, just roll swap to top bro and then come and play with Faker and you can win them all. And obviously, by the way, if you haven't noticed, one, if you actually look at the history of how Chovy's played League of Legends until the last couple of years, he was always more like the fucking loner top laner who never talks, just does what he wants anyway. And then two, he is actually absurdly talented at League of Legends. Like, as you can see, he would be a pretty fucking sick top laner.
Faker had an interview. He was chatting with him, so what do you think about top lane? And Trevor's like, I haven't played it for a while. I'd really like to keep playing mid. But Faker's like, yeah, no, you're great at listening to orders. I think you'd be a great top player. Like he's doing a little bit of his own like perks impression. Exactly. Just the fake pool party. Yeah. Maybe he's learning from our goat perks of team management.
Yeah, but like he's even doing it even dirtier than perks. At least perks was like, how about you can have mid and I'll play DC. Faker's like, have you ever thought about top lane? Tell you what, that Zamudo when he did that role swap was pretty cool. I've always suspected that. Yeah. Of course, mid lane's mad bitch. Get off that. Like I love it.
I think you'd be really good in this role. What do you think?
And by the way, I even know what T1 fans are like. If that move ever happened and Chovy joined T1 and then they won like a bunch of worlds, these motherfuckers would go, see, Chovy is the GOAT top laner. They just do that.
Well, little rats. AD carry as well. Like Chovy, he had that one
kind of mechanics role he would smurf bro.
He'll do anything, man. Like that's the special thing. And like obviously Faker has a lot of respect for him wherever he is on the map. Part of me just wants to see that happen so we could get, you know how LCK actually still does put a lot of effort into the skits that it does. I need like a proper like mob boss sketch from Faker in terms of like, so here's the deal, my boys are going to come do some work out the back of your shop, but it's fine because I'm going to get you in as a top lane and make these kind of backroom deals that'll be so funny.
Also, if you actually were to do a real role swap, the most obvious one, by the way, is in like 2 years, Faker just becomes the jungler and then Chovy's his mid lane. That would also bang like a motherfucker, by the way. Surely, if anyone, logically, think about the great role swaps to support. If anyone knows what a mid laner needs, surely it's Faker. We all joke that. It feels like in the 2010s he jungled for himself anyway, as well as being the secret coach.
One of my favorite Faker stories was how Faker would terrorize Captain Jack in solo queue. Because this was back when you would call out your role and you'd have to type it out like mid. And then, you'd type out mid or whatever. Then you'd see Captain Jack in his lobby and he goes, support. And Captain Jack just goes, oh God, no. And you'd lock in like Alistair or Blitzcrank and just genuinely run down Captain Jack. Like he would just like play the craziest plays. Like it's not really inting, but it's kind of like, he's doing it just to make Captain Jack upset. It's just one of my favorite little, because this was back when people had this whole like Faker as a robot kind of identity, and just as solo queue, this guy was like a gremlin. His just friendship with Captain Jack was just one of the weirdest things. This other guy that came up as the same kind of era of him as a pro player. Anytime they walked into solo queue, Captain Jack's like, I'd really like to not play with your Blitzcrank for once, Mr. Faker. But at least he's been practicing the role.
Now, there was actually a bigger topic that we've referred to many times on this show in the past, because I think it was something like, it was sometime, I think in 2024, when Arnold from Gen G, who, if you remember, this was when Gen G was in their peak, winning all the tournaments and was perceived as a giant team, aside from T1, people would have figured they were the biggest Korean team. Even they pointed out way back when there were things like salary caps and all these sorts of things were being introduced, that financially, like LCK is not in a good space either, which, by the way, is significant because LCK has amazing viewership and wins worlds and does all the the things that we would hope in the game are the markers that out of the game yield big success and interest from sponsors, etc. And he basically pointed this out. Well, similarly, T1's head of business development, Park Hyung-jun, says only a handful of teams are currently profitable. Now, I'll go even further than that. I actually would suspect practically no teams are. Like, if I had to guess, like when he says some teams, you're immediately as a fan going to make the wrong assumption, which is that must be the successful ones. No. I can tell you from games like Counter-Strike, if there's any teams profitable, it's probably one in the middle of the pack, mid-maxing basically, where they have like not very expensive players, don't need a massive facility, maybe you don't even do international boot camps, and then they've just gotten players that have overperformed and don't like I'll give you a joke. I would imagine it would be more like a Fear X could have a chance to be profitable, not a Gen G, a T1, a KT1. These are the teams paying the giant salaries, remember, the millions of dollars. They've got giant facilities in fairly reasonable places in Seoul that are expensive. They sometimes have it where, like, you know, there's one floor where you live, then another floor is where the game takes. These teams are really spending. So I don't think. But the reason why this is significant is this was even broken down into all the areas, bro. Like, it broke down how sponsorships work, what the costs are, limitations on the IP. Obviously, the problem, if you think about games like League, is you can't just make your own T1 skin line. Riot has to be involved with that because they get their car. The joke is in that analogy, Riot's the gangster, mate. You have to come and ask them the fucking favour on their daughter's wedding day and hope they give you the extra skin or the legendary capsule or whatever the fuck.
And wake up to a Hecarim head on your bed.
Yeah. So the point is, there was also even, by the way, a direct allusion to the fact that obviously in things like football, and obviously Koreans know fuck tons about baseball, it's different in those sports too. Basically, this was just another chapter in the book of, because if you don't know why this is being done publicly, this was done at the 2025 Esports Forum Talk Concert. What this is part of this. The reason you do it publicly is not just to talk to the industry and say we've got a problem. This is also a way of almost saying, like, Riot, remember those emails I sent you that I didn't get a significant response to? I'm just going to start saying it all publicly now. So you eventually either enters the consciousness of the people, like, oh, you have to address it. Because as I say, of all the regions, this is the thing a lot of fans didn't know about the LPL. We talked about on past episodes. A lot of regions are hurting in ways that aren't obvious because you see how good the teams are, you see how great the teams are, you see how great the rosters are. But this is another case where if T1 is saying there's an issue, there's a very minimum, there are some clear things behind the scenes that, like, probably have to change.
Well, Arnold was saying that other teams were approaching him saying, can we sell our team to you? And reminder, this guy isn't just from League. This is across all esports. Reminder, I think this guy is because T1, they're active in Valorant, they're active in a handful of different esports. Yep. And yeah, you know, it feels like the more we do these shows, the more we have topics about economic stuff. And I know it's not gameplay stuff and whatever, but it will directly impact that eventually, folks, because, you know, teams won't be able to field the rosters that they want to. And you're absolutely right. Typically, the teams which are more profitable are the ones which sell on players for higher rates. You know, Mad Lions were actually pretty good for a while because they sold on players like Kazi and Humanoid and
they even tried to sell Alioya, remember? They were going to sell him for like $1 million or whatever. So
and if you think about it from a business standpoint, you'd be pretty stupid not to look, right? And see what the number is. And the only team I can remember posting net positive in the last few years was G2 Esports when they sold off a bunch of crypto, I think it was. I think that was like the one time where they sold off because they had this basically this nest egg effectively of stuff which had peaked, so they sold off some crypto. And that worked.
And as far as I know, most times when Western teams say they're profitable, they've done some like accounting shenanigans where they put some of the costs into a different business that isn't technically that. There's often a lot of that as well. Or another example will be
the company.
Another one. Another example will be you're saying you're profitable, so people associate it with League in the case of G2 or Fnatic. But then secretly, what's making you profitable is some game like, I don't know, Rocket League gives a better share of the in-game items or something. And what you're really doing is, by the way, it's actually the trick TSM did for many years. Which is why TSM was getting those outrageous valuations in Forbes magazine, etc. What was really happening was TSM's profitability came from having a giant guides website that everyone went to. It wasn't the bloody team with Bjergsen and Doublelift. That was losing them money, obviously, still paying the giant salaries. The way the guy phrased it here, I think, is very telling. It combines it all. He says, only a handful of teams are currently profitable, but profitability is not impossible. Listen to this second sentence. It gives the whole game away. It says, still, high high player salaries and content production costs have locked teams into a high cost structure. The pressure to deliver short-term results is immense. In the long run, teams must move beyond sponsorship dependency and establish B2C based revenue models, right? What those latter sentences are basically saying there, since he is T1, is when I have to compete against Genji and Hanwha Life and we're all bidding like motherfuckers for these players, that means that even though in the short term, if I get the player, I win in the game, it costs us all because we're all driving all of our salaries up and we're making it really expensive to be so good at the end. That's why he says about short-term results, because he understands fans want you to win that next split, want you to win the Worlds, etc. So it's why in the short term, especially if you're a T1, you'll always try and keep the same roster if you win Worlds because you want to win the next Worlds. But in doing so, as you saw with Zeus, as you might have seen with Gumayushi, they're going to ask for more money because of the pressure of the other teams. So essentially, what another thing they're doing, this is why I say he's saying it to Riot as well as just the industry, bro. He's almost saying, like, we need more things like salary caps and things like that, and we need you to directly give us an injection of, like, ability to make items and things that the fans pay directly for, because otherwise, like, essentially, what's the alternative? Well, if what he's saying is what costs you it, the alternative is I don't go for short-term results, I don't spend as much on salaries, and I have to cut back, which obviously no one wants to do, because, like I say, these big orgs are locked in an arms race to try and win in the game.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, Valorant gives way more money from actual cosmetic bundles than League of Legends does. And I think what will also come into this, prize pools have now gone from most regions too as well, right? So LCS, LEC, LCK, I believe their prize pools are gone. You don't get anything more for placing better regionally, which that really throws a spanner in the works in terms of doing better in the short-term results, I suppose. Suppose it means that there's less incentive to do better as a mid-table team who could push for an extra spot. You always want results, right? But I know, for instance, in some small regions, obviously, prize pools will end up paying the salaries effectively. In Vietnam, there were some teams which, unless they won the split, they actually couldn't play their players. This is a very different level. These are the major regions. I'd be very interested to know what the teams think about this. Were they part of these discussions? I believe the language of it was these prize pools are going away to give to basically work into more sustainable.
They implied they'd take that money and put it in like tier 2 tournaments or something, or something like in the RLs. I think it was implied, right?
Something like that, yeah. But I'd be very interested to hear from a team side, because this hasn't been directly referenced here, but I'd be interested to see how that affects decision making of top teams, mid-table teams, which could be pushing for that as well. But as you're talking about, in-game cosmetics and kind of problems with the IP limitations because you can't make your own skin and selling it, this is one of the other reasons why I'd be very supportive of releasing stuff like MSI skins. I think having a cosmetic for MSI, even if it was just the MVP skin for one player from that, having another kind of revenue stream directly to esports teams would be really big for that. In another way, it also immortalizes the event a little better, because I think one of the reasons why Worlds is held on such a pedestal is that it's the only thing from esports really which has in-game tangibility. There are some icons and some emotes, but
I'll give you an example, Nymaera, though, of where this is why I think this is a message to Riot of everyone, not just like the industry and those and the plebs like us just listening from the peanut gallery. Because I'll give you a very quick example, and I'll actually use Counter-Strike to make the point, and you'll very quickly see what I'm saying. So in Counter-Strike, a lot of people might not know that when Valve held the first official major in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, it was in 2013 in around like the autumn, and when they announced the first major, they actually put in a crowdfunding element. What they did was, cause in Counter-Strike you have cases that you get the case as a drop, and then you buy a key that opens the case, and then it has a Pokemon cards pack. It has a chance of being something awesome or something like good. In fact, it even has a really good system in CS, doesn't it, where it does like a little, like a fucking spinning thing that goes like a roulette style table and stops on the thing or just past it. So quite a cool dynamic. When they put that in the game, at the first major, there was a special case called the Esports case, and their perception was this is going to be our version of like the Dota compendium. If people buy loads of these cases, then maybe, we'll pump the prize money up for the tournament and there'll be more cases. And what happened was, this is something I found out through Semler, who was one of the top guys who used to talk to Valve back then. He basically told me that the problem was they discovered that you didn't make significantly more from the esports case than from any case. So unfortunately, this is where there's a conflict of interest if you're the game developer versus the game developer who runs an esports ecosystem. The thinking for Valve went like this. Well, why would I give you a cut if I don't get any more anyway? All I'm doing is giving you a cut of my money. Why don't I just make a totally separate case? I'll make all the profit and you fucking figure out your own shit, mate. Like, you just play in the tournament, dickhead. So unfortunately, that's why they're stressing that you have to have these other ways in, because unfortunately, the logic goes like this. Even though, yes, I think for someone like Faker or an Uzi, I could believe there's enough rabid fans that that'll give you a little spike. The problem is, if we do what I would suggest, which is like you're saying, if we think just from the esports ecosystem, bro, I would go all out. I'd have like whatever the last winning game of a split is of LCK. All those champions are a skin, and it's even a cool thing that you can have in your career. A bit like having the game ball in basketball. Where you could also have where it's like, as you say, the winner of MSI gets the skins to give that status as well. The problem if you're Riot is, though, again, because Riot will never reveal how much they make from esports interest or general skins anyway, does Riot make more just making a skin that has nothing to do with esports and they make all the money from it? That's the problem. So unfortunately, it's why these teams, if you notice, who were in the franchise leagues, one of the things that pisses them off, unfortunately, is Riot simultaneously is like the person overseeing a sports league, but then they're also running a complementary product where they can get none of their profit into the sports league, and no one's really sure how much each of the products affect each other and where the leverage points are. And so unfortunately, it's why I actually think you'll keep seeing this happening. Different people on different levels of these big orgs, COOs, CEOs, owners, will make comments that are like this, where it always comes back to give us more digital items. Because as you say, the reason why people are quite happy with Valorant, though, is Valorant, first of all, didn't have the franchise fee. It was a partnership system where they actually give you stuff to be in the league. And then secondly, it seems like they've done a much better job of doing skins and in-game aspects and icons and stuff. Whereas in League, to this day, bro, they've still been pretty stingy. Like, you had the icon for a long time. That was all you had. Then you had the world skins. And it's only in the last few years they've even done these big legacy skins. Like, they've actually, considering how long the game's been out, they haven't done a whole lot of sort of esports monetization. So I can totally see why, if you're these teams, you feel like, just please unlock that stream for us. Let us get in on this, basically.
I wonder whether League Next will make it easier to add in-game items in, because one of the problems is it's just really hard to add stuff into the game comparative to other big games of the moment, just because it's just an old system with a ton of architecture that you need to pass. I wonder whether when the new revamp, whenever that comes out, whether that will help a little bit. But yeah, interesting to see someone openly state these things so definitively, actually. These are quite objective things in there. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, esports is meant to market for the game itself. If it's doing a good job of marketing, presumably some of that marketing money should go back to it. And that goes for the entire esports ecosystem, because
even though I don't have any data to know that, bro, I will just say, as someone who's been in the industry a long time, I don't believe they would do League Next if League wasn't that big a game from the esports side, bro. I think what you'd do is let League slowly go out to pasture, and you'd move to Valorant and TFT and the fighting game.
I think Valorant's slowed down now is the thing.
There's another thing. I also think the off-ramps haven't done what they hoped. They haven't become another League. So the joke is, let's go back to League and revamp that. Yep. Not a bad idea, but it does imply to me what Riot will never admit, which is, I do think by the way, I also think it's the only reason Counter-Strike exists as a major game. If you had to judge Counter-Strike purely as an FPS, people would play the new games, Hellraiser, Helldivers, fucking Arc Raven, Call of Duty. Stuff, yeah, what keeps people in on the game is that you have this esports component that is very easy to quickly reconnect with and get interested around the majors, around the big. It has to be the same with League. I mean, pretty sweet. I'll even say myself, bro, I don't generally really play much League, but I'm way more likely to play a League game if I've just watched carry a fucking LCK final. I'm just way more likely to fire it up, aren't I? Even though the joke is 10 minutes in, I'll realise, oh wait, I was just enjoying watching Carrier play League, not me play that champion, you know.
I made the mistake of like I pretty much only play like Arena and like the random odd games they do now. I just can't bring myself to try hard a game which I watched like thousands of hours of every year. It's just too much over the top at that point. I care for the games that they randomly release. Like they released like a Balatro-like game in the client a couple of months ago. They just released like a weird kind of civilization management game in the client too. I'm all for that shit. I'm there for ARAM Mayhem. I'm glad they kept that, by the way, because they were going to sunset that and like bring it back at a later date. Like I'm glad they kept that. But I wouldn't be engaged with any of this stuff if League just hadn't become a bit of a lifestyle for me. And it is one of the things about League is that it just kind of keeps you there, even just a small amount, even if you just play an ARAM every other week or whatever. And then when you do see someone play a skin on World's Finals, maybe you're more incentivized to buy that. And for instance, one thing which LPL has been doing for a long time is players who gain a Player of the Week award in each of their roles and then the overall player, one of the skins which they use will be on a discount. And we saw for the World's Finals as well, skins which they use in the finals will be at a discount. Funnily enough, one of the vaulted skins, Pax Sivir, which is never meant to be available again, that was played and they actually said, yeah, we can't do that. We're not breaking our rule for that one.
Yeah.
But they do add discounts in for stuff like that, which is a nice little bonus too. So, that actually had some incentives of, damn, I really want like this Twisted Fate skin or whatever. I really hope the team that's playing it wins with that one, right? They've been trying to add in little bits of incentives for that too, which I think is that's actually quite nice.
I'll give you another angle, because if I'm trying to, I also do like to do the thing where if you say something's bad, you should come with a solution. If you don't have a solution, maybe there isn't a solution. So I'll give you an example of the sort of thing I think you could do that wouldn't too massively impact Riot's bottom line. I would like it if they did more things with teams, like they share things that don't cost you money. Like, for example, they give you like coupons that check out as RP, or they give you a one-off skin that's like not a super rare one like that, but one that's just a cool one that doesn't normally exist. And then what you can do as a team is you can then use that for your activation. So say I have a watch party, like I'll give you an example. Say I'm Karmi Corp and we didn't make it to Worlds, but I'm going to do a watch party in France where loads of people are going to come. If you come to the watch party, obviously I'm going to make you buy a ticket for that. You maybe get like a little bit of RP, or you get like a one-off KC icon that goes, again, nothing massive and monumental that cost Riot, but just one of those things where it's like you're just greasing the wheels a little bit. You're just making it a bit nicer to be someone who engages with the product and becomes a fan in that way. Yeah, that's the sort of thing I would like. Because essentially, the other thing, like I was alluded to earlier, is I get that Riot as a games company, listen, giant companies like that, and remember, they're owned by a fucking enormous mega corp from China. They care very much on some 80s shit about like the bottom line and what the Excel sheet says at the bottom, and they're trying to shave fucking expenses off that. But at the same time, when you are partners with people in a franchise league, you got to show some goodwill towards your partner and help them succeed too. At the end of the day, we want everyone to succeed, so we all rise with the tide.
Yeah, and I think League, particularly when you look at stuff like Legends of Runeterra didn't really do what they wanted to. The Riot Forge with the mini games didn't work out the way that they wanted to either. The card game's doing well for themselves, actually, Riftbound, but that's just not on the same scale, and it's very, very different from the game itself, right? The one thing which has been the huge success story is TFT. TFT is mad large, and we talked about this a little bit in previous episodes too, but even then, the TFT is big as a game, not necessarily as an esports. So if they're going to focus on something esports, it is really League, and it is an absolute lightning in a bottle League. You're never going to get League again, realistically. Even all the things which have been quoted as League killers, they realistically have come and gone now at this point. Which makes me sad that, it feels like League has been on a bit of maintenance mode. We'll see what happens with League next. I hope that kicks it back into gear. But particularly the esports scene, I don't want to see it kind of slowly degrade and, co-streaming, chipping away at the broadcast for short-term viewership and whatever. I do want to see a healthy esports scene because obviously it's brought us together, people watching this or whatever. And it's very rare to have something last this long at this scale.
I'll add in two other details as well. This is going to be completely useless to anyone without a time machine, but it's relevant for the discussion.
Oh, I'll let you know when I have mine then, yeah.
One is that, look, the horse has already bolted. There's no point me telling you close the door and fucking put a lock on it. But you should have done that many, many years ago. If people don't know, one of the reasons why, because this happened during the LCS walkout, and I saw a lot of pro players and fans saying this, and it was one of the stupidest things I've ever seen, because it means you never even looked into the topic. They were all like, we should just have a salary cap, right? You legally can't do that, because the reason salary caps exist in pro sports is they actually have an agreement with the players, because otherwise, if you don't know, a salary cap is just called price fixing. It's literally illegal. That's called a cartel, where we all get together and go, hey, my girls in my matchstick factory work for 10 cents on a dollar. If we all agree to do 5 cents and no one gives them more, then we all save money. That's why that's illegal, because otherwise then the big fucking powerful people crush the worker. So instead what you do is the workers have to have a union that they're all part of, where they collectively can bargain with you, which is what happens in pro sports. If you don't know, in the NBA, the reason why they sometimes have a lockout is they're just arguing over like 0.5% of the revenue for the league. Do the players get more? Do the owners get more? And it's a back and forth. And actually, I'll tell you what's interesting. Fans wouldn't know this, but because owners do want salary caps, owners, despite what you might imagine from what I just said about the example of the matchsticks girls, owners want unions for this reason, so they have a person they can negotiate with, set standards was. And in this case, you can then do things like, look, we're bleeding money paying you guys this arms race of salaries. How about we'll put a cap, but then, for example, maybe you get a small percentage of the revenue more, or you get access to more of the skin. There'd be a way that the back, because it'd be a negotiation. Unfortunately, you should have done that years ago. I'm talking 10 years ago, because in the meantime, people quite literally spent hundreds of millions of dollars on salary that was never necessary, because, as I say, it was an arms race. Like, essentially,
thank God, Immortals 2016.
If we'd all have known how much we were all going to spend more, we all should have found a way to just be more reasonable, and we could have had the exact same players on the exact same teams with the exact same results. We just wouldn't have spent $200 million more, or in the case of people like JDG, God only knows how much more, because that's one roster is insane, that $18 million one. So that's already nuts. Then the other thing is, simultaneously to we should have plugged some of the leaks in the ship, we also needed more streams of income coming in 10 years ago. Like, the dumbest thing of all is this. If I'm now arguing, please give me these skins, bro, I'm just thinking of the what if. I'm thinking, if you're on the LCS, mate, how much would those Bjergsen and double of skins have sold 10 years ago? Yes. I'm thinking, if you'd have had Faker, but it wasn't just a world skin he's getting, if I could buy, like, the Faker LeBlanc skin when he was fucking unbeaten on it, that would sell so many. If I could buy the Uzi Vayne skin, that would already have sold so many. That's the other problem is, these aren't ideas that were just invented now. They're just only being implemented now because we're all bleeding out in some triage without the big VC money coming in. So everyone's scared. So unfortunately, we could also have just had a much healthier system in the past.
You can compare that to one of the bigger games that came up after League was just hitting its peak was Fortnite. And Fortnite was so much better at monetizing than League. You know, you saw...
Oh, think about all the events they do and everything. Yeah, they do some awesome shit.
All of the actual physical merch as well. I actually think physical merch is something that League completely bombed out on. I mean... They basically
in the early days, if you remember, everyone loved that Timo hat. They never
released it.
I'll tell you another crazy one. I've always pointed out the Arcane. The idea they didn't directly connect Arcane in the game is mental to me. But also, similarly, bro, you could even have used that to do this. You could generate physical items that people want to buy of the characters. Yeah,
I'm like, as much as I hate Funko Pops, like Fortnite made a billion of them of everything. You could do whatever you want, but if you released that stuff during like 2014 when it was biggest esport in the world by far and it was peaking, 2014, 2015.
I want to know, where is the Carrier Labubu? Where is it? I might even buy that. I wouldn't really like.
I have the one of a kind 25,000 carat Carrier Labubu.
Listen, that'd be a banger, bro. That would be straight fire.
There's a tough competition, but I think that might be the most
and by the way,
ever uttered on this show.
A lot of fucking fangirls would buy that Labubu, though. You know that,
they actually
bro.
would.
You know
That's the worst fucking thing.
I know.
This is on like the shortlist for the most cursed things you've ever said on this vaunted sacred show.
It would actually bang.
And yet it's still a legitimate thing to be said. God, what a world we live in. But just, there are so many avenues where you just look at contemporary games where I think at the time League thought it was too good for them. I think it thought that it was above them back in like 2014, and there just wasn't enough done at that point. I mean, like, I've got a whole shelf of like random merch. I've spent far too. I'm sitting on a goddamn Ari chair. Like, you know, I've spent that merch. Plenty of people would have spent that money on various knickknacks over such a long time. Just do it 10 years ago. Just do it 10 years ago.
Indeed. Well, speaking of doing things you should have done a long time ago, you know what? A lot of you out there stink. Do you know why? Because we all stink. Your body sweats as a way to regulate heat. But you know what? Mando, our sponsor, can help you with that. Because the wonderful thing about Mando, if you don't know, is their whole mission of their company and the philosophy behind it is, we've all in our lives naively made a direct, get ready guys, correlation isn't causation. We've all assumed because we sweat, that's why we smell, right? When you sweat, that's what gives you body odor, doesn't it? No, it turns out body odor actually comes from like bacteria eating the sweat that you produce just because you're naturally hot. And then the byproduct of the bacteria is this body odor, is the smell. It's actually why, as a weird detail for people who don't know, actually Koreans specifically don't have the same body odor that Europeans do. I always used to wonder, bro, when I used to live there in the summers, because the weird thing about Seoul is the summers are really hot, like sweltering, and then the winters are really cold. And when I would be in the summer, because I'm European, it would take me weeks, but when I would go there before like my sweat glands would adapt. But I would be seeing a guy crossing the road like a salaryman with like a three-piece suit on in the middle of the, and I'd be like, how is this guy not just drenched from head to foot like on some Squid Game shit? But that wasn't happening because actually they have different enzymes. And so anyway, the point is, it's not only a cultural thing, but specifically the culture of gamers. We're all indoors, as I've said on past episodes. When you play a ranked game, you get that little, you heat up a little bit, you're activated in the game, you do the lean forwards like the meme with the fucking video game controller for the console when your little brother's up 1-0 in FIFA and he says, let's go the win. Like, you know, we all know that one. So we're all activated. We're all trying to win that Pro War game to prove that we're not a worthless piece of shit. We invested 8 years into this game and we will one day be Diamond. I promise it to the end of times. I will be the Hapgood of fucking League of Legends in Diamond one day. We all want that, but the problem is, in doing so, you're not going to have time to take care of your hygiene, to get out there and take a wash. Well, one of the brilliant things about Mando is they already have the deodorant, which basically can be used anywhere. You can't. That's idiot-proof, literally. Doublelift could use this and couldn't fuck up. You just put it anywhere you need it. That'll get rid of all the smell. Then also, you've got stuff like, I'm a big fan of these, the Mando body wipes. You can just got those, use them quickly. If you don't know, that is the main area where you're going to feel all grimy. And there's another thing that's underrated, by the way. Oh, when you're in your stink, when you're playing the game, you're munching on stuff, you won't notice it. But you know, after the game, when you get up and you stand up, you feel all grimy and horrible. If you don't have time to go have a full shower and do your full makeup routine and all the skincare, just use this stuff. And also, this is something where if you are a man, it doesn't all smell like fucking unicorn buttholes and fucking honeysuckle. There's all like baller-ass male scents like Mount Fuji and fucking this lovely like pine smell. There's all delicious ones. They're quite a good vibe. And I'll say this other thing, they're not overpowering either. They're not like, bloody hell, what's that? It's quite a subtle smell that's quite good. So if you want to check it out, why don't you go and get some Mando immediately? So what you can do is, wait a second, where is it? New customers. Oh, yeah, there you go. Head to shopmando.com because for a limited time, new customers get 20% off site-wide, so anything on the website with our exclusive code, which is obviously summoning. So use code summoning at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. And so some men mask their BO with sense. Mando men get the job done right. Don't mask it, Mando it. Available in retailers near you and from Shop Mando. So that's shopmando.com. Please support our show and say that we sent you if there's an area on the site where you can do that. Shout out to Mando and their sweat control. Right, there we go. Now we will move on. So,
what else we got left in there?
Well, one thing, this is a bit of an out of left field one. Yeah. You know, we discussed on the past episode, the travesty that we're losing all this history. We're losing RNG and FPX. Yes. Right, as if to really just stick the boot in on the way out and just give us no grace whatsoever. RNG hasn't just exited League of Legends, but I hope the producer can pull this up. They've literally done a tweet that says, no, even this is like some Zoomer speak. I hate so much about it. They've done a tweet that goes, what can I say? RNG out. By the way, dog shit just copy of Kobe Bryant Mamba out when he retired there. Then you put hashtag League of Legends. By the way, no one uses the hashtag League of Legends. You Chinese boomers, whoever fucking did this. And then the image is absolute AI slop of an incredibly thin looking Uzi Eye. It's clearly meant to be Uzi Eye. Stood with all the trophies around him. And then the best thing is all the like monitors are all smacked. You know, the LPL's still going on, RNG. Like, what even is this? This looks like fucking Uzi Eye's Vec now of Stranger Things just killing everyone in some psychic attack or something. What the fuck? You know, the LPL continues without you. So anyway, the idea, their amazing legacy in League of Legends ends with some AI-generated guff. Like, what is this?
Well, I didn't think their legacy could be tarnished more because they've had, look, folks, RNG have technically not done like illegal stuff, right? It's just they've done immoral stuff with their contracts. They've contract jailed people. They've basically forced people into retirement. They have a bunch of court cases versus MLXG and they've dragged people's names through the dirt, blah, blah, blah. Come on. Why is that? You don't have any budget left, anything left in the coffers to just give one video editor, like the 30 seconds, anything of some of your highlights. RNG is one of the most storied
come on, there'd be some community guy already does videos you could hire for fuck all to do this as well, mate. Come on.
I could have done it on my phone in about 2 hours on CapCut. You know, I could have chucked together something basic and it would have been better than this. It's just such a trap.
Also, by the way, the reason why it's slop, I'm not using that as, I do call all AI stuff slop, but this is even worse because if you zoom in on the bottom part, it's got all the fucking artifact errors, like half of a fucking keyboard that doesn't go anywhere and one ear of a headphone without anything attached. Like, they've even done that thing, Nymaera, where they didn't even bother checking it before it went out, basically. Like, you could just generate this again without that shit, but you just got a bunch of stupid... Like, this would be like if Uzi Eyes hadn't just had 13 fingers on it or something. Like, also, come on, boys, where's the quality control?
Also, you have a million photos of you from, let's check how long you've been in the league. You've been in for, well, since 2013 when you reached World 5. Almost like you have like 13 years of history to pull from. You couldn't get 4 photos and collab them together.
I know.
Can just collage them like that. It's the lowest effort you can think of for a team which continues to disappoint me. Good riddance, RNG, at this point. Honestly, you've ended some very valuable players' careers in the worst possible ways. You've tarnished one of the most golden legacies that we've had in League. One of my favorite teams to watch across League history. And I want you gone now. I'm glad you're gone.
By the way, I'll tell you 2 bombers about the whole RNG topic to me. One is... I actually do now associate Xiaohu with motherfucking Weibo Gaming. Like, if there's anyone should have been a one-team player forever, it's bloody Xiaohu should have retired in an RNG uniform. And then similarly, here's the saddest part though, Nymaera. There's a guy who didn't do the Xiaohu move, which is stupid. Ming just stayed till the bitter end. Like, that guy definitely, if you go back like 3 years, he had a couple more years. Like Mako, he could have swapped teams and gone and done so. He could have done much more, but unfortunately, he was too loyal, I guess.
Even towards the end, there were a couple of players who you thought could have been some. Well, I mean, obviously they ended up screwing around Milky Way, who then screwed himself. So it's his own fault that he's been screwed, right? Because of all the allegations against him in terms of match fixing / competitive integrity. Of course, they did the stuff with Breathe and Bin in terms of the swap there. BLG had to buy into that too. Yes, it's not just them. I can't think of any team in League history that's had as many contract shenanigans go on as they have.
By the way, think of even what you just said there. There's a world where if you get the perfect overlap, you could have had Bin, Milky Way, Xiaohu, Ming, and a fucking ADs. Give me up. That's a fucking fire lineup right there. That's the next gen.
Absolutely insane. Like they had so many different people come through their roster. Even like the last mid laner they had, Tongyuan, has ended up being like decent. You know, that guy, maybe he can develop into something special. Yeah, so I don't know. RNG, 3-time MSI winners, the team to win it the most ever. Bowing out with absolutely zero fanfare, and a lot of people just being kind of glad that this hulking behemoth has finally come to rest. Sad.
Absolutely. What a bummer. What a fucking world, bro.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you always want to see the best for these teams which actually have a legacy. You always do, right? Because the dream is you have a team, even if they're on a down day, like a team like Fnatic still exists and still has a fan base. You're talking about, well, we talked about this at length previously in terms of, legacy teams leaving like FPX or whatever. Yeah, at least SPX have like bowed out and had some degree of honor with a certain degree of dignity. This is just not even dignified. That's the worst thing. There are still people I know who got into League because of RNG. I mean, when I was around London a lot more, there were a lot of Chinese kind of overseas students studying at a place like UCL. It's a big place for like Chinese expat students in London. And a whole bunch of them just got into League because RNG won MSI with the all-Chinese roster, that 2018 roster. And then you got into teams like IG as well. But those two teams were just so huge for player uptake. And particularly beyond that, I suppose a stale period of Korean dominance where actually a lot of the teams that won, you just thought, well, at least when it got towards like 2017, you were thinking, okay, it's a bit boring in terms of this crush out, bleed out, vision control style of League of Legends. When the Chinese era of dominance came through for those couple of years between 2018 and then 2019, whatever, when you had these world's winning organizations coming through, it was huge to have these exciting different teams do something. And now suddenly one of them is, well, never going to be back, I presume.
Right, one thing we can do actually is we can do a mini preview for the major regions. So if people don't know, LCK and LPL begin tomorrow at the time of recording, which is almost like 11 p.m. local time in Europe. And then LEC begins on the weekend, and then LCS begins like a week, sometime the following week, basically. So if we go through, one thing I wanted to do initially, because it's actually a thing I often do on betting. I won't mention the betting sponsor here, but it's one thing I do in betting. I quite like the bet where you do a bet for who's going to win the split before it begins. Because that that's actually a fun one, which isn't just about the favourite, because by the way, sometimes the favourite is too low odds. So what I like to do on those ones usually is I try to look for like the value bet of like the third team who has like excellent odds, but like they could do it. So for example, I bet on MCoy in the summer because they had a chance to do it, but they weren't the top one. So one thing I thought we could do at the outset is just who, before we've seen any of the games, let's talk about who do you think is the winner of the split. So with LCK, it's obviously a very interesting off-season. I think even the Kesper Cup added a bit of like a drama with T1, and then you had the back and forth with HLA, right? Who, in Nymaera's opinion, without seeing anyone play an official LCK Cup game, who is the team you are backing to win this split?
They've changed so much about the game that I'm not even sure that...
Okay, you think that's going to be a major factor?
Yeah, because it changed the way that jungle interacts with a lot of things.
Okay.
Also...
if you had to give a layman's version, what type of thing will this affect or make worse or harder or better? What do you think?
So you're constantly on the map because home guards are always active, but you're also kind of tied to lane more, because even just stepping just outside your lane can really impact the way that you progress your role quest. I'm not actually sure that'll be a factor. Maybe just players will be happy to progress it less and still go towards skirmishing. But I'm worried that like mid laners won't be able to roam, even if they do have like technical power to do it. Global champions might be worse because you can't just ult out of your lane at level 6 because you're losing your role quest or whatever. So that maybe changes the way that teams skirmish. Maybe it means that raw laning power is what means the most to you. With that in mind, does that just mean that Genji gets stronger? Because their raw lanes are just so damn good. HLE's lanes are obviously damn good too. I actually wonder if in this case, jungle having less impact actually affects Genji for the positive, because Canyon's been on a downswing. I actually, I know it's kind of like a basic way to put it. I think Genji is still in driver's seat here. And if Canyon's still not on great form, the fact that jungle is probably less powerful this season probably favors them when you're going up against the folks like Kanavi, Owner, if they come in on a good head of steam. I actually think Genji weirdly have slightly better odds there now, I reckon.
I have to say, I already favour Genji anyway. I do think that roster is amazing. I think, sadly, people are just only thinking about the way the fucking semi-finals went at Worlds. Right up until that point, they looked awesome that whole year. Yeah. They did have a historic season. They were awesome at MSI. They really did look like they were going to be, if they'd won Worlds, contender for best team to ever play. In fact, by the way, I'll just say it right now, if they'd have won that Worlds, I think most analysts would have crowned them greatest team to ever play League of Legends in a single year, that is. I think that would have been a fair thing to even say, especially when you consider they almost won the LCK Cup too. They were like, that was very, very close. So the problem is, I do think people are over-indexing how bad Worlds was. Also, similarly, as you point out there, if you look at T1, right, I think T1 actually could be even stronger with Peers. It's just I don't think they're the best squad. But I look at the player. I think the best player last year for T1 was Owner. I think he was unbelievable. So if that hurts you. Hand of life. I actually am not that big a Goomer fan. I thought Viper was better. But I tell you what, I mentioned on the past episodes, if Kanavi's joined the league, now you've got my fucking attention and curiosity. Like, Kanavi's a demon. The problem is, I agree, this, in theory, this mildly is going to hurt him a little bit, while actually Canyon can just chill and just do whatever the fuck he's doing anyway, because actually, in theory, just like in past years, Canyon can have 3 winning lanes just on the map anyway, without much interaction.
Yeah, because look, the meta is still going to evolve. We've barely seen anything of the new patch and no real official tier 1 games, right? But one of the things which I have been seeing is that more kind of utility junglers come through, and because the early game skirmishes are a little bit more iffy now, because your raw power in the early game has been diminished somewhat, then actually people go towards power clearing junglers, because it's like, well, if I'm not going to be that useful, I may as well be on a champion that just gains more as the game goes on. That's Canyon's like complete bread and butter style, so that potentially works for him. And then besides that, I mean, it's just, we need to figure out actually what happens with early game rotations. Can you actually, because Genji, one of the ways that they got ahead of the game was they would play out first part of laning phase and they'd swap back, get a crash wave for ruler into top turret. You get plates that way. By the way, getting plates is now different too, because plates never fall off. They stay beyond 14 minutes. And if you haven't hit a tower for a long time, single auto will basically just pop it for a full plate pretty much, which is kind of insane.
You know what people haven't thought about with that, Nymaera? That is going to now mean at certain points in the game, you have to have a side laner at some point in time. Why wouldn't you? It'd be foolish to leave someone on the map at certain points.
But then who gets to do that?
Absolutely.
Is it your top laner? Is it your mid laner?
Funnel it? Yeah, exactly.
One of the things about top lane is that you kind of get an empowered teleport, or you can take a non-teleport spell and you get 1 teleport on like an extended cooldown for free. Mid laners, they get the improved boots once you complete the quest. And then they get an empowered recall. I want to say every 3 to 5 minutes or something like that. It's the annoying thing about that quest is that you don't get to choose when the empowered recall is. It's just your next one when it's up. That's a bit annoying.
Right.
But saving that extra 4 seconds to get that home guard, which is improved because it goes to your furthest wave in that lane, kind of goes hard actually. So mid lane is always on the map. So is it actually about mid laners getting to side laners more quickly, more able to reset and then go elsewhere? Is it top laners getting more XP and getting that free or that improved teleport? Do they get precedent on that? Bot laners, they get more gold per minion. Do they get precedent on that now? And also typically it's just easier to win a game when your AD carry is fed. Just most teams will play around a fed AD carry more than anything else. A lot of teams are going to have to choose stylistically which lane and which role quest gains the most from just spending some more time in side lanes, getting funnel plates and the minions as well.
Okay, what about your favorite region, the LPL? I think this one's a spicy one. Which is going to be the best LPL team, Nymaera?
Well, how much can Knight do to fix whatever the hell happened at Demacia Cup? I really hope Demacia Cup isn't indicative of BLG just slumping again and not having chemistry. BLG on paper should smash. They should. Just realistically, they have ridiculous lanes. Shun should fix the vibes. Knight's back in. Hopefully Bin gets to good form. If they don't win, who does win? Well, Anyone's Legend, we didn't get to see them at all on the new patch. Tarzan's the kind of guy I think will probably benefit from the... Weirdly, I think he will benefit from the jungle changes because he plays everything in the jungle, and if the meta changes, he's most likely to come out on top of that. Like, for instance, if you go to utility junglers, I'm less fond of someone like Shun, I suppose. Or, yeah, someone like that, right? Who's been better at those early kind of jackling, skirmishing junglers, something like that. It should still be BLG. I have just that specter of 2025 where BLG was such heavy favorites and they just couldn't get it to work. And then outside shot of JDG if those two don't make it. I don't think we've seen enough to really call an upset outside of that. It should be quite firmly BLG unless they are their own worst enemy.
My problem with this one is, if Tarbe was still on Anyone's Legend, I think this is a spicy convo. The problem is him not being on Anyone's Legend and him not being replaced by like a historic coach does make me worry a little bit for that squad, because in my opinion, in that team, they already were like punching a little bit above their weight with a player like Hope without like a super carry top laner, just like a good veteran player. So I already think in that team, you already had gotten, it felt like almost you'd wrung every drop of potential out of the squad. So I needed to have Tarbe there because I need to believe, right, we're building on last year. We're going to do something else. Instead, I actually worry that there won't be as good a team without him, and it'll just be more like the Tarzan and Shank show and some Kale masterclasses here and there. And the problem is, as you just said there, they're not playing last year's field. In last year's field, they'll probably still win, mate. The problem I have is this. Every time I look at that BLG lineup, mate, I just get a smile on my face. Like, it looks like it could be one of the best teams to ever play League of Legends. Not even just the best LPL. It looks like it could act like this is another team where, look, I know there's probably never going to be a golden road now with the extra split. But if there's ever a team that could do it from the LPL, this is another one you have to put in that list. They really could. This looks like you just think to yourself how well Knight and Ruler worked. Mate, Knight and Viper, I think they are going to get on like a house on fire. I already think Jun more than earned his respect back in this team. I think if you're someone like Bin, by the way, you're like, welcome back, bro. Now let's fucking go to town. And then also, people are still imagining like Bin has to be the Bin of last year. Mate, if Bin ever actually
good.
Well, even then, if he ever gets his game back to being really good, this team are going to be demons, bro. This lineup is fucking stacked.
Yeah, I think Bin's one of those players which I really want him to do well, but like he's been on a bit of fraud watch since about 24 World Semis and Finals. I don't think he really recovered from that. I think a lot of people overlook the bad back end of that tournament, and then 25. Mate, what were you going to show up for? There were some rumors that basically he only really cared about summer and then Worlds, and it seemed like the interviews kind of corroborated that, saying, "Oh, you're not real champions if you won in spring, whatever." I really hope that with stuff like better home guards, meaning that there's more fighting and more individual agency to just like hit a tower once and then play around some trickiness with that. That to me in my head screams, fast pace, scrappy League of Legends that LPL likes to do, an opportunistic League of Legends. And I don't think it's any coincidence that BLG, Anyone's Legend, JDG, the three teams which I got my eyes on, are all teams that have been in recent history coached by Tarbe, because he's the kind of guy which instills that into teams. So yeah, maybe JDG can get a leg up on that and they can play towards kind of scrappier League of Legends and kind of play that very opportunistic teleports across the map, quick resets to get somewhere unexpected, much the way that RNG did across their whole career, really. BLG is still in the driver's seat. It's on them to mess up.
And then similarly, that's why the JDG lineup roster is so fun. On its own, it'd be interesting. But what makes it fun is, oh, wait, you've got a bunch of people who like have potential, could be really good, haven't quite gotten there, a couple of established players, and then Tabe is your coach. Mate, this is perfect script writing. Like, I've seen this fucking show before. This is where he makes them like a third or second best team in the whole league. And then suddenly you start doing that thing, which we all do to Tabe, which is once he's in the position to win everything, we go, you bomb, you didn't win everything. Which is like, but he always gets teams that shouldn't even be there to that point. So yes. I'm in for the good part of the journey again. I want to see it, mate.
I just need to see Tabe actually kind of have one of those real, like, golden splits where he actually ends up winning the international, like an MSI again or something like that. Tabe, he's gotten teams onto the same page very, very well before. He did that with Anyone's Legend. He did that with RNG before. He did that with BLG back in spring 23. I need to see this guy actually stick around until his plan has come to fruition, and I hope it happens in this year, because my problem with Tabe is that he always leaves after someone offers him the slightly larger bag. He's like, "Ooh, that looks really nice. Yo, you've got a new project. I love those." I just need this guy to actually stick around until a project has come to fruition. I need that more than anything, especially if he'd stayed on Anyone's Legend. Like, come on, man. That team already achieved some pretty damn good things. And I wonder if he's just one of these guys which just loves starting from scratch because he means he can make the most progress. It's harder to get that last percentage out of a team, right?
This way, if you look at the teams he has success with, Nymaera, this isn't even to say it's like coach ego in a bad way. It does look like he also likes the narrative we're building of, it's your project, you're the reason why. You notice if he'd have coached people like Knight his whole career, he wouldn't get any credit, bro. You coached Knight. I always say, that guy, Coach Kim, gets fuck all credit. When you look at his trophy cabinet, it's unbelievable, mate. Like, he's got but because of the great players and great teams he had, everyone goes, you're the best player. So the difference is, if you're Tabe, the game you're playing is, we're going to give you crazy credit if you ever win an MSI or something, mate. Like, you will get next level credit. But you also do make it fucking hard for yourself. Like, there's a reason people want superstar players that take a lot of the blame,
He's actually someone that said he always wanted to coach Knight as well. And then the funny thing is that Knight moved to BLG and Tabe left, and then he's just been the ring around the rosy again. But yeah, I mean, everything about this conversation comes back to, did BLG mess up? Are they their own worst enemies? They're clearly on paper the best team. They have incredible lanes. They should have great flexibility across the map. Like, it's on them to mess up. And that's just my one fear about this team, is that somehow the chemistry is wrong. The coaching doesn't work. Daney has an absolute stinker of a year, which, I mean, occasionally you can do, right? That's my big worry with this. I mean, there are 3 teams I think worthy of a title. If anyone else wins it, that will just be...
By the way, even though, yes, with a sub-mid laner, IG won the Demacia Cup, they're obviously not even vaguely a contender. No. I will say this. Here's how you do Copium, guys. If you want to be a veteran of supporting a player or a team, you have to learn the meta of how to twist Copium to make it make sense, even though it doesn't, right? So you ready?
Right.
Well, logically, if I'm a rookie fan and I look at this roster... I mean, it's over. We're probably not even going to make Worlds. Like, chances of winning the league incredibly low. Chances of anything very low. So here's the Copium you've got to tell yourself.
Right, hit me with it.
Last year's roster, if they'd have ever actually made the main event of Worlds or won a split, Rookie wouldn't get as much credit because you had Gala doing all the pentakills, you had the Shy was first team all player, you had all these champions in every role. If somehow Rookie is really good this split, that means he is the shit. Because look at these pieces he has. He has Fortic Prison, he has the fucking weird top lane angle. No one knows what's going on with this squad. So this means he's going to have to really be peak Rookie. He's going to have to roll back the years, and we're back in V5 NIP, boys.
Just
we're back.
So he could look better individually.
Exactly.
Wonderful angle. 10 out of 10 notes. You've made it into the perfect angle. You just have to put on the training weights. You have to put them on. God, yeah.
Because by the way, that's what I always do in sports, Nymaera. I always tell me, like, listen, I'm a fucking Liverpool fan, mate. When Manchester City spend like $80 gazillion billion and do stuff like buy the player we need now just to be on their bench, you have to find some extra angle as to why it's okay that you lose. So what you tell yourself is this: but if we do win, it did happen a couple of times. That's even more epic because we shouldn't win. But the problem with that is that Copium works right until the actual real thing that should happen happens, which is the other team just wins because they have all the advantages. Then it sucks. At that point, point, the copium gets a bit sour. But for now, that's some great shit, boys. Yes, we're back.
It makes it even funnier when you have a team which should succeed just explodes. So, like, last couple of days, the stuff with Mbappe over on Real Madrid, like this.
That team's donezo, mate. Yeah, absolutely.
Like the whole thing about this has got this guy megastar coming in, crazy amount of talent. Oh, by the way, they've lost in like 4 different quote unquote finals. Managers now left, shattered. The more expectations you put on the team, quite obviously, the worse it is when things don't go that way. It just explodes.
Yes, indeed. Okay, what about in the LEC then? Now, the obvious interesting thing about the LEC is we still have the G2 roster. So is G2 going to be your pick? Are they the best LEC team?
They should be. They should be. I think, okay, is this for the first split or for the year?
No, just do for the first split. We'll just say.
For this split, I think it should be G2. They kept the roster together. The other top teams, I think, have more to fix from the end of last year. KC have got a new mid laner, new support to work into the team. Anytime you change a jungle support, kind of part of the machinery there, things are going to take a little while to kick in. They have a new coach as well. Reaper is now coaching Carmine Course. I reckon they might take. I reckon they'll come online in spring more. I mean, not that they won't contend in winter, but I think that G2 have some ground ahead of them there. And MKOI, they have more flaws they need to work out. So those are 3 teams. Fnatic, I don't think they are championship caliber until they prove that their changes aren't just either side grades or downgrades. So realistically, we're looking at the 3 teams which won titles across 25. And MKOI, what they need to sort out is, well, Jojo can't have a winter slump again. I do have this inner theory that Jojo is just really bad in Berlin winter because it just fucking sucks in winter here, folks. Like yesterday, it was like -9 or something. We get hideous amounts of daylight. And for someone coming from, sunny California, it's a bit of a change. So I need Jojo to not fall prey to Berlin winter again. That's one thing, because he was really good throughout spring and summer. I need Mirwin's laning to have an uptick. He's working with Alfari now. Yes, that will help. And I need Super to stop throwing games. I like Super. He's one of the highest potential carries that we have. He's also the carry who is most likely to single-handedly lose you a game in the LEC right now. If you look at his Corki game versus T1, where he just walks up to owners, Kiana dies. That was actually a very winnable game. Game 2 on the Vayne as well had some great moments. Also inted a number of times on that game. You look back to the Swiss stage, the game against KT, it was a single threat comp where he was the single threat, and they threw around Khan. He's definitely put to play in that too. And he probably threw individually at least one game against G2 regionally where he played that Kai'Sa game where he just flew into caps of Shockwave 1v2 in the backline completely unnecessarily. And I think there was another game in the split which I've referenced before where he is the guy making the individual mistake. This guy cannot afford to do those late game throws again. So MKOI, there are too many flaws for me to just say, okay, that they're going to be, winning the first split. KC, they've changed members. G2, they've kept the synergy together. They're looking like the best team at the end of the year anyway. I think Scheme and Labrov only have room to grow. So just by process of being the least flawed team, G2 should have a lot of ground ahead of the rest of the teams.
I did think last year in 2025 that one of the reasons I actually think it is, even though KC won a split and made the final of first stand, that year should be considered a mild failure. The reason I say mild is you weren't an established top team with a legacy and all the rest of it, But when you know what they had, is I think if you look over the whole year, they actually had the best roster. I think if you look all 5 players, you can argue it took people on G2 longer to get activated and to become good and to overcome certain almost sort of handcuffs placed on them by the meta and the teams, etc. KC came out the gate with a fabulous roster of players. Even people I don't rate that much, like Targamas, were leveled up way more.
He was very good compared to
had an awesome first split. Kana was the best player in the LEC, in my opinion. So you look across their team, I think they should have accomplished more. So I'll start with them, because I do think when they make these big moves, you have to ask, can they be the champions? The problem is, I have no fucking clue how that mid laner is going to play. I don't even have an inkling of a clue. So that already is a massive X factor. Then actually, even though everyone else seems totally sold on Busio because of his FlyQuest period, bro, I'm going to tie it to what you just said about Jojo. I predicted Jojo would start slow in LEC for that exact exact reason. Mate, you have come from comfy NA culture, living in LA, sun all day long. Like, that shit isn't a meme, by the way, about how if you live in like Sweden, you get depressed because there's no sun. That's real. I even found out a recent thing when I went to Sweden, by the way, that apparently they put into their food supply fucking vitamin D, mate, so the people who don't know about that just automatically get some because they like fortify the food or whatever, because otherwise...
in Northern Europe, it's something like 80% of people have at least a slight vitamin D deficiency because you don't get as much from sunlight. It's a crazy percentage.
So anyway, the point is, I don't think they do that in Germany as far as I know. And if someone like Busio, mate, it's a different world. I know the game's the same, but it's a different world. Then secondly, I think because he played with Targamas, who was at that point in time derided or reviled, I think people just assume that Killist can play with anyone. Guys, he already played with Targamas in the LFL. Like, that's what people forget. So I have no idea how that's going to work out, mate. One of the things about Busio and Masso is they seemed like they had a very, like, key synergy where they got along on every level, in the game, in the lane, in the fucking outside. Who knows? Like, the other thing is as well, I'll just say this, as someone who's English, it's my motherfucking birthright to say this. I don't know actually what Busio's like as a person, and I can tell you, French people can be very standoffish to people who aren't French. You never quite know how that vibe's going to go, whereas remember, fucking Targamas is one of those Belgians who's just like on the French side, isn't he? Like, he was already hooked into their culture. He'd been in their team before. They knew which way the bread was. I want to see how that bot lane works out there. Yeah, on paper, it looks like it could be fantastic. It could be the best bot lane in the region. Let's see, though, because if it isn't, by the way, that's a problem right there. Like, as much as I might not have been a big fan of Targamas in general, I tell you what, he did a decent job getting out of his own way in a lot of those games, actually, and letting Killist dominate the lane, dominate the fucking team fights, do what he did. So again, the Busio one, I'm not sold on either. Aside from that, look, I still think it's awesome to have Canna, to have Callistus, Mega. These could be the two best players in the LEC. So I think it's cool, but I have to say it's easy to default to G2, mate. G2 actually could be everything they were last year and even a bit better. Here's one thing, I'll make a prediction now. I think Skewmond is ready, boys. He is going to motherfucking run the LEC this year. This is his Yankos year where he just goes supernova and mega. Lastly, for MCOY, this isn't even a diss. You were never supposed to win a split. Remember the split they won? They were 3-2 twice with KC, and they lost the series 3-1 to G2. That's the split they won, guys. So they were always overperforming, winning by small man. You saw how hard it was. They really were a team where, like, bro, how have they not developed a rogue time type meme? They have a minute in the game where they have to have won by, and if they haven't got an overwhelming advantage, they will chain into 3 or 4 fights in a row and just lose to any team in the world. Shout out Worlds if you just saw that shit. Like, that was bad. So unfortunately, in their team, they're the team I hate that they kept the same roster, bro. Because I think those two players are clearly problem child players. They're neither of them bad, but I don't think you can have both Merwin and Super. They're too idiosyncratic. I think you need to pick one and then get a stronger player elsewhere.
They were the two players who didn't get the extended contracts. So they're playing here for one more year and then they'll see what happens with their contracts. And I don't think that's a mistake.
To me, though, that's the problem with having a roster that you're clearly not spending the most and you're not going crazy to just win only. You're trying to, like, be smart businessmen. Because if I look at that team, bro, if I'm building a roster and you can tell me my first 3 pieces are El Yoya, Giorgio Pion, and Alvaro, I might win the league. What are you talking about? I might have but then the other two, the problem with Merwin and Super is this, bro. They're good in Europe, but they're not quite good enough that when you go international, they're going to beat the top Asians, etc. So the problem I always have is, that's why I always say Super to me is like Spanish sneaky. Merwin is, I don't know, some wild top laner that's like he's Spanish Adam. There you go. The problem with these players is you can win a game off a Korean team with that. You're not going to win the BO5. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's how deep does the crazy pot go, and is it actually all good enough quality to actually take games at a top tier level? I mean, that's why I'm interested to see what Alfari can do on MCOY, because he's coming in as an assistant coach. Apparently, he was helping out Broken Blade, and it did have a noticeable impact on. I think that was when Broken Blade was playing You remember when he was playing Zach top a load, and he was really smashing people with that? I think it was around there where he was saying, "Yeah, I just did like 100 1v1s with Alfari on this matchup." That really helped him. I'm really interested to see what Alfari could do with Mirwin's champion pool, because towards the end it felt like Mirwin was either on Cassante, or weirdly it was Cassante who was getting the success on, and everything else he was actually struggling on outside of that. So if he can have a more consistent individual laning phase and then transfer that into his creativity and the teamfight impact he could have on some of those picks, that's going to be very interesting to watch, to actually see, does it actually fuck with his playstyle for one? Can he keep his identity? And if it actually helps him at all. I suppose the other team, because look, Fnatic, whatever. I mean, I think that side lane, I think their solo lane is arguably side grades lost, but we'll see if it's. I mean, it probably will be a downgrade. So actually, I don't want to speak too much about them until we actually see more gameplay. Vitality
the
is
X
the one
factor of the league. Let's be real. Like there's a world where for that could be awesome, but I don't think anyone has a way to say it yet. There's not really any hint that it is.
But the thing with the X factor for me is Team Vitality, because you've got Humanoid and Kazi back together for the first time since Mad Lions, and that's actually a duo which I think was insanely good on Mad Lions. And the question is, can they marshal the troops around them to actually do something different? Vitality have wasted a lot of potential before. They are really, I think they are the razor cake team. I think they've very, very rarely delivered on promises. But Humanoid and Kazi actually does have me somewhat interested. I think Narco was really, really good this last year. If he has a good second year and Humanoid Kazi can actually be a little bit of that kind of control tower, I think they could crack top 3. I don't think they'll do it this first split. I think they need too much time to, again, ramp up players like Narco and Linces.
My problem with the Vitality angle is this. Everyone went mad, all of us who had the fucking copium, that when he remade the top side of G2 in Heretics, that they could be like the old days. Guys, it was 2021 when Mad Lions did all that shit with Humanoid and Kazi. That was a long time ago. So listen, if you say, can they be an interesting team and be good? Yeah, I think so. Can they actually? I think people are actually acting like they're just going to walk in the room and it's going to be 2021 again. They're going to be all like, I don't know, but let's see on that one. Let's see. That's why it's an X factor, though. I'll give you that.
It is. This is one last thing on Vitality, a little bit separate on this. What do you make of the fact that Mac is no longer coaching them? And
that's interesting, right?
He's become what I am now dubbing the coach of coaches. Very lofty title, where he's like head of coaching development at Vitality. So he's still on the roster, but he's still on the organization, but he's not involved with the roster anymore. Because like Mac and Pad had really good stock value leading up to this time with Team Vitality. And that roster, quite clearly, when they had Hylissang on it, needed good coaching to put them in the right direction, and they bombed. They really bombed. So I am curious to see what a post-Mac era looks like for Vitality, and also, I mean, what Mac's actually going to do with his position there too. But yeah, Vitality, I don't know. They've just never been able to pull the important pieces together on any of their rosters since, the old Kazuka days or whatever, really.
And also, by the way, if people don't know, in light of all the people moving up, they've brought in Arvinder, who was the guy who last year coached KCB, who Vitality B, who actually won the LFL in the spring. And the year before, he was the BDS Academy coach, the one that had all that success. So interesting move up there too. That is clearly a talent from the ERLs. I'll be interested to see how he works. Because I will say that is one thing that I think is totally fair. I even said this on Best Damn League Show to motherfucking Peter Dunn, who loves these guys and treats them like sons. I'm sorry, if you are Mac and Pad, you can't say you didn't have enough time or fucking players or purchase. Like, you made a lot of the decisions that fucked you over. At the end of the day, this is why, by the way, you stay in a team like Mad Koi if you want to be a guy where it's just a cool angle. If you want to be a Tabe type figure, you got to stay in a lesser team and make more of it. If you go to a Vitality, I know to League fans they aren't this. If you don't know, guys, they might have just had the best year ever in Counter-Strike. In other games, they are very ambitious and they want to be world champions. Yes, of course, that's not going to happen in League, but at a minimum, you want to win the LEC, and they were far from winning it. So I'm sorry, if you go to a big club like that, that is like being a Manchester United or a Chelsea coach. Like, if you don't win, it's not even good enough to just be like decent. Like, you will be fired, and I'm sorry, that will be somewhat justified because that's the culture of the club. So I'm also just interested to see how. Who knows? Maybe in this case, like, Pad is the right choice, and Mac was outdated. Who knows at this point? And he's still involved in the project anyway. It's all good.
Yeah. I think they have, like, I'm not buying into Vitality. They have let me down far too many times. I do actually think they have the potential to crack top 3, and on a weird meta, maybe they can do something crazy. If somehow Humanoid and Kazi can rekindle something special from all those years ago. Because I actually do think that will be a factor, because I think even just on a chemistry level, maybe it unlocks Humanoid to be a better player than he was in Fnatic. Because I think one of the worst things about Humanoid is that he's just kind of wasted a lot of what should have been an excellent career on a Fnatic team which never reached what it was supposed to do.
I would also say he's part of the reason why, but all good.
Yes he is.
Yeah, a lot of playoff series where I was like,
so therein lies the question. Yes. What can you do to bring out the best in him? Is it actually just this?
Oh, by the way, I'll tell you right now, I already know this will happen. Yeah. If fucking Vitality beats Fnatic and everyone goes, I guess Humanoid wasn't the problem, I will mould, bro. Because as I say,
no.
I don't care what he does on Vitality. He was one of the problems on Fnatic.
It is perfectly possible for him to be one of the problems and also do better in a different environment elsewhere. These things can coexist.
And mate, from my experience, there is no such thing as a team where one player is the problem. If a team has problems, it is usually multiple players, if not the coaching, if not the culture. Like, it tends to be all at the same time. That's why when you see those teams like the Carmine Corp blow up or those Vitality super teams that fail, that's not really like one player like Perk sucked. That's like a systematic fail down across. That's why you get an excellent roster on paper, just can't do it in the server. Everyone's neutralizing each other and fucking each other up and sabotaging each other. No one's playing the same style of league or following the calls or practicing the same amount. So unfortunately, like, that's also the reason why. By the way, it's both of them at this point in time. Both Humanoid and Razork, you will forever, to some degree, carry the fucking mark of Cain of that Fnatic roster, because you were the two centerpieces that they built around, spent fuck tons of money on, and you were supposed to, let's be real, not even just win one split. You were supposed to be a dynasty, bro. Yeah. That looked awesome when you might have got that team.
No, we said it at the start of the year on broadcast and elsewhere. If they didn't win a split in 25, it's a failure. They didn't win a split in 25, it was a failure. Getting to Worlds doesn't spare those blushes. What I found interesting was, apparently Razork and Upset were quite combative, but Grabs was convinced that it was more about the rest of the players not speaking up and facilitating the conversation. And that's also one of the reasons why apparently they didn't keep Poby, is that he wasn't as good at participating in the communication. Understandably, rookie Korean coming over speaking in a second language. His English is actually, he learned fairly quickly, but it's not to step into heated conversations like that. Sure. But basically he's saying that, the players which they brought in, the communication will be better, bluntly, basically. And I'm not convinced that will last a whole year until, again, Fnatic are a team which are just very prone to just crumble, crash, and burn. As soon as playoffs hit, this team just loses any aura it has. They can make it last for like one regular season, and then they just explode. So they've kept Upset. Losper's not a player which I'm that familiar with. Grabs referred to him as a Hylissang-like player. God knows which era he's talking about.
What's beautiful about that is that's actually a genius, like, mask thing. Where that could mean he sucks at it, for all we know. That's actually or he could be MVP quality player of the league. I love it. That's masterful PR work there, by the way.
Oh my God. Could you, there's that one Simpsons skit, which is like, you can either have the yacht or what's in the box. It could be a yacht, and it's just completely rolling between whatever could be in there. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's sad to see Mickey leave the roster, but I mean, you don't want to keep a guy there which apparently just doesn't mesh with Grabs, which raised a lot of questions about how he worked Grabs in the past.
Well, do you know what, Nymaera? The thing is, when it comes to setting a good culture and being able to work through problems, one of the keys is communication. And you know what the classic mistake people make with communication? They think it's about what you say. It's also about listening. Because remember, you got two ears and one mouth.
Wonderful.
So one of the ways you could improve your communication in the game and in general life is you could get some good earphones, couldn't you? How about this message being sponsored by Raycon? Because did you know, actually, if you are a player like Poby joining the chaotic mess of a Fnatic with all these expectations and people demanding things of you and conflicts that you weren't even a part of, you're going to need to block all that out and just focus on the game. Well, do you know what? With the everyday classic earbuds, they have active noise cancellation, so that would help with that. You'd be able to still hear the game and do what you need to do, but you could block out all the external unnecessary noise. Just say noise. Just leave it at noise. There you go.
Yeah.
And also, you're going to have to be able to, as a player joining a team, make connections with people. Be not just one player who over here isolated. You're going to have to join with your jungler and your support, and then know your timings to base with the top laner. Well, luckily, the everyday classic earbuds have multi-point connectivity, which allows you to connect to more than one device at the same time. And they have an ergonomic fit, that just means they stay put no matter what you're doing. A bit like he just stayed in the mid lane farming the whole time, didn't he? Then also, you want to come in and not just be some generic basic bitch that just looks shit. You want to look suave and cool. You don't want to be like Boomer Thorin, who always just goes, just give me the black ones. I don't care what they look like. I care about functionality. You might be like Monty and care about aesthetics and stuff. So if so, well, guess what? They have loads of new colours as well. Like, they've got cool ones like blush violet, cool mint.
I chose rose gold.
Yeah,
really like
there you go. Classic one. How fucking bougie is this guy? He's going for that angle. Okay, fair enough. I appreciate it. Then also, they've got all these cool features like the quick charge. So 10 minutes will give you 90 minutes of playtime. So if you ever basically like run out the door and you still can spare 10 minutes, you can always still get a charge. You can get a little travel out of it. You can still go and do something for an hour or two. Also, they have up to 32 hours of battery life. So in general, if you keep them charged, they're going to last more than a day anyway. And they have the awareness mode, which if you don't know, allows you to simultaneously be listening, but then very easily, like if you need to do something in real life, you're not like, oh shit, help me. This is just a way to quickly be able to like find out, oh, your dog's barking, you're cooking something, the doorbell went. It just makes it super easy for like quality of life. And over 3 million customers already love Raycons. And do you know what? If you don't love them, they come with a 30-day happiness guarantee, so you can just return them. Easy does it. Nothing to lose, right? Bit like Poppy joining Fnatic. Anyway, the Everyday Earbuds Classics are here to help you crush your New Year's goals. Raycon audio products are having a site-wide sale. That just means everything on the website. Go to buyraycon.com/LFN to get 20% off site-wide. So it's not just those earbuds. You can get anything on the website. That's buyraycon.com/LFN. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this. Now, there is one region I didn't mention, which is I want to know, and this is a harder one, which is the best LCS team?
Well, this is the problem, right? The FlyQuest dynasty's now been broken open, and we have some different...
I think this is the hardest region to pick, by the way.
It is, because it is. We talked about Lion a little bit before, right? With Inspired. I mean, like, the carries look really legit. I think Dhokla's pretty good at facilitating any team. But I mean, Quad and Masu are really good carries too. Gagos looked good in the games which he did sub into FlyQuest before. Griffin has been on the radar for a long time now. Cryogen is not a player which I have experience with though, so I can't fully comment on like how he'll do at tier 1. So I mean, FlyQuest and Lion are probably the two which I immediately put my eyes to. I suppose Cloud9 are in the conversation, but APA worries me. The mid lane pool for LCS is actually pretty good this split, actually. I think that will potentially punish...
Well, it's just loads of Koreans, but fair enough.
But Darkwings is actually pretty good too, so you can chuck him in there. Actually, I think he's in there. But the problem is, like, these mid lane Koreans are actually pretty damn good, you know? We talked about Zinni just being a walking highlight reel. Quid and Quad both had really solid 25s. Darkwings, I think, actually look really good on Disguise, so I think it's good that he's, like, found another team on Sentinels too. I actually wonder whether that will knock down Cloud9 and Dignitas a notch, just because like Palafox was not great since 23 really now at this point. And APA, now that the format that we mentioned earlier is best of 3 fearless at least, and then going into best of 5 fearless throughout it, his champion pool will get punished. Game 1 might be fine. What happens if he doesn't have, Talir or Ziggs going into game 2 or 3? Does that change things? So by kind of merit of that, I think that Dignitas and Cloud9, despite the fact that they actually have some pretty decent pieces, I like Photon. I think FBI, despite his throw capabilities, is actually pretty legit too. Dignitas probably get knocked down just a little bit of a knock there, and then C9. I mean, we saw them at Casper Cup. They have some pretty good map play at points. I think they can snowball games well, and I think that players they have plenty of players which can pop off in the right moments. I think they will be a step behind some of the other teams if they can get a leg over them in the mid lane.
The problem I have with this one is I also do know what they're betting with. Like a lot of people, actually, it looks like they were picking like Cloud9 or FlyQuest still, because maybe just the players that stayed, etc. My problem is the outsider to me was always the Lion one, because presumably if Inspired says it's legit, I'm interested. Okay, let's see how it does. Now I don't really know with the Dhokla angle. I'm going to be edgy and I'm going to be a hipster. I actually think I'm going to pick Team Liquid. Look, there's still some aspects, which is, let's see how Holds-It Yodo does, for example. But I think if you look at that, I think, by the way, I've seen this story before. Everyone's going to laugh because they remember Morgan being bad. I reckon he'll do fine in the fucking West. I've seen that story many, many times before, where the guy who's supposed to be a bomb for the LCK comms, he's actually totally fine. I think Quid actually was fucking sick at the end of the year. He was really good on Under Thieves. And I always thought this bot lane never suffered from the downs of the team. The downs was things like APA falling off, Umti going to shit, Impact was not as good anymore. So I don't know how totally the jungle top part works, but I think the mid lane signing was great, and they've kept the bot lane, which I think is an excellent bot lane. So, and also one of the best things about every Team Liquid lineup that you have is if you have a strong team fighting mid, debatable if they had that in the past, you have Core JJ, who's one of the most, he's literally a fucking engage button, who's also a genius. Like, I think that they are more of like it's a experimental roster, but I think if it all works out, this could be a great team. team, especially because, as I say, I don't think there's a slam dunk best team in this league. It's actually, tell you one thing that's a positive if you're an LCS fan, should be a lot more parity at the top now. Should be a lot
hugely
more.
so. Hugely so. And I mean, yeah, I mean, the FlyQuest piece is kind of scattering to the winds, leaves a lot out there. I mean, I even think Sentinels can be pretty legit. I mean, Hambak had a really good run in LCK challenges. As I was saying, Darkwings, this guy's actually pretty legit as a resident NA mid as well. Rahul and Huhi, they had their downs, but towards the end of the year, they really started to rack things up again. And if it's going into Jinx Aphelios meta, and Jinx is apparently really good right now, Rahel's one of the better players of that. You got Impact. Now, Impact 25 was it the worst year of his career? I'm trying to think. There were definitely some. Well, yeah, there were definitely some points where you thought, well, Impact might just phone it in now. He wasn't sure what he was going to do, which is a real shame because Impact is he's one of the few players that spent the majority of his career outside of Korea. That I know he's a Korean. He won Worlds in Korea or whatever. But if you look at just his career post leaving the LCK/OGN or whatever, this guy could still be on the all-time Hall of Fame list. He could be just for longevity alone, really. I hope he comes back to that. Sentinels are probably in the conversation to a degree. I think do I go with Lion? I really like their carry core, and I think that Dhokla is actually very good at just adapting to whatever series he wants, whatever team he wants. I wonder if I go Lion. I think Saint was actually very impressive in the last year. Inspired is Inspired, and he has a real flexibility in jungle, which will be really interesting to see coming into the new season. Because like we were saying, like some of the utility junglers go pretty hard, and Inspired doesn't have to be the hard carry jungler. He kind of makes an impact through the utility junglers. So maybe just by being the benefit of Inspired new team gets to kind of reset his trust with them a bit. So maybe that's not as fractured right now. First split, I think they'll be looking really solid.
By the way, one thing I'll also say about the Sentinel squad, which, by the way, if people don't know, I know it sounds like it's by the back door, but that means actually Lena's back in the LCS. If you don't know, she works as like the finance person in Sentinels now. So she's actually back. There you go. So listen, I could get rid of Reggie and TSM, but can't get rid of them at all. So you win some, you lose some. No, one thing I will say about their team that's interesting, I know because of the Team Liquid experiment where this didn't work, people are going to think otherwise. But another reason why it's inevitable, if you open restrictions, you will, like I will, get a lot of Koreans banding together, is because Koreans also sort of scale together because they do have a very homogenous cultural worldview. Like I've heard Koreans that live in the LCS or LEC, they're still trying to be connected with their friends back home and watch the same shows and K-dramas and stuff. But the problem is it's not as easy, especially if you're the guy where you're the one Korean on a team. It's why that really became a rule, and it's not even a meme. In the West, you don't sign one Korean typically, you sign two, because you need them to have another person that they can sort of relate to directly about Korean culture. And then lastly, also the other benefit, obviously, of LCS is they have the Koreatown. So if you're those players on that team, you should be able to acclimatise pretty quickly, actually. Like, that's an interesting detail now. It's just that the problem with that one is I know fuck all about that mid laner. So I do think mid lane's a very important role. So until I see that team play, I can't really make a prediction.
Yeah, and like I'm really interested to see Zinni play, but B-Boy's B-Boy. He definitely has his downswings, and like I just don't know if the structure around that mid lane piece is going to be crazy. Like, it is kind of funny to see contracts go from Palafox, who was really quite bad, to Zinni, who could potentially be like explosive new mid lane rookie. That's going to be quite fun to see if we can get a bit of old contracts back with a better pillar in the mid lane to play around. Because people forget, contracts at peak was so legit. This guy was fantastic for such a long time. I mean, just on a personal level, I would like to see him do well. I just don't know if Shopify are going to be the team to give that scaffold to allow a piece like contracts as they need to shine.
Right. What we'll do is let's do a little break and then do some Q&A, yeah?
Perfect. Sounds great.
All right. See you in a minute. Right, we're here for the last segment, which is, of course, the viewer questions. If you'd like to submit a question, you just become a member, a subscriber to the Last Nation Discord. Then there will be a channel where it actually has all different channels for all the different games you can ask questions. There's also Hot Point Made League of Legends, the one I do with Key Rain Zabati. So anyway, if you submit a question there, including if you fast now in the live one, you might be able to get it under the wire now because we're going to talk for the next 15, 20 minutes. Then I will pick from there. As usual, if for some reason you don't want us to read your username, just say so in your comment. Otherwise, I will just pick whichever ones I think are interesting anyway and then go accordingly. So Here's a
What you
good
got for
one.
us?
So I feel like this one is so wide open, everyone should have an answer. So Big Boy says, what is the most disappointed you have ever been by any form of media release? So it could be a movie, a series, a game, etc. Is there something you're a massive fan of and, you know, some sequel let you down or some shit like that, or the adaptation shit or something like that? What would you pick?
Fucking Halo TV series. What was going on? The Halo TV series was awful.
Were you a big Halo
gotta
fan?
be a huge Halo fan. I have a signed copy of Halo Combat Evolved by Cortana and Master Chief on my shelf.
I will say I'm not someone like that's not my era of console games. I actually haven't played Halo much. But one thing that blew my mind, I have to say, is when someone was explaining to me the lore of the game, bro. That sounds dope with that like hive mind thing. It sounds fucking amazing. Was that in the TV show?
Well, they introduced it towards the end of season 2, but it didn't look right.
Because the concept sounded amazing, bro.
Because there were so many things about Halo which they just fundamentally did not understand. One of which is that Master Chief is not meant to have a face, so you can impart something of yourself onto it. He's meant to be the strong, silent type. Which
doesn't he like take his helmet off or some shit in this?
From in like the first episode.
I heard something like this.
This is not Master Chief. This is Jimmy Rings. This is Master Cheeks. Because not only they do some wild shit in this show. They have this guy sleep with a prisoner of war who is like someone who is a Covenant apologist, who, by the way, are like out for the entire destruction of the human race.
Zealots, right?
It is just wild what they did with that. Now, the rumor which I heard was the script which was used for that was actually a rejected Mass Effect script. So it was another sci-fi shooter game, which would have made more sense with like the politics and kind of like the whole kind of diplomacy between races. That's much more Mass Effect's kind of thing. Whereas the thing about Halo is that it is very much about the existential crisis, and then it really gets amped up a notch when actually you get a perspective from inside the Covenant with the Arbiter in Halo 2. By the way, pretty sure they kill that character as well in the TV show, who was meant to be there throughout the entire trilogy. A whole bunch of the characters which just end up getting killed off. It was an absolute mess. There were some moments which visually were okay, but I just cannot reconcile that with it was one of those games which really showed that a shooter can be narrative driven in kind of like the early 2000s era, but also in kind of like a very intuitive way. It was one of the first games to have, you know, just very slick FPS mechanics in terms of the 2-stick control plus 2 weapon switch instead of having like 0 through 9 in terms of weapon switch through that. So when that show released, I watched through it and I just couldn't believe it got the green light. I just couldn't believe it, because there was actually a live action project which was pretty good. It was Forward Unto Dawn, which was released in the the lead up to Halo 4, and that was actually pretty good. And that they had the guy remain faceless, but no, I just can't reconcile anything about that show with the game. That was so disappointing. What about yourself?
I actually think I have quite an easy one, which is my favorite comic book. This is one of those areas where I think some cliches are accurate. Like, my favorite comic book is Watchmen. I think it's actually one of the best comic books ever written. Like, I've read it. It's not even some nostalgia shit. I read it when I was 18. I've read it when I was 20. The joke is I'm the Dr. Manhattan meme. It's like, it's 3 years later, I'm reading Watchmen again. It is still fucking awesome. Like, so when they announced they were going to make a movie of that, well, at the time they made that movie, Zack Snyder hadn't done many films. And in fact, one of the ones I'd seen was his remake of Dawn of the Dead. I thought, this is actually pretty kind of cool. This guy's got some interesting angles. And basically what sucked is this is one of the few movies, I don't do this now, where I tried to be like hooked into the fan. I was reading all the like tidbits about what's going to happen and all the interviews with the guy, because I'm thinking, if you don't know, as soon as that comic book came out in like the mid-80s or whatever, it already got optioned to be made into a film, and it was one of those like white whales that was never going to be caught. Like, over the years it'd been attached with some amazing names. Like, at one point Terry Gilliam was supposed to direct it, which could have been unbelievable. At one point Darren Aronofsky was supposed to do it. Like, there was some banger direct. So eventually it got to Zack Snyder, not that I'm a massive fan of, but I thought, they're actually making the movie finally. And basically the problem is, if you've never read Watchmen, or V for Vendetta for that matter, these movies are fine. They're good movies. You'll enjoy them. But if you've read them, they just don't ever live up to anything that the book did. So basically, one of the main problems is it is almost an unfilmable book, because basically the way Watchmen is structured as a comic is each chapter is also like telling you the backstory of one of the main characters, but then tying it into the main plot, the overarching conspiracy, but in a really interesting way. And this is why it's my favorite comic book. It is masterfully written. Like, even the name Watchmen's perfect, because it's almost like some like making a watch where every cog has to perfectly fit in and efficiently work. But the film itself is a mess. And one of the reasons why is because the director was a massive fanboy of the comic. He made what I think is the biggest mistake you can make, which is he tried to actually just do it like one for one, a lot of the beats in the comic. And as a result, it didn't work because it's such a comic that works based on how a comic page is structured and things you can only do in a comic, that like already that's a flaw because you're going to make a worse version because a movie isn't a comic. What? And then the things they did change actually just sucked. Like, for example, when they took like the ending, they thought the ending would be less ridiculous because, spoiler, the ending in the comic is the big event is all of a sudden a giant squid creature appears in New York in sort of a 9/11 style attack. But it's supposed to give you the notion that aliens have attacked. And that's what in the famous Ronald Reagan speech, if you remember, that will unite the earth and stop world war. And that's why it's all justified. Instead, because they, I assume, thought it'll be ridiculous to have a big squid thing. If you notice, this was the thing in the 2000s with the comic book movies. Remember that Fantastic Four movie where at the end Galactus was just a cloud? He wasn't in Galactus because they used to think at that era comic books are silly and infantile and no one wants to see a giant bloke.
Realistic,
yeah,
and
no one wants
serious.
to. So instead, what they did is essentially they made it like it looked like Dr. Manhattan had set off a bunch of nukes, if you remember, like, and that was it. Which is like that already is a bit crap.
I seem to remember with that as well. The body of the alien which they're dropping was actually dead as well. It wasn't even a live alien right in the comics.
It was supposed to be something like they got a bunch of psychics and melded them into some outfit.
But it's like just the fear that these things existed would fuel humanity.
Sure.
In the next few.
Well, that's the other thing. That was even something Alan Moore will even tell you in his interviews. He actually stole from a really old black and white episode of The Outer Limits. There's an episode of The Outer Limits where a similar plot happens, but it's more lower scale. What they do is they take a soldier, some like army guy, and they tell him a similar thing, like we're going to fake an alien attack. I forget for what reason. And so what they do is they, over weeks and weeks, transform him into like a really weird looking fucked up creature. And by the way, if you ever look up this old Outer Limits episode, it's an example of what theatre of the mind can do. Because obviously you can imagine it's black and white. The graphics are shit. Like, it, by the way, when he has like a big thing, like a trunk, it just looks like a bunch of toilet paper rolls. But because they so effectively build up the terror, it's still really effective, bro. It's like watching Night of the Living Dead or something. It is still scary. So sadly, I actually thought what to them was silly was one of the cool parts of the ending. Because again, that, like you're saying, that would be so psychologically jarring that an alien creature manifests all of a sudden and kills a bunch of people out of nowhere with a psychic effect. That stuff. So already, the mistake they made essentially was when this movie was made was the era where people were trying to make serious, gritty, like The Dark Knight. And essentially they Dark Knighted it. Like, another thing about that comic book is it's almost like, because Alan Moore's politics are incredibly left-wing, he was trying to satirize how right-wing people like Batman or the Punisher would beat people up and how that isn't. They just made that flat out. Like, it was just you were enjoying them beating people up and snapping people's arms and shit.
One of the core things to watch is, if you're going to dress up in spandex and go fight crime in front of cameras, you can't be normal. You have to be extreme in some way. So pretty much every character in that show has an extreme view. And this actually happens in V for Vendetta too, where people assume that V stands for kind of like, like left-wing socialism. He is an anarchist in the comics. He wants the destruction of entire things. And of course, there's a whole lot of, discussion to be had around that too. But they just chose to make him more like, freedom of the people. No, this is meant to be about the demolition of government.
Yeah, the idea of V for Vendetta was the idea of, by the way, he planned to die himself in the end. It's, I'm going to die to blow up the system, and then let's just see what comes after. But I know what you mean. Yes. They made it more like some commie shit with all the gay guys, where it was like, we're just doing a people's revolution or something weird. I don't know what you mean.
In both of these cases, I think that they toned down the extremist views on whatever end of the street. Because again, in Watchmen, there are characters who are very far right to very far left.
Absolutely,
and the whole point is that if you're going to be dressed up fighting crime in that case, and in the sense of V for Vendetta too, if you're going to become like an icon or something, you're probably going to be quite extreme in the way you view things. Because what else could drive you to do in other worlds a completely insane thing? And I think in both of those adaptations, I think they softballed it.
And as I say, unfortunately, one of the best things about that book is it has the sort of Canterbury Tales Hyperion aspect of you getting to know each person's backstory to justify who they are as a character in the world. They try to do that in the film, but they don't really pull off. So essentially, again, I totally get why people like both those movies if they never read the comic. But if you read the comic,
but I understand the flaws.
Hyped for the movies, they were quite disappointing, unfortunately. So that was a bummer for me because that's one of those ones, mate, where I was certain I was going to love it. I went on the day it came out. I was there, 10 in the morning with the popcorn. what? And then everyone else was fine at the end. And I was just like, oh, what the fuck? Because the other thing I know, sadly, is you're probably never going to do that again. Like, that's probably the one chance that gets to be made as a film. And it's just done now. So I think it was a missed opportunity.
Series as well.
They just made it where it was like a moving comic book, basically. It was a part static, but it would move a little bit. And it was like, it was halfway between the two, but it also didn't work that well, unfortunately.
Fair.
By the way, if you're actually going to do a movie like that, in my opinion, go the whole way and adapt whatever you want. Get a visionary director. That's why Terry Gilliam would have been great. And tell him, look, mate, parts of this is unfilmable. So you do something with it. Do your shit. Make it Terry Gilliam's watching. You know what I mean?
Like Sin City was quite cool at that with the visuals, right? Just having like complete black and white with the red splashes. Just do something like that, because you can't dumb it down. You need to do you need to make it just so stylized in a way that it makes it more palatable, because it's just not going to transfer off a comic book sheet.
Okay, here's a weird one, because I actually have no idea if you're into this shit. Tallahassee Riot Supervisor says, have either of you been in the loop of the delusion that is the conformity gate theory regarding Stranger Things? Do you know anything about this?
Is this the ending where it's not real and it's actually just
Essentially, it's still ongoing. The notion is, because episode 8 was incredibly unsatisfying and quite frankly appeared to even seem like no joke, different people wrote it. Like, it just misses a load of things that were even said before that don't have. Essentially, it was a conspiracy that it's actually, by the way, here's what's sad. It's a genius idea. It's just that thus far it has proven not to be the case. The idea would be that, like, the main bad guy, Vecna, has essentially won, but it's because this is actually the second to last episode, and what you're going to find in the last episode is because they do a super happy ending. It's why it's called Conformity Gate, where everyone does like every cliche out of an 80s movie, and at the end the notion would be there's a secret 9th episode that when it's released, or the other angle is there's a documentary, they already did one of those, but another one where it'll be like a new nightmare, and it'll be like half real, half thing, and it'll be a clever way to meta play upon it. The problem thus far is people had the date of the 7th of January, it didn't happen, then they had the 12th of January, that didn't happen. So thus far it's not going to happen. So people's assumption is it was a delusion, and it was essentially fans wishing for more, but from people who weren't capable of giving it. So, do you have any thought? Are we a fan of Stranger Things? Do you have a thought on this?
I was at some point, and then honestly, it just started dragging, and all of the action was Elle going like this, and someone flying, and I just checked out after a while. Like, the 80s nostalgia wore off eventually for me. And like, look, I love D&D. I've got a bunch of D&D stuff over there. I've got, I'm well into my tabletop games on my nerd ship, which date back to the 80s or whatever. It kind of lost me at a while. I did see the stage show, though, which gave a lot of the background, and I was quite annoyed to hear that they just kind of didn't...
No, that's in the film, basically.
Yeah, which is a shame, because it's all really quite important to it.
Yeah.
I can't think of many franchises, especially ones of that level, which have ever stuck to their guns on doing a real twist ending like that. I can think of some ones which are smaller scale. So one of my favorite horror movies ever, and I'm a big horror movie fan, is The Descent. And the ending of The Descent is really, really good. Well, okay, I mean, whatever. I guess it'd be spoilers to that anyway. But basically, that is, the first half of that movie is girls going on like a caving trip to kind of, because it's just something that they always wanted to do. It's in like memoriam of one of the girls, like their husband died in like a car accident or whatever.
It's essentially set up at the beginning like it's not a horror film. Like it's almost just gonna be like a journey of people. Yeah,
exactly. And like getting over, grieving and blah blah blah. And then things go really, really wrong. And in the second half of the movie, there are like cannibals and shit in a subterranean lair because they've gone caving in a place which is unmapped, which is again like that's how everything goes wrong. And the ending of it is basically the final girl makes it out, she makes it to safety, and then the camera pulls back and she is like dissociating.
It is pretty baller, I have to say.
It is one of the best
normally I hate
ever.
that it's a dream, but that's one of the few ones that was good, mate. That was actually a banger.
And that's why I'm like, how many movies have actually done that?
Yes.
How many have done it well? The Descent is the one where I'm like, okay, that one nailed it. I remember it to this day. That is one of my favorite horror movies because it made the twist really well. Now, funnily enough, I prefer the first half of that movie. I actually think the caving stuff they do is way more scary than just random cannibals and shit. But the ending of that movie is an instant classic. You need to be very certain you are doing this and to set it up in the right way. The only other thing I can think of which even got close to this was, actually, funny I've mentioned the series earlier, but Mass Effect. Mass Effect 3's ending was really poorly received on release, but there was a theory called the indoctrination theory, which is effectively the great enemy of Mass Effect are the Reapers. They have a way to cyclically manipulate people and effectively turn them into mindless husks. And there were some things pointing to the fact that actually the main character could have been indoctrinated, and then still there were enough things which were obscured that maybe you were actually just doing the will of the Reapers all this time to after a certain point. But unfortunately, the creators, they had no reason to do this, but they came up and clarified, no, it wasn't happening, even though it was a really cool theory. That one didn't require any extra content, though. It was a fun theory. It was a lot of research done into it, and it was somewhat validated. The thing about this one is that they actually have to release another episode. So until that happens, it's, where's the evidence? Does it actually add anything to it? It doesn't save the fact that, again, the ending was kind of shit. So I don't really buy into it unless doing something at that scale with a series that scale, it'd be baller if they did. I doubt they will, and they would have. I don't know when they'd release something like that now.
Yeah, the problem I have with this topic is I actually have followed a lot of that stuff. I'm not even a huge Stranger Things fan. I actually think that the first season was really good, but it was also nothing like the other seasons. The first season was all about like fucking Winona Ryder's character and like the fact of like they also intentionally did that classic thing where you keep it mysterious. You never get to know what the upside down is and what the demagogue is. It's just some cool, weird shit. And it was all for the 80s aesthetic. The problem is the story goes, people said, I think originally the show was going to be an anthology and that would be like one story. Then there'd be a different story. The problem is it's one of those ones where it was a victim of its own success. And eventually people just want the same characters. And as you said, it became ridiculously repetitive where what they literally did, he's not exaggerating, by the way, in every season, they go through a bunch of like power downs and there's all she does is just go like with telekinesis and win every time. Even though at this point, the telekinesis just does everything, bro. Like it opens holes, it kills people, it lifts up. It's just not. It's actually really poorly done.
I'd understand that for a low budget show, but this is like one of the highest budget ones in a long.
No, that's also the other sad thing. The actual writing of the show was very fucking mid. Like even when they would do cool things, like the character Vector was an interesting angle. Although I will say it's not really as cool as that like massive shadowy mind flare thing. That was way more Lovecraftian, wasn't it? The problem with the Vector character is though, once they hit the high points, they just kept going with that character and they ruined it completely in that season. They made him like a total bitch and he just had like and here's the real problem with their show, Nymaera. There's two ways it could end, and as far as I can tell, it looks like neither will. One is there isn't extra content, but it's like that. The real trick is at the end he did win and they were all in a delusion. That's cool enough. That would even not be totally implausible to how the story ended.
I would respect them for doing that.
But you just wait a few years till you tell anyone, you pretend you did a bad job. The few years later, you go, well, actually, if you look at a few clues, maybe someone else would in there. That would be cool. The problem is, the reason why this isn't as delusional, I think, as people actually imagine, is if there really is no extra episode, this means fucking random fans on the internet are actually better writers than these people who had a $400 million franchise. Like, as far as I can tell, here's the joke that people who made Stranger Things don't seem to get. They also seem to act like, silly people online just can't get over how the show ended. Bro, you were so bad at writing. If there isn't an extra episode and it isn't that it secretly was Vector winning, you are just some of the worst writers of the end of a show ever. Like, this was almost one of the worst endings I could imagine, especially because, as pointed out by a lot of people, it wasn't even like, it's not even that I just don't like the ending. The ending just doesn't make sense in light of the rest of the show. It like violates a lot of the concepts.
And it feels like because they did some interviews just after it ended saying, oh, well, you just have to decide this for yourselves, or this happened off screen. Half the stories now happen off screen.
Yeah, by the way, there's another thing that's mental. They had scenes which are absurd, bro. Like, as in, you would think someone who'd never watched the show wrote them. So I'll give you an example. When they do a scene with the four older characters, Robin and Steve, and all when they have a scene where the Robin character says to like the other ones, like, I'm just gonna miss you guys and us. Like, by the way, that group had never hung out ever in the show. Two of them, I think, had never even interacted on camera. So that's again, I'm supposed to now believe that off camera you had a whole friendship that you're now gonna, well, how can I miss that? I never fucking saw it. That wasn't even in the bloody stage play. Also, by the way, in that stage play, they reveal that Jace, Grayson Hopper or whatever knew the Henry guy in school. I don't think that even makes sense, by the way, in terms of the chronology. I don't think that would make sense for his age. But that is never addressed in the show.
Yeah, but like the stage, the stage show was still actually very good. I enjoyed that. It was like...
But the idea in the show, you even meet them and you never mention that. Like, that is
apparently, again, they realized that off stage because they didn't want to not include anyone who saw the stage show. Well, then why did you make a story critical stage show if you didn't want to include people?
And lastly, here's the biggest bomber about this theory. It's actually, from the fan side, it's pretty creative. Yeah. Like I say, this actually would have been an amazing... If that really was a thing, that there was a secret episode and it was a rug pull and we all thought it ended shit, but actually it was awesome. Because, by the way, they kept referencing how bad the Game of Thrones ending was themselves. If there actually was a secret one, it would be one... It wouldn't redeem the whole season, but it would be pretty fucking cool. That would be a nice cultural moment.
I would have thought it'd be pretty baller if Game of Thrones just ended with the White Walkers winning as well. Just
Yeah.
like if you're gonna, I don't know. I feel like they had a real milk toast.
By the way, I also don't
nothing
even think
happened.
there's another thing I hate. Actually, this ties into what you said earlier about 11 just winning by doing that all the time. Bro, one of the best things about the early seasons is, yeah, you escape a bit, but people get traumatized and psychically raped and fucking terrorized and you're always on your own and then you're in the upside down. Actually, one thing about that type of terror, because that is the kind of Lovecraftian terror it's a really effective ending to end with people being mad and in delusions and not winning the day. They just did it like the most ridiculous 80s movie of like, you die, the good guys win, and we all lived happily ever. That's whack, bro. It's 2026 now, but whatever, come on. Anyway.
Anything else?
Let me see. All right, here's a good one. This is just a fucking ridiculous one for me. I don't know why this question's even... Whatever. Ink Person says, Thorin, you are told that Froggen is now back in his prime. How dare you even tease me with that idea when I'd already gotten over that? I'd already put him to rest. I understand. Anyway, he's back in his prime, and you are his agent, and ignoring all language barriers, you can put him in any team in the world. What team are you putting him in? Well, I feel like the obvious angle, if there's no language barriers, has to be just Chovy's team, because if there's anyone who knows how Chovy plays, it is Froggen. We just win lane, we fucking farm, we win by farming without any solo kills, then eventually we move around the map, do a little bit of side laning, into a team fight, bish bash posh, Bob's your uncle, we win worlds, and we're outie. And also, if you know Froggen's career, he had some dreadful luck with certain positions, ADC, sometimes top lane. Bruh, give Froggen fucking Keen and whatever, in this case, Ruler. I think he could probably do out pretty well. I think you could get some of those trophies he gave up for all that NA money, that dirty NA money.
I'm trying to think if there's like an outside angle anywhere. Because, I mean, the thing is...
We could also do a Western team. Is there someone else you put it in?
Well, the thing is that if you put him into Genji, obviously that, even if it's prime Froggen, you're still probably downgrading.
Sure.
Like, I think you could argue, well, which team would do really well with a control tower in mid lane and actually do... Like, for instance, I think the way that JDG played at Demacia Cup, I mean, Honky was fine to good, but I think Froggen would be better at being a control tower, scaling into late game team fights. Froggen Gala backline carries. That seems pretty legit to me. Xiaoxi top lane. I mean, maybe in a different world, you put him on top esports, so you've got 369, like the Peel God in team fights. Jackalove Froggen as like slower scaling carries. I think realistically, the best one for him would be Genji. It's the best fit. It's just what team would he make better at the top level? Yeah, I think maybe like JDG or top esports. Well, this version of top esports has a bit of a missing like jungle support, but maybe JDG, maybe.
Also, there's another question for me that I'll just read out. Like, this is a bit indulgent because I don't actually know how. I guess we'll try in the Twitch chat or something. I don't know how I'm going to link to the video clip he sent, but this guy, I'll put it in the Twitch chat there, sent an Instagram clip and he said, hey, Thoris Breaketh, said, is this the same accent Vince has? Now, if you don't know, Vince is a commentator from Newcastle. And if you listen to this clip, this is why Americans and Europeans need to fuck off Nymaera, because the guy in this clip clearly has a stereotypical Welsh accent. If you don't know, Wales is in the southwest of the UK. Then Newcastle is in the northeast of England. So unfortunately, it isn't even vaguely in the same ballpark. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find two accents more different, mates. What you have identified is he doesn't have a London/received English accent. So to you, they're all the same. It's why I actually, do you know what? I'm not meaning this way. If an American says to me, where in Scotland and Ireland are you from? I don't go, stupid bloody American. I go, fair enough. It is a different enough accent from the south. You, you're trying to actually be kind and think it could be a different country or something. It's just in this case you are wrong. So no, unfortunately it isn't. Okay. Have you ever seen the film National Treasure, by the way, Nymaera?
Oh, the the
Nicolas Cage one.
Nicolas Cage one, yeah.
Right, here's a question. Milkman22 says, since it may not be covered on Foreplay for a long time yet, what are your thoughts on National Treasure? And then he also put, this applies to both of us, he says, as a British person, how do the American history elements play for you? Since I'm an American and I was taught the American perspective on all that stuff in school, I was sure it was a different movie experience for me than for a British person. What do you think of that film? Do you enjoy it?
I mean, I enjoyed it, but I watched this ages ago now. Like, it hasn't.
It came out in like 20 plus years ago. I think it was like 2004.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fun, and it kind of like plays into that. I suppose Assassin's Creed also kind of played around with this too, with like just the murkiness of history, stuff like the Da Vinci Code as well. where there's just enough random conspiracy to lean into it and make something creative. And that was fun. And Nick Cage played a fun character in it. I enjoyed it. I thought that the mystery felt all right. There were some quite funny moments in terms of, like, even if you're not American, stuff like saying, like, oh, I'm going to put, like, lemon water on the Declaration of Independence or whatever to try and reveal this hidden message or whatever. You can tell immediately, like, okay, yeah, that's important. I don't need to be American to see how sacrilegious that is, but it's good for the movie. I can't speak to its quality because, again, I probably watched this like 20 years ago. I probably I probably would have been like 10 or 12 when I watched it. It's a long time ago. I remember it being fun. I remember Nicolas Cage being very, very memorable in it. I have fond memories of it. Can't speak to quality.
But I do think it is a fun romp, as they say about films like that, where it's just, by the way, it's just perfect popcorn cinema where you just
like
watch it.
Up there with The Mummy, I guess.
You don't have to watch. Yeah, it's a good example as well. Because actually, the reason why a lot of people didn't vibe with that film is they took it too seriously. The Mummy's supposed to have a ridiculous element of it. Like, I like that guy who's like the weird Arabic guy that's with them. The one who was, you know, the one where when the mummy comes, he has like the cross and then the thing and then that character's fucking it out. It's comic relief. Yeah, once you know it's not totally serious, you can just enjoy the sort of roller coaster of these movies.
It felt like a spiritual successor to Indiana Jones kind of thing.
Sure.
Where it's like these I feel like we've lost a lot of our charm for adventure movies. There aren't that many kind of, as you're saying, some things just take it a bit too seriously. I mean, there was the Uncharted movie, which just didn't really land very well for me or whatever. And I feel like it didn't take itself too seriously. It has very memorable moments, and it has that just adventure charm to it, which I think we've lost a bit nowadays. Also,
if people have watched Foreplay, I am a fan of Nicolas Cage, and I even enjoy the silly roles. This is one of those ones where he's doing a silly role, but he just has fun with it. It's a great angle. And also, I agree with you. I actually just enjoy also alt history movies where the idea is we're going to take a crazy alternative angle and we're going to discover some like bizarre secret. I know what he means about the British American thing. Look, it doesn't hit me super hard that like, oh my God, he's got the Constitution of the US. Yeah, that's not some holy document to me, bro. Like, I guess that'd have to be like the Crown Jewels or fucking Excalibur of King Arthur or something. It doesn't really vibe, but maybe as an American that was cooler for you. But I don't dislike it. I thought it was a fun. By the way, that even the sequel's decent. That's a series you could just keep making, mate. You just as long as Nicolas Cage wants to do it, you just keep making those movies. It's a low bar, but you can clear it.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like, again, like I said, it's in that kind of same kind of vein of like Assassin's Creed, where you just have enough murky area of history to do something interesting with it. Whatever.
Right, this question is one of those ones where it's just a bit too big. We can't do the whole thing, so we'll do a smaller version. He says, Fedit says, if you were to make a top 20 all-time list of LOL players, regardless of position, how many mid laners would make the top 20? So again, we're not going to do that. That would take a long time. But then he asks so I would say just ballpark that. And then the other one, this is the more interesting question. He says, can you conceive of a non-mid laner ever becoming the GOAT? I think that's the more interesting question.
Well, in the current state of affairs, I mean, the closest to get there was either Deft or Ruler, right? I presume. I don't think they're close. I think maybe, there were some AD carries, but I just don't think on current form any of them are getting close enough. No one's been at the top for long enough, being the best player in the world for long enough. It could happen, but you need to see like 5 years of someone being at the top of their role. Being a GOAT, just anyone surpassing Faker is, really hard in the first place. But the only person who's close to that are like, someone like Chovy if he racks up a ton of Worlds titles or something like that. You could have said someone like Xiaohu, but then obviously, again, he's a mid laner and he'd need to rack up some titles as well. Hasn't got his Worlds title there too. It would have had to be Deft or Ruler, and Ruler's had a couple of stinker Worlds now. He's had some MSIs, some great domestic success. Deft's obviously in military service. Both of them would just have to come back and just rack up some Worlds. It could happen, I suppose, with them, but it would take a couple of years.
The problem is, in my opinion, I have a bias when it comes to all-time great lists in team games, which is, I'm sorry, I do think there's positions that can't be the GOAT. So in League of Legends, I don't think a jungler or a support can ever be the GOAT player. I mean, I actually think...
could be?
That's the point. I think Keria proves it can't be the case because here's the problem. Keria can affect the meta and do insane things. He can even individually outplay, but the problem is he also needs a great AD carry. He needs someone to direct the team. Yeah. It's not going to be the shot caller and you know what I mean? So same thing with junglers. Unfortunately, you are somewhat victimized by who you are playing with in a way that mid laners don't have. So my problem is, I do think you've nailed it. It has to be an ADC or a top lane if we're doing this. The problem is, ADC had the candidates, like you say. Ruler and Deft have fabulous careers. The problem is, if you're doing a GOAT list, it does matter if you get trophies. So Deft didn't get as many trophies as he needed. He probably needed a couple of worlds himself. And he also wasn't actually as good when he did win worlds. That's a problem. Then also, if you're someone like Ruler, I actually think Ruler's probably the closest thing to it. He has been a fabulous player for many years, lots of teammates. His problem, obviously, is he's had his own little choke moments at worlds that have fucked his career up. He had
this worlds was bad.
I don't think people realise, everyone bangs on Knight and Trophy. Bro, Ruler has had a lot of teams that could have won worlds that didn't.
He was bad in that JDG 23. The JDG 23 semis was really bad from him. Like, he was randomly clicking on barred portals and just, like, putting himself out of position. You know, you would expect so much better for him being lauded as perhaps the best player in the world coming into Worlds 23. This last Worlds, really bad. Actually, he had some moments again where he just wasn't doing enough, dashing forward and dying. Like, there was that one against KT. He had that Corky fight in mid lane where they threw game 1, where he just walks up at 0 HP and dies to Yone. Like, okay, dude, you just wouldn't do that regionally. What's happening? So yeah, there's been a couple of clutch moments like that which take away from him. Is there a world where if Guma goes on a tear, could he make it? Because the problem is he's had all his success with so many other players on his team that it's harder to give him out and out the props for those worlds.
His problem is, mate, he has the trophies where he could get there, but I don't think, no one's ever called him the best ADC in the world for a year or a player of the year. So I don't think he'd have
a tournament, but not a year.
The respect of being the best player, I don't think he'd get it. That's the problem. That's why someone like Deft Ruler at least has a chance. There was years they looked unbelievable. Here's what's sad. Since he says, could I conceive? In telling you this, I will also tell you all the tragedy of this player. If there is one player, I think, who didn't play mid lane, who could have been the GOAT in League of Legends, it is the Shy. Because I actually do think he might be the most talented player to ever play League of Legends, bro. Like, I think at his peak, he was, like, absolutely supernaturally good at League of Legends. Like, there was times where the ones that I'll never be able to get out of my head, bro, were the drafts where he was playing, like, weak side Vladimir top, and he would, at the beginning of the laning phase, constantly all in and kill everyone. Like, he was just doing shit that was like, if you go back to like 2018, 2019, 2020 time period, his peak was so fucking unbelievable. The problem with him, and this is everything about the Shy, is notice how I just did the Shy giveth, or the Shy taketh away like a motherfucker, as every rookie fan knows. The problem he had was this: part of the genius of being able to reach heights no one knew were possible was the depth that this motherfucker plumbed. I've always said, there is no all-time great player has had more ints and dog shit games than this guy. Like, it's sometimes in the same series, as in the same series, he'll give you an insane Aurelia game, and then he'll give you the worst Sion game ever. You know what I mean? Like, this guy, unfortunately, he was also the most irresponsible superstar player I've ever seen, sadly. But I think talent-wise, he was actually unbelievable.
Yeah. I think it would have the only ones which are close on the shortlist really are a couple of AD carries. I mean, and the problem is, even someone like Guma, he doesn't actually have weirdly, he doesn't have the domestic success. He'd need to do that now. He'd need to get just like a couple of blowout years. I mean,
it's why I always tell people the only two players I think are chasing Faker are Knight and Chovy, bro. Like, they're the only ones that have the pedigree, the long term. They need titles, but that's all they need at this point in time.
Maybe if one player led a team into like the impossible golden road, maybe that would open things. But even then, that's just 1 year. The problem, you have to contest on peak level of play and longevity and a bunch of other things, like surviving different meta changes. If you had like a 2 golden roads back to back, there you go. That'd be GOAT, probably.
I'll do one last question, and as usual, some of the past ones I'll cycle through in another week. This one's a short one. So the dog says, what song would you have replace Shitty Silver Scrapes if you were in charge? So basically, what would your Game 5 song be, Nymaera? You can be as indulgent as you want on this one, mate. What would you pick?
Oh, Game 5. I need some time to think about that. Oh, let me open my playlist. What have I got on there? That's really
remember,
hard.
In theory, I'll give you some criteria to narrow it down. I'm also, like him, not a fan of Silver Scrapes, by the way. But I would say you're going to have to pick a song, mate, that you can listen to a lot of times because it's going to get really old. So it's got to be something that still maintains a bit of,
Well, there is.
You can handle re-listening.
I just have to pick something off like the Meteora album by Linkin Park. I do that already then. God, it has to be something with a sense of scale and energy, though, is the thing. It has to be like absolutely huge. And it can't be grating. That's the problem. It can't be grating. Well, I suppose I suppose it is Silver Scrapes, but it can't be too grating, right? That is a really hard question. I think too much about music to give just a one-off answer to this. This is really difficult. I actually don't know because I don't know. This is really hard. This is actually the hardest question someone's asked me on the show.
Like what I would pick is one of those like classic early 2000s, late 90s era trance tracks. Because in
Right.
my opinion, another feature that you want for this track is, if you don't know, that was the era where all the trance tracks were like super euphoric and they were all like melodies that took you to the fucking heaven, because the idea was if you were on ecstasy, you'd make an incredible experience. Like the reason why you want that is because you want it to be super epic. You want it to be like, holy fuck, it's game five. So I would pick like some shit, I don't know, Binary Finery 1999, that's a classic track, Guriella, any of the really old school shit. I'd do something like that. Also, by the way, these songs purposely, I'd pick one without lyrics. I think the lyrics are going to grate on you over time.
That is a very good point. Picking something with, you have to pick something instrumental. I think, that's actually a really good call. And I don't have enough instrumentals off the top of my head. No, you need something that can be played in a stadium as well. So immediately, like, there's a couple of instrumental tracks on Metallica's Orchestra album S&M, which are really, really boss music vibes. So there's like Call of the Cthulhu by Metallica has some that is really, but it's not anthemic. Then it's not anthemic. Yeah, I think you're right. It has to be something like electronic anthemic. Weirdly, most of the time with big stuff, I prefer kind of going for like the rock energy, and I think typically world songs are better as rock songs. But I think actually in this case, you might be onto something with something a bit more electronic, with instrumental, and it's anthemic enough, which is obviously quite a slim subset of songs comparative to many.
Okay, that'll be it for this week then. We'll just leave that one open-ended. By the way, we did a good job actually still outlining what it could be and what the components would be. Obviously, answers on a postcard or in the comments. What do you think the song should be for Silver Scrapes instead? We will be back next week. Hopefully, well, I do know what's to them, because spoiler, 3 of the major leagues will already have gotten under this.
We'll have games.
We will actually be able to talk about the game League of Legends, not just meta things and weird things with teams shut down. So see you next week on Something Insight.